Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of What If Naruto Was in Justice League. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. In Naruto's new home. RRRRRIIIIINNNNGGGGGG. RRRRRIIIIINNNNGGGGGG. RRRRRR crack. Naruto yawned and looked to see the now crushed alarm clock on his bedroom drawer and shook his head. Apparently his reflexes made him smash his clock hard, again. Even though he spent money of buying customized reinforced clocks, his strength usually broke them. The now ruined mass of metal and components was the fourth watch this month. Maybe I ought to start investing in clocks made from steel, that'll stop this bad habit. The blonde got himself out of bed and looked at the calendar nearby and saw that now was the time for him to go and meet up with Carolyn. His boss had been asking for him to show up at the office to get his latest paycheck, get a new order list from her. And also she wanted him to hear some news that she felt was for his ears alone. He wondered just what his older female boss wanted from him this early, since it was technically still 3:30 in the bloody morning. The office usually opened at 8. But Carolyn had asked, rather demanded, that he come to the office to get his paycheck today and also report in for some news that she felt was important enough for his eyes only before he reported for work today. His job in Winter's Publishing was to write his stories to be published and provide some input to the rest of the working staff, since he was a part-time worker and not full-time like the others. He did not hang there in the building for too long, as he worked there for at least a few hours. As he got himself out of bed, he also moved to the bathroom and decided to take a good shower. Once he was done with bathing, he moved to dry himself up and get some breakfast into his stomach first. He took out some still cold but fresh and well-preserved tuna and some rice, got the rice cooked, and then got to making some instant ramen. He wished he could go and get some takeout ramen, but he decided against it, since the ramen bar he usually went to only opened at the morning, and he knew that now was not the best time since they were rather sleepy after serving customers for hours until 9 in the evening. He soon went to the tuna, took out his knife and channeled his wind chakra into it and began to cut up the fish into well-portioned slices for the rice. He also took out a carton of fresh milk and poured himself at least a glass full and cracked open a bottle of fruit juice, namely orange, and poured in another glass worth of the drink. Once he got the rice done, he had 2 of his cage bunch and roll them into rice balls by hand and have them place the balls down and began to eat it with the newly sliced tuna as well as the now fully finished ramen. He took gulps of the cold milk and orange juice and enjoyed his food for all it was worth, and since he spent some good money on getting good food, he made sure to buy only the best. It took him at least 30 minutes to polish off his food, and with that done, he decided to get refreshed up for the meeting. One thing he learned from his married life was to always look good and at least smell nice, and that was the reason why he took a good amount of time in his bath and after breakfast brushed his teeth as well as try that mouthwash stuff. This stuff had a fairly interesting bite in his tongue and mouth, but he did not mind, and once that was out of the way, he got to dressing up. He put on his frog boxers as before, and then grabbed a black shirt with stripes of orange in them. There were 3 stripes were on the shirt, 2 on the shoulders going down to the front, and the 4 strips on the sides of his stomach from front to back. He liked the shirt, and since it fit his MO well enough, he took it months before. The fact that his boss did not mind it and his colleague in the publishing house did not rattle him about it made him happy. He then placed on his black pants with 2 orange lines on the sides going down from his hip to his legs. He then wore a pair of comfortable cotton black socks and a pair of black shoes with orange flame patterns. To complete the whole set were a pair of fingerless gloves, and he then styled his hair a bit to not take the usual spiky look. With that out of the way, he then colored his hair in the same shade of red as before and used a bit of henge to hide his whisker marks. He looked himself over and smiled at himself. He might not be in high fashion in some areas, but this was LA, and thus there were different views on fashion here. As soon as he was done, he got his kitchen cleaned up and got his SUV keys. He decided to scan the area with his sage mode, and once he was sure that his place was only surrounded by the usual plant and animal life, he got out of his house and got into the vehicle given to him by Batman. Later, approaching the Wayne Tech warehouse, Naruto drove the SUV and listening to the music of one of his favorite Japanese music artists. There might not be a lot of guys who listen to the stuff here in the US unless they spoke the same language, but he was one of those who bought them. And since his world's language was definitely similar to the Japanese language, he had no problem enjoying the music himself. The disguised shinobi moved through the highway and decided to keep to the required speed limit, so the last thing he wanted was to get the attention of the LAPD this early in the morning. The police were not a problem to him, but he was on the side of the good guys, and these guys were the good guys. He did keep in mind that on occasion he ran into corrupt cops and officials in his time in being the Hokage of the city of LA, so not everyone in the LAPD were good guys. It took him some time to finally arrive in the warehouse. He got the special access card and slid it into the card reader, and soon the warehouse opened up and in he drove. Once he got inside, he parked his SUV and locked it down. He then took out a scroll and placed the keys on the open scroll. He placed it in storage and kept the scroll in his own backpack that was also strapped twice to him by invisible chakra strings to make sure that thugs did not try to rip away his pack. Along with the keys to his vehicle, he also had his gear ready for use if he had to don them and go to work as the Hokage. He then got out of the warehouse and soon headed deeper into the city. He checked his watch and saw that he had time. He headed for a nearby car park, snuck in, and as soon as he was on top of the highest part of the car park, used his chakra chain to begin moving quickly over the city. It was risky for him to do so since he did not have his disguise, but he made sure to stick only to the shadows, and when news or police helicopters were near, he quickly got down to the ground in the shadows and walked the rest of the way. The blonde then decided to drop by a nearby deli since he knew that apart from Carolyn, there was another person who was willing to be there in the building this early in the morning. And the guy certainly needed the grub since it was going to be a while before he was going to be relieved by the afternoon shift guard. Winter's publishing building. The blonde soon made his way to his working place and he was eager to meet up with Carolyn, and once he got his check, he could hang out with his boss for a while before he left. As he only worked part-time, he was not needed to stay the usual 8 hours like most people, and while Carol and the others in the building at times asked him what he did, he knew that they were not going to pry into his life too much. He had just taken a bus from the deli shop and head to the place where his workplace was and decided to walk there. The building was very tall, not too tall, but it was a good place to work in and well kept as well. So far the parking area was devoid of cars, with the exception of his boss's car. Naruto yawned again as he quickly took out his pass key and opened the door with Franklin Morris, the security guard, greeting him inside. The man with dark brown hair with streaks of silver hair was a former soldier who got hit in the thigh by a stray round in battle and had the bone in his thigh splintered by the bullet that tore through his leg. The only reason he still had his leg was due to the fact that several of his buddies managed to get to him and save his life and get him to field hospital, and the surgeon there saved his leg as well as his life. Had they delayed any longer, he would have bled to death. He had been taken back stateside to heal, and when he was out, he had been given an honorable discharge from the military and a pension. The pain from his wound still bothered him and he had no other option but to work as security for a number of years. The pain was pretty bad and he was thankful that he did not have too many cases to deal with. But the bosses Frank worked with before finally let him go, but not before he had to deal with being stuck in dead-end assignments. It was hard to find new work after that years later, and he felt that he was not going to get far until he got hired by Carolyn and managed to get enough money to have a second round of surgery to finally ease the pain with the help of a chiropractor. Hey there, Sage, you're pretty early. Yeah, boss wanted to see me about something. Franklin nodded and allowed the blonde in. Truth be told, the old man liked Sage. The name sounded a bit off, but he did not mind. The guy was definitely different from the regular guys his age since he usually spent time chatting him and brining him good quality coffee and food. Not the cafeteria crap he got back in the office, but actual good quality grub. And the coffee was special brew since it certainly did not taste like instant coffee, plus he had some pretty good stories to boot and he certainly was good when it counted. So, you planning on working on some of them new books you got cooking up? Yep, and also to see what's the latest word from our respective boss lady on how the books are doing and also get my pay for the half of the month. She already here by any chance? You got it, man. She's been here an hour already working on the reports plus looking over on the new scripts and storyboards coming in from the other writers. I don't know how she manages to handle being in that office as long as she does, but at least it's only once in a month, not every damn day. But Carol's a good boss and she pays well, not like those cheapskates I used to work with. Naruto nodded at that and took out a package. You ate already, Frank? Nah, managed to get me a half-eaten bagel and some cold juice from the fridge back home when I left for this early morning shift. Didn't have any time to get me a proper breakfast when I got here, and it's only been at least 30 minutes. Naruto nodded and gave the man the package. Inside was several sandwiches. One was filled with lettuce, roast beef, cheese, mustard and ketchup. Another had chicken with lettuce, ketchup. Another had ham with cabbage, cheese, and ketchup. Next to the sandwiches were a pair of apples, and a small container of vegetable salad. The blonde then got out a container that was used for temporary drink storage with a spoon in a sealed container taped to it and gave it to the grinning guard as he smiled. Here, managed to make a stop at that favorite deli of yours, ordered the usual and made sure to have them make you a good stock of chicken soup with herbs. Figured that the food there will be what you need it for the rest of the day shift. The man laughed and smiled warmly. That's why I like you, Sage, you know how to treat people good. Still, I really wish you didn't do it too many times. Not that I'm not grateful or anything, but I feel like I'm taking advantage of you, and that's just wrong. Naruto shook his head and replied. No worries, Frank. I respect you, and besides I only do this when you get the early day shift and at least that's once a month. Both men laughed and the blonde moved back into the building and he headed to Carolyn's office. Carolyn usually did this once a month, and that was because she wanted to make sure that she had all the files and reports the house had been taken care of, so they did not have to worry about it at the end of the month. As he walked through the building to head to her office at the 5th floor of the building, he recalled just how he had run into the 30-old woman who was currently his boss. It had been on one of the times he had started writing stories and had made his very first script, and since it was adult material, he decided to head out and find a publisher. He had planned to go and get himself a paper to find a publisher and had been disguised to do so. Along the way, he had an encounter with Carolyn Winters, who was dealing with a band of obvious thugs. The copper-haired woman was definitely very attractive, but instead of panicking when she was surrounded, she quickly talked back at the lewd comments and even showed that she had taken self-defense classes. She even managed to force a man to lose his knife. But he came in when one of the men was about to take out what appeared to be another knife and the other took out a gun. He quickly took the offensive and grabbed a small bit of metal, charged it up with chakra and threw it like a shuriken. The weapon buried itself deeply into the man's hand and he quickly moved in and attacked the remaining thugs. He had beaten them up just as Carolyn smashed the face of her last attacker into her car, and the two looked at one another. She smiled at him, and the disguised blonde soon learned that she ran a publishing house that her family founded. He decided to ask if she did not mind taking in his work and allow him to work part-time for her company. Carolyn was curious about that, and they soon headed to her office in this building, and when they got there, he gave her some of the Ika scripts. Needless to say, due to his youthful looks, Carolyn was a bit surprised and intrigued by the work and asked him if he was actually knowledgeable of what he wrote. He recalled just what he had said then, and it had surprised Carolyn a great deal before he realized his slip of the tongue. Instead of being annoyed by his words or anything, Carolyn decided to give him an ultimatum. If he could prove that he could actually do what he had written in the story, she would consider publishing it. If he could not back up the content of his story, then she was going to turn it down. He had used a tiny amount of Kurama's chakra to find out if she was kidding, but he was surprised to learn that she was not kidding. He asked her once more if she was serious. She replied that since she was not planning to marry, and was not against the idea as long as there was consensual agreement between them to leave it at that, then she was all right with it. Needless to say, his experiences with his wives back in his world came in very handy, and Carolyn was very impressed and decided to publish his work and accept him as a part-time employee. Carolyn was not a soft woman as he began to work with her and her staff, however. She was strict, serious when it came to her work, stern and demanding. She was not above removing an employee who was not performing well and causing trouble. And she was not going to be easily swayed by anyone until she was shown that they had done their quota of work the way they were supposed to. She was a slave driver when she was angry and determined for them to meet a deadline, but she was not a full-blown tyrant. To her employees who had legitimate reasons for not performing well, she was kind and respectful to them as long as they were telling her the truth of things. To those who were sick, she gave them their pay and gave them sick leave. To those who had to resign for legitimate and serious reasons, she made sure that they were well compensated, and had the appropriate support if it was warranted. All in all, she was tough and serious, but fair and respectable as long as everyone knew where they stood. He was a bit different with her due to their rather unique working relationship. But she was just as stern and strict with him when she gave him a deadline, and more than once she had given him quite an earful for being tardy and later without proper reasons. As he got to her office, he knocked on the door and soon he heard the woman speak in response to his actions. "Come in." Naruto opened the door and he smiled a bit as he saw the woman who was his boss, as she was busy looking over piles of papers. She wore a long-sleeved light white blouse with a red vest. Her long copper hair, which was very straight, was currently in a bun with a bolt of light cream white cloth to tie her hair to a ponytail. She looked up and smiled a bit as she saw him. Naruto could not help smirk at the way that she was smiling at him, and she spoke to him not long after. Once she placed down the papers and he was done locking the door to her office, even if they were the only people here, there was no reason to not take some precautions. "Nice to see that you managed to arrive early, Sage. I was beginning to wonder just when you were finally going to get here. Sorry about that, Carol, but I needed to get some food and supplies for Frank." "I take it that Frank was happy." "Very much so. I made sure to include all his favorites." "That's good to know. Frank's a good man, but now that you're here, we can talk about your newest paperwork. Plus you might want to see just how much your book series had been earning, despite the fact that your little disappearance had left some backlog books for you to fill up again." Naruto sat down in front of Carol as she gave him a folder that contained the reports, and when he got a look at it, he whistled a bit. They were earning well, and while the books did not become bestsellers, the readers certainly enjoyed the material that he was able to make for their enjoyment and pleasure. The disguised blonde liked that fact that he had good readers and fans, and they were not limited to the LA populace. There were readers in Central City, Metropolis, and even Gotham. He could not help but wonder if the readers included a certain speedster, a super-powered alien, and a certain brooding dark knight. That made him laugh, and that made Carol look at him with a raised eyebrow as she was busy looking at her own stack of reports. "What's so funny?" Hey, just thinking a bit on how the men and women this report find the books, I sure as hell hope no kids read this accidentally. The copper-haired publisher smirked at that and agreed with her part-time employee and so far, one of her company's more interesting writers. That's one thing I can agree on, and so far, we have gotten good comments, though you can bet we have people who complain. You can't please everyone. You got that right. Now then, about your payment for the month, Sage. Oh, I hope my lack of writing time has not been a bad blow. Carol grinned a bit and took out a large envelope and showed it to Naruto, who recognized it as his pay for the month. Even though he was only part-time, the success of the Ika Ika book series had been enough to convince Carol to pay him a full-time employee's salary. For which he was thankful, and so was she, as he did good work when he was given due compensation. Here's the pay, but I think you need to earn it. And how, pray tell, am I supposed to do that, boss? Naruto watched as Carol got off the chair, and she was wearing white stockings and a white skirt that was able to go a bit below the knees. The woman smiled at the way Naruto looked at her and then placed the envelope into a box to keep it aside and sat down on the nearby couch and replied in a very amused but authoritative fashion. I think you can figure it out. Naruto sighed in amusement and went to join Carol, and as soon as he sat down, the blonde kissed her on the cheek and she smirked as she kissed him right back on the lips. Originally there was supposed to be a short lemon section here, but since the administrators in the site are now in the process of purging lemon stories from the site, I removed it. I understand the reasoning of the administrators in their move, though I personally still feel that using the MA rating system is better. Ah well, might as well make the most of the situation. Carolyn was pleased as she gave the disguised blonde a deep kiss, and as they parted, she moved to the pile of clothes there which was hers. She placed them on the nearby table and soon moved to take out the envelope from the box and gave it to Naruto as she wore her panties. The blonde felt the thickness of the envelope and looked inside to see crisp and fresh dollar bills, all amounting to a full $10,000 in hundreds. It was his half-month pay and he would get the rest at the end of the month. Naruto smiled at his boss, who he had more than physical and professional relationship with. Cash on hand as before, boss. You really don't mind handing me liquid cash at all, do you? The woman moved her hair aside while placing on her bra and she replied. After the kind of work you do, and your way of making it up to me for the times you've been missing, I think giving you that kind of payment is enough. Besides, I happen to like you a lot, Sage. Just not enough to tie the knot with, right? Carol sighed a bit in amusement and nodded. Yeah, though if this keeps up, I might change my mind. You might look like a teen, but you certainly don't act like it. And you certainly know how to make a woman think a bit more about the idea of committing to a more serious relationship. You don't happen to have a condition that stunts your growth by any chance, Sage? Naruto thought it over and shook his head. Nope, not that I know of. I am a healthy and sound young man, though we both know that after all. Carol smirked and got on her skirt, heels, blouse, and vest as she soon sat down and spoke again to him as Naruto also got back to wearing all of his clothes. By the way, I managed to send your friend Masashi's manga designs and storyboard to a company in Japan a few months back. One of the producers in the company was a friend of mine when I went to Japan to handle some book-selling contracts, so I asked him to show to his fellows. That also included the first chapters you and him made as well. And they happened to like it a lot. That got Naruto's attention a good deal. He had seen some of the anime shows before and he admired the way they were made. Really? Just how much are we talking about here, boss? They liked it enough to make an animated series out of it. Really? Carol nodded in agreement. Really, they liked the concept you and Masashi cooked up so much that they decided to make a series out of it. And from what I have been told, they had begun to make the first few episodes plus a pilot episode for the show. They also took the time to contact some very interesting people to contribute to the series itself. Here's a list of said people for you and Masashi to look at. Naruto took the list from Carol, who was now back to looking every bit the stern but fair lady boss, not the seductive and sassy woman he had just been intimate with an hour and a half ago. He looked at the list and he could not help but raise his eyebrow and spoke to the copper-haired woman who was his publisher and boss, as well as some time friend with benefit. The list was nothing bad, just rather surprising to him since it was a list of band names that he knew of rather well. The list of Japanese bands and artists included Hound Dog, Asian Kung Fu Generation, Little by Little, Flow, Sanbamasuda, Stance Punks, Shunokaru, Hearts Grow, Akabashi, Rhythm, Orange Range, Reiko, Masumazearu, Tia, Kayapuden Sudaratum, SP, No Regret Life, Anorogu Fishu, Amadori, Chaba, Suka Bando, Sabaton, Yuki Isoya, Tube, Maria, Nobody Knows Plus, Long Shot Party, Akamono Gakari, Joe Inoue, Hatamoto Hira, Nico Touches the Walls, 7, Toshka, The Cro-Magnons, Homemade Kazoku, Aluto, Question, Masahiko Kondo. Surface, Halkali, Dev Parade, Azu, Kishiden, Supercell Super Beaver, Domino, Okamoto, Total Fat, Hemingway Unlimits, DJ Ozma, Nishino Kana, Kamiji Yusuke, Puffy Ani Yumi, and Sima. All of whom played good music in Naruto's mind since he started downloading their songs into his laptop when he heard of the island of Japan. He had yet to go there himself but decided that with things as they were, that kind of trip can wait. Carol, these are the names of my favorite bands and artists from Japan, and I even have their CDs in my collections, why are you giving me this? The woman smiled a bit as she adjusted her business vest and replied as she took up a cup of hot coffee that her coffee maker had just made and she had poured down into her cup. The bands and artists were contacted by the studio and looked at some copies of your friend's work and they loved it. They wanted to contribute songs to the opening and ending sequences of the episodes, and even if the studio made movies of the series, they wanted to send you a list of their names and the songs they have in mind. Since you already have their albums in your collection, I think you can pick the best songs from the albums. The address to the studio is there too. If your friend approves of the music choices, then you guys can talk it over with the studio via internet and that should get things started. Naruto grinned and placed down the list. Since he had their CDs already, he would have no problem picking the right music for the anime series. If the pervy sage ever found out that his beloved student and godchild had made his book a hit in reality, he had no doubt the perverted old man was going to be smiling down on him. If he wasn't already smiling at the fact that he had made a fortune with the new version of his perverted stories. The blonde looked at his boss and smiled warmly at her as she sat down on her office, looking all the way a businesswoman would look as he moved forward to kiss her on the cheek once more. Thanks a bunch, Carolyn. Me and Masashi owe you big time. The copper-haired woman smiled a bit at that and replied. As long as you keep your promise to me and write good stories for the series you and I started, I will consider your debts to me paid, sage. Anyway, I hope that you can get your work done since we've got a lot of mail, most of whom come from people who like your work. Any negative mail? Carolyn shrugged as she handed him a folder of said mail. Oh, the usual as in the report, but not that many here in LA, they love the stuff you cook up after all. You want to take their letters? Nah, I don't need to read those. If they don't like my work, then that's their right to say so and I'll leave it at that. I'm old enough to know that answering letters from people who hate your work is not going to work. Now if they had some proper advice, then I will listen. Carol sighed as she looked at the watch and saw that it was going to be 6 soon and she looked at Naruto. It's about time to get the office officially open, sage. You have any other concerns before you take to your other activities? Nah, I'm all good, though I would like some of that good brew ya got there, boss. Carol nodded and gave him a mug for him to drink coffee. Once that was done, Naruto drank his coffee and enjoyed it while chatting a bit more with Carol before he finished his drink and joined the others who were now coming in. He was not going to be in office for very long as he had other matters to deal with, all of which had to deal with him doing an early run through the city as the Hokage. Later. Naruto was currently moving through the city in his Hokage gear and was making his way with both his chakra chains and his Hiroshin to cover ground. Once he had done his rounds in the building, he soon got out and headed off to get ready for his rounds in the city before he called it a day and headed back home. He was not yet feeling up to a night patrol but would do so at a later date. The city was definitely different even though he had been here for a while now and he enjoyed the way it looked. The buildings definitely were different from those back home, even making those in Kumo look primitive, and the people were just as diverse. He looked at one particular direction and could not help but smirk a lot more as he knew that location well enough. The adult movie section of Los Angeles, he had no doubt that place would have equated to heaven for his perverted sensei Kakashi and his godfather Jiraiya. And would have given Tsunade more than enough excuse to pound his godfather into the dirt. That naturally meant he too would be given a thorough trashing by the others if they ever saw him looking in that direction for any reason. Ah, pervy sage would have loved that. The blonde's attention however changed as he moved over more buildings and spotted as he got to the lower floors a car running away like crazy. The sight of police cars also convinced him that there was definitely trouble and he quickly decided to give chase on the vehicle. He turned to spot a police helicopter nearby and no doubt he was already spotted. For now however, he was not going to interfere unless it was really bad. And so far the police were doing all right, even managing to punch the tires. That is until the driver turned the screeching ANF spark-spewing car around when actually opened up with a shotgun on the cops, and it seemed that he was not alone as 3 more came out with guns blazing. That caught the cops off guard and Naruto knew that now was the time to get involved. The police car behind stopped as the police got out to fight back, but the blonde saw one of the cops take a hit in the leg and was bleeding on the street. He rushed in and appeared to the man who was crying out in pain. Ah, shit. First day on the job and I get shot. Hang on, man. Wait. The Hokage. Naruto did not respond to that as he quickly got out a kunai and cut the man's pants to get a better look at the wound. It was deep and the single hole told him that it was a pistol round. He had managed to familiarize himself with guns early on and knew that he had to move. He looked at the man through his ceramic mask and spoke in English. Hang on, I'll get the bullet out and heal your wound. How the hell do you plan to do that? The cop got his answer as Naruto got out one of his painkiller pills and told him to take it now. The cop wanted to argue, but with shots ringing out, he did not have much choice. He took the pill and the medicine worked quickly and soon the pain from his wound dulled. Naruto then took his kunai and cut the wound a bit more as two more police cars came in with backup. The other cops saw him and thought he was harming their fellow cop and were about to respond, but the cop's partner shouted, "Let him do it, we got other matters over here." Naruto was grateful and soon he got the bullet out. He soon recalled his medical jutsu training and summoned his chakra. The police nearby were surprised to see the Hokage's hands glow green and they watched as their partner's wound was actually closing up before their eyes. The cop Naruto was treating was just as stunned as they were as his wound was literally healing and sealing itself up right before his own eyes. Once that was done, Naruto nodded and spoke to the man. "There you go, wounds healed up. How? I'm a ninja, so I'm not telling my secrets, just going to say that not all of us are assassins." The cops went back to dealing with the armed thugs and soon two, including the shotgun-wielding driver, was out of it and dead. Another was wounded and apparently passed out, but the other one managed to get away. Naruto quickly pursued the last one and was followed by the cops and the police helicopter. They soon spotted the man grab a young girl from her mother who was screaming at the man for taking her little girl. "Let her go. Shut up." The girl screamed and the man turned to face Naruto and the cops as the lead police officer shouted, "Let the girl go. Screw you, pig. Let me leave, or this little brat gets it." Naruto did not like the implications as the terrified girl was trying to remain brave. The mother was crying and pleading for the release of her daughter. The sight tore at the Hokage and he was enraged that this thug was willing to use a child who by all rights was an innocent. He quickly decided to cut loose and he used his jutsu. The thug was surprised to suddenly find not his hostage, but the Hokage, and he saw with even greater surprise that the child was now where the masked and armored ninja freak had stood only moments before. He was not the only one as the police and the mother were also shocked at the sudden switcheroo. He did not have time to react as Naruto quickly knocked the gun away from him and he quickly took out a Senbon from a hidden area of his armor and charged it up with his chakra and turned it into lightning chakra to work like a stun gun. He did develop the skill to use lightning chakra techniques, but since it was not his elemental affinity, he had less control over it than most. That was why he had to watch the amount of energy he dumped in or else he might kill the guy outright. The attack worked as the man screamed as he was stabbed in the leg by the sharp needle and he began to shake as the lightning chakra hit him hard and sent him to the floor writhing in shock. Naruto quickly moved away and took the gun from him as the man was still out of it from the effect of Naruto's attack as it was like being hit by a taser. "Get him." The police got to the man and quickly cuffed him as Naruto looked to see the little girl run to her mother in tears. "Mama. Karen." The two hugged one another and he smiled underneath his mask as he looked to see that the cops had secured the last thug as he dropped the weapon. He then used the Shushin Jutsu and left as the cops and the reunited mother-daughter pair saw him leave with a swirl of leaves as the only mark of his passing as well as some smoke. All of which was recorded by the police helicopter that was overhead. He soon appeared at least 2 blocks away and Naruto turned around to leave and see what else he could be dealing with later. The blonde hoped that the little girl was going to be alright and she would recover from the ordeal. She was a civilian and had no place in a situation like that and that was why it bothered him a lot more than he let on. But he laced those thoughts aside for now and soon moved on, using his kunai wire and chakra chains to move through the high-rise buildings along with the Hiroshin kunai that he carried with him. It was not going to be long before he spotted another problem to deal with. This time it was a much bigger concern as he moved towards what appeared to be a construction site. The crane nearby was carrying a heavy load of materials, all metal beams, and it was swaying very unnaturally. And right below were a large group of people. As soon as he got there, his fears became reality when the sound of snapping metal was heard and he quickly responded as he used his favorite jutsu. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He and his Kage Bunshin quickly arrived as the metal came crashing down towards the people below and all of them were soon unleashing their kunai wire which was chakra reinforced along with the original Naruto summoning his chakra chains to catch the metal bars in a lattice of chakra reinforced wire and chains. The people below, construction workers turned and gasped as they saw the Hokage and his Kage Bunshin as Naruto spoke to them in English. "Guys, clear away, I can't hold those things forever." They did just that and Naruto soon began to lower the metal bars down as best he could and managed to get them close enough to land safely though he was strained by the sheer weight of all that metal. Once the clanging was gone, the blonde removed his army of Kage Bunshin and once more left the area, much to the surprise of the people he had rescued and the people who had seen the whole affair. Lunchtime. Naruto smiled as he was now a few blocks away from the area where he helped the construction crew avoid becoming a massive bloody mess on the ground and swung using his kunai wire. He soon reached a high-rise building while running on the walls with the tree-walking jutsu from before. As soon as he got up there, he surveyed the rest of the city and decided to use his senjutsu to look over and see if there was anything left for him to take care of. As soon as he entered Sage mode he scanned all the chakra signatures he could sense. But as he did so, He picked a very faint trace of a very familiar chakra. He opened his eyes and gave a look of confusion. That can't be right. That chakra signature I felt faintly actually felt familiar. I take it we're going to have to check it out, huh? Exactly. It's not the chakra signature of Batman, Superman, Diana Haim, Hawkgirl, Old Sourpuss Green Lantern, Jean, or Flash. Once I get a bit closer I might get a much better idea on just who this person is. Naruto quickly moved as fast as he could and he was still in his sage mode to try and locate the chakra signature that he had sensed. He closed the distance with his Hirishin technique and soon he was able to get a lot closer and soon he was able to get a much greater idea of who it was. And as soon as he was close enough he soon recognized the signature and that actually made him stop and smirk a bit while still feeling surprise. Well now, this is totally unexpected. What is she doing here? Naruto quickly went back to tracking the now familiar signature and soon arrived at one of the high-rise buildings that he knew was housing some very interesting art and gallery treasures worth some very high levels of cash. It was just the sort of score that the person in question could not ignore even on a bad day. And as soon as he got to the roof, he felt the signature was very close as he turned off his sage mode and moved into the building through the opening he found. He could already see the work of the person who had that chakra signature. But he also noted that nothing had been stolen yet, which meant that she either cleared out early, or this was a trap. The answer on his mind on this being a trap came to him quickly when his danger senses kicked in as he stepped aside as a whip moved towards him and hit the ground. He soon felt the whip move back and he knew that another attack was coming and his danger senses alerted him as he then rolled out of the way of the second strike and quickly grabbed the whip and held fast as he spoke out to the wielder. All right, you got my attention so stop hiding Miss Catwoman or as I say, Selina-chan. Soon a familiar voice greeted him as said woman appeared in her outfit of all things. Catwoman or Selina Kyle was smiling a bit as she made her way to the man. This raid in a place in daylight was usually not something she favored doing since she was more of a night person. That made things a lot easier, but she wanted to get the Hokage's attention somehow so she decided to make her move in broad daylight, a risk to be sure. But then again, she thrived on risk a great deal. Not bad, I almost had the drop on you, almost being the operative word I guess. He shook his head at the sight of Selina Kyle as the disguised woman was smiling at him. The last thing he had expected was to run into the seductive cat burglar here in Los Angeles of all places. He however kept in mind that he had to find out just what she was doing here in his city so the blonde relaxed and he decided to humor her as he approached her. Not that I don't like the company or anything, but there is the question of what are you doing here in LA and in broad daylight of all things. You're not on the run from Batman are you? No I'm not. Why are you concerned anyway? The fact me and him happen to be on the same team now is a good enough clue Catwoman. The last thing I want is to have Batman grill me on why I seem to be friendly with you. So, what brought you here? Selina smiled and replied to that. Follow me and I'll tell you Hokage. The way she moved made Naruto look at her and whistle mentally to himself, as the daylight made her costume look a lot more interesting as well as allowing him to see every detail of her luscious form. And he was thankful that no one else was able to see this, considering the usual news helicopters were not flying about. He followed the woman as the two of them were now moving through the place at a faster pace. Apparently Selina had been training a lot more when they last met and it took a bit more effort for him to catch her. But it was not long before the two of them arrived at a higher-end residential area in the rich and famous section of LA. They soon moved to a high-rise apartment and soon they arrived at the penthouse area, and she landed there on the balcony. How they had managed to get here without alerting possibly half of LA still boggled his brain, but no doubt with things as they were, it was to be expected that people would be too busy at the time of the day to notice. Selina recoiled her whip and carried it on her shoulder and then took off her cat mask and opened the glass door but not before turning and speaking to him. You can relax. Before I went out to get your attention I made sure to hack into the computer systems to make it seem that I had not left the room. Now you can relax and let me get dressed. Why in the name of the Kami do you want to do that? From where I am looking, you look great in the leather getup anyway. Plus the smell of female sweat and leather is a real turn on too. Selina turned and replied in an amused fashion. You are a real flirt Hustine. Naruto merely gave her a foxy grin and she laughed as she went ahead to get change. It was here that Isis came out and meowed in Naruto's direction. The blonde smirked a bit as he placed his mask aside and the cat soon moved to him and settled in his lap. He still had to admit to himself that he found the fact that Isis liked him a bit odd. His time with that feline Tora did not give him a good impression towards cats, but he did make friends that massive tiger from the circus when he, Sakura, Rock Lee, and Kakashi were escorting Hikaru and his father back in his land all those years ago. That cat was way more dangerous than Tora but he got along with that one just fine. Isis meowed when he rubbed his hand on her back and he smirked even more as he spoke to the cat. You know Isis, compared to the cat Tora I had to find back when I was a kid, you are a saint compared to Tora. Why is that I wonder? The fact she might be sensing Matabi's energy chakra from you might help. You want to explain that one to me again, Kurama? Later, partner. Don't forget that while Isis is not the same as the cats you dealt with back home, she no doubt can sense animal auras, and since Matabi's chakra is now part of your own, Isis might be sensing faint amounts of it. Plus, with your chakra being all warmth, sunshine, and light, it's not surprising that it puts her at ease. The fact that you are on good terms with her owner might also have an effect on her. Speaking of which, here she comes now. Naruto looked and he whistled even more as he saw that Selena had decided to wear a simple but very classy long-sleeved royal blue silk shirt, black leather pants, and comfortable-looking high-heeled shoes. Her hair was the same as before and he could not help but enjoy the sight as he spoke to her once more. You look great, Selena-chan, so are you going to tell me what you are doing here? Selena smiled, and while she could lie to Naruto, she decided not to lie for the time being. She could do that at a later date anyway. I was being asked to help provide financial aid for a wildlife organization that was given the task to handle the travel arrangements of some rare white Bengal tiger cubs from a wildlife preserve from Asia to be shown to the public here in LA, then to Gotham before they get sent back. I decided to be there myself since I wanted to be there to make sure that everything went well, and if anyone wants to harm those cats, then I will be around. I might be on probation, but I am willing to risk it as long as those cubs are safe. Naruto knew that Selena cared for cats, but this was a real step up the ladder. The white Bengal tigers were fairly rare and therefore he had no doubt that there would be those who might take the animals and use them for whatever they wanted. And with Selena being a serious animal rights activist and her other persona as Catwoman, there was going to be trouble. However, that did beg the question on what was the reason for her breaking into the place earlier and yet not steal anything. Okay, considering your love for cats, I can see why you want to see to this sort of thing personally. That still does not answer the question on why you decided to come out into the open as Catwoman. You do have a reason for it since you were on probation after all, right? Oh, I did that to get your attention, Hokage, since I have a proposition. Naruto raised his eyebrow at that and replied calmly. What sort of proposition? Why, to help me make sure these cats remain safe while here in LA, of course, this is your city after all. And since you understand some of my more gray traits and you don't seem bothered by it, I figured asking for your help is a better idea than gunning it alone. LA does have a reputation, you know. Not as bad as Gotham's for sure, but still a rough and dangerous place. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that and thought it over. He did not see LA as his city, but he could guess why Selena said that. Just as Batman was the guardian of Gotham, and Superman was the guardian of Metropolis, he as the possibly termed hero of the city of LA would gain that rather odd title. He did not see it that way since he did not interfere if the police could handle things on their own and only helped if he saw that they were in way over their heads. To be asked by Selena to do this was something he did not expect, but he was still wary of Selena and he replied. Okay, if that is the reason you have, I'll consider helping you, but are you sure that this is the only reason you're here? I am going to have a lot on my hands if you decide to take up residence here in LA and start doing your act of being Catwoman, Selena-chan. I don't mind the company really, but if you start robbing the people here left and right, they might start wondering why you are here and why I am not dealing with you. Selena nodded with a smirk and replied. No worries there yet, Stein. I am still going back to Gotham. I happen to like it there and I'm not all that sure that I am going to move out. Batman and all the other things I have to deal with there are tolerable to me and also to Isis. Besides, if I want to move here and start over, you will be the very first to know. Naruto groaned mentally at that and ignored the amused laugh made by his silent partner Kurama. But he did admit that maybe if that did happen, Batman would have less to deal with and he was going to deal with the slack of Selena's antics. And he did recall that he enjoyed needling Selena and also flirting with her when they were able to meet one another, namely during that time in Gotham. I take it you are going to try and flirt with me while trying to avoid being caught. Great. If the news people catch you and me running over the buildings and flirting at the same time while I am trying to stop you from robbing people, it's really going to make things interesting. Plus it will definitely spice things up around here in LA if the people find out that Catwoman decided to take up residence here. Not that I mind really, but remember Selena-chan, I don't plan to stop you if you rob the corrupt and the criminal of their ill-gotten wealth. It only becomes an issue if you start robbing people who work hard for their money and prizes. Selena laughed at that and nodded as she took out the slip of paper that had address of the cat's next showing area. All right, I'll make sure to keep things between us a secret. The cats will be moving to another area of LA later, so having you nearby will help. Can you be there at 9 in the morning at this address? Naruto looked at the slip of paper and nodded. I can make it. The question in my mind is if you are going to have company apart from me. I can bet that since the police no doubt know of your other identity, they would have people watching you. Selena nodded at that as she replied that some Gotham police officers in plain clothes were there and the LAPD were going to loan some of their own plain-clothed officers to watch her. That and the route she had given him was enough to make him relax. After a while, he got up and left as he had to go back on patrol, but not before Selena asking him what exactly did he do with the pictures. The blonde shinobi casually replied to that with a teasing tone. What does any red-blooded young man do with such pictures, namely the ones with you in a swimsuit? It boggles the mind. Selena shook her head and frowned slightly. You really are a pervert at times. That coming from a lady who dresses up in tight leather that shows off a gorgeous figure, fights like a tigress, and seduces men to lower their guard so she could rob them blind. Kind of ironic you would call me a pervert when I can bet just about every guy who met you as Catwoman, good or otherwise loves to possibly ogle you in that getup and have who knows what sort of fantasies in the back of their heads. They'd have to be eunuchs or have an utterly unheard of fear and hatred of women not to get attracted and possibly have perverted fantasies about you in the garb Selena Chan. Don't worry though, the pictures are all safe with me and I have not once used them outside for my own personal viewing entertainment. Are you telling me the truth? I swear on my ninja way of life and code of honor, none of those pictures have left my side. Besides, why the heck would I tell anyone that I have them? In Naruto's new home. Naruto sighed as he drove his SUV back into his home and he was pleased to finally be home. He had skipped lunch since after finally agreeing to Selena's request for his help tomorrow, he had to help deal with another incident involving several gang members fighting one another while some innocent people were caught in the crossfire. The police managed to move in but the people caught there were pinned and police could not get to them. He helped them out with his jutsu to get the people out and help subdue the gangs alongside the police. He also used his healing jutsu again on some of the cops and the innocent bystanders. He soon decided to call it a day and headed away and got back safely to the Wayne Tech warehouse where his vehicle was being stored away. But not before he moved through several buildings and used henge to lose any potential pursuers on his tail. Once he got back, he reverted to his disguise and soon got out of his Hokage garb and got dressed in the same clothes he had worn before, which were still in mint condition though his Hokage uniform needed to be cleaned later. He checked his laptop and soon got the data he needed with his portable internet USB drive and locked it down while placing aside his pay into the scroll along with his Hokage gear. Once he did his rounds, he took out his keys and drove home, all the while not raising the attention of the police who were doing their job. One such task naturally involved keeping an eye out for him, or rather him when he was the Hokage. As soon as he got himself into his house, his senses warned him he was not alone. That was enough to make him grab a kunai and move slowly into his home, hoping to find out just who had managed to get into his house. As he got into the house and moved in silently, he got to the hall and readied himself, only to place down his weapon in surprise. Surprise. Naruto raised his eyebrows and smiled at the team he was now part of. There was Hawkgirl, Diana, Flash, Jean, Green Lantern, and Superman. The only one missing was Batman, but he did not mind. Judging from his foray into Gotham before, the guy was going to be busy keeping his home city from being taken over by gangs and whatnot. He smiled at the action though he could tell that both Diana and Hawkgirl were not too good with the situation. He directed his attention to Green Lantern, or GL as Flash called him, and replied. This is a surprise, I didn't think that you would be willing to hang out here with me. Green Lantern shrugged at that and replied. It was a slow day. Anyway, never been to LA. Naruto smirked a bit at that, but he was very happy that his team paid him a visit in his place as he relaxed a lot more now that he was assured that the people here were not the enemy. That did happen back home, but it had been some time now and he was naturally pleased that he was going to have company in his house. Diana was smiling a bit and gave him a package of fresh food. The food was fish, beef, chicken, vegetables and some types of bread. Sorry about the gift's appearance, Hokage, but considering what I saw in your old place, I figured getting you some fresh food would be better before the cooked food was brought in. Naruto grinned and replied with enthusiasm. In truth, he had not gotten the chance to buy supplies this morning, so having this package brought in was great. Plus he could use it to cook some food for later. Thanks, Diana Heim. I learned to never turn down a gift in good faith, and coming from a princess with the beauty to match is a plus. I hope to repay you in kind when you decide to find a place to stay in yourself. The Amazon smiled at that and nodded, though she did find the praise to her looks as interesting, for now she took the time to admire the oriental look of the house. Having lived in an island which relied on Greek architecture for a long time in all of its building, seeing the new construction methods was indeed an interesting experience. Her sister Kashia, who was a skilled stonemason and one of the sister tasked to building structures back home, would have been interested in this place. Superman smiled in amusement and took out a large basket. Inside was a collection of his adopted mother's cooking. He had told her and his adopted father that he had planned to visit a friend of his, and since it was his housewarming party, some food was in order. Naturally, Martha Kent pitched in, and here were the results, and he had no doubt that the others brought their own selection of food as they all headed to the dining area. Later, Naruto dug into the home-baked apple pie from Clark's basket and smiled warmly as he placed the spoon down as he spoke. Man, that was great. I have never had apple pie this good before. Your mother's an awesome cook, Superman. Clark laughed at that as he dug into his own serving of pie and replied. Yep, Mom always knew her way around the kitchen. You should see how she used to make turkey for Thanksgiving. Naruto smiled at the thought as he and the others were digging in as Naruto decided to play some simple music to help make the atmosphere better. He skipped playing any of his rock and Japanese music collection since he had no idea on the music tastes of his friends. So he settled on some slow jazz music that one of his coworkers gave him. I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, if you see her, tell her I am very grateful. The heroes with them were also enjoying the food, and as soon as they were done with the pie, Flash decided to give his contributions as well. Here, got these pizza from my favorite place in Central City. Don't know if you guys had pizza back there where you came from, Hokage, but this should be good. Naruto opened the box and the smell of pizza soon hit his senses and he took out a good-sized slice of it. He had not tried pizza yet since he was not all that familiar with them. But now that he took a bite, the taste was definitely interesting. Whoa, nice. I still like ramen, but this pizza is definitely new to me. Yep, you want some hot sauce with that? The second Naruto heard that he paled and shook his head. No, I'm good. Aw, come on, Hokage, it's not that bad. Naruto, however, shook his head and replied as calmly as he could, though he was sweating a bit, a first for the heroes since Naruto looked almost afraid of hot sauce. No thanks, Flash. I appreciate the offer, but after eating the curry of lifer back home, there's no way I am eating anything remotely spicy. That got the attention of the speedster, and he was not the only one as Diana spoke. What is this curry of life you speak of, Hokage? Naruto sighed and decided to explain some of his past and began to tell the lead heroes about the mission that got him working with his friend Rock Lee, or Bushy Brows as he called him, his future cousin-in-law Neji and Neji's future wife Tenten. This mission got him introduced to the curry of life and another pain in the neck when he was a kid, the former missed seven swordsman Raiga. Superman was aghast at what he and the others learned of this Raiga fellow. Sure, he had seen some crazy things in his day, and faced many alien foes, Darkseid being the most difficult to deal with. But that was not enough to make him immune to feeling disgusted by the actions of people who treated lives like toys. You mean this Raiga buried people alive? Yep, he thought he was doing them a public service or something, shows how off the rails he was. But he was no sap either, or a run-of-the-mill kind of loon. He was one of the missed seven swordsmen, and these guys are bad news in the ninja world back home. How so? They all are highly skilled warriors who wield some very powerful swords in the day. They also happen to be the elite arm of the Mizukage, though for reasons that still confuse the hell out of me, they usually end up being missing nin and terrorists, though only the youngest of them that I knew of in the past did not turn missing nin and became something of a friend of mine. They all have their teeth made to look like sharks, and the same could be said for Raiga. He commanded the sword pair Kiba and they could allow him to channel lightning. Channel lightning. Yep, I know this because that guy nearly fried me and light me up like a Christmas tree more than once. He tried to do the same to my partners, and even a glancing blow will nearly kill you. I got my introduction to this band when I was still fresh out of academy, since one of their rogue members, Momoichi Zabuza, or the Demon of the Mist, came to foul up my team's first mission. He described the deceased Jonin, ranked swordsman, to the others, and the league were listening intently, and John spoke next as he had to accept that the image of the Hokage at so young an age facing off against such a brutal fighter was hardly healthy. You actually faced this man in combat? Not too much, but the time that I did, I can say that he was nasty. That massive horse-cleaving sword of his was scary as hell when I was a kid. I could not figure out how he managed to carry that massive horse-cleaving sword of his, but there was no way I was going to find out. The other swordsman I crossed paths with before I met Raiga on that mission was Kisame, and that guy was really scary. He actually looked like a humanoid shark. Blue skin, shark-like eyes, gills on his neck and some on his face, and the teeth only added to the whole picture. Couple that with Samahata and you are really going to think that he's a real shark. Samahata. What is that? Naruto faced Hawkgirl and spoke calmly. Think of a sword wrapped up in bandages, but when you remove it, it's covered in massive shark scales that are all razor sharp, and it does not cut, it shreds. Plus it can take some serious punishment, and it even eats chakra. A glancing blow from that takes away a good amount of chakra, and that thing loves to eat it. Eat? What do you mean eat? It's a living sword, Hawkgirl-san. First time I saw Kisame, I tried to use my special chakra. That Kisame guy just swiped Samahata at me and it took my chakra, and it was actually moving around like a predator digesting a meal. Apparently it chooses its master if the chakra the guy or gal gives whets its appetite. Anyway, that's one thing, story for another time. You wanted to know just what this curry of life stuff is, right? As they nodded, Naruto began to tell them of how Lee told them of the place where he had been revived by the curry of life. And what happened to them when they and the clients finally tried the stuff, and the results afterwards. Flash burst out in laughter as Naruto recounted that time he had been with his friends and ate that curry of life, and the others even raised eyebrows at that. Superman commented on that incident when he finished the story when they were shown the new and improved curry of life. How could your friend manage to eat something that spicy? Naruto grinned at that and replied. Never really knew how old Bushy Brows could stomach that stuff, but I got to say I was terrified out of my wits when his face turned into a prune and he was so red I thought he was going to pass out. I mean, all I and everyone else saw on the table were plates of rice covered in thick, hot, boiling black stuff with lumps in it. Plus one heck of a smell that was both weirdly appetizing and scary to boot. When he began to eat like mad and also praise it, we tried it. Bad idea. I swear my entire body was on fire and my tongue felt like it was on the receiving end of a fire jutsu blast. How we managed to get ourselves to even stand up after our first taste was a gift from the kami. And when I got stuffed with a spoonful of the stuff by Tenten to wake me up after Raiga knocked me out, I swear I was literally breathing fire. And you should have seen the new version of that curry. It was the reddest curry I had ever seen in my life. I swore my eyes were burning just by looking at it, and there was no way I was eating that. We all had to drag bushy brows away from it as fast as we could before he tried it, and I was flatly refusing to not even mention it again. However, after some time, only the kami know why, I caved into Bushy Brow's suggestion to try it. We both went back to the restaurant and I ate it. Diana was wide-eyed at that and replied with concern. She did not have any fear, but the description of this curry of life was a bit disconcerting. You ate it. What happened to you? Naruto groaned and took a moment to compose himself and soon spoke. I obviously lived Diana Heim, but I had to be bedridden for at least 2 weeks and all my taste buds were scarred for a month. Even the tiniest drop of the weakest hot sauce felt like my tongue was going to turn into ash. That's why I swear off hot sauce on any dish no matter what anyone said. Even if I fully recovered, that incident scarred me for life. The league took it in, and after some more discussions and sharing of food and drink, they decided to take it slow. Apart from apple pie, Martha Kent had also prepared sourdough bread with butter and jam, roast beef, sweet corn, blackberry muffins, and also roasted turkey. Diana's other surprise was some Greek food that, while being vegetables, was actually pretty good. Green Lantern's own gift was some cold drinks and also some other food times he enjoyed to add to the party, and Flash's own supply of food helped. Jean soon tried some of John's gifts, that being Oreo cookies, and actually liked it. After a few more hours, it was finally going to be night time. The heroes cleaned up and soon all of the other league members left Naruto as he decided to pack away any of the leftover food and use it for the next day. So that way he could, to at the very least, cut down on the need to buy supplies. Night time. Naruto yawned a bit as he walked into the garden to check on his plants and make sure that they were watered. But as he got there, he was a bit amused to see the biggest rose he had ever seen suddenly come out from the ground. The thing soon opened up and there was none other than Pamela Isley, who was still dressed in her killer getup, and she seemed to be a more stable mood. The Hokage could not help but wonder just what she was doing here, and also heaped praises on the kami that none of the other league members were still in his house. He'd have a hell of a time explaining why he had a well-recorded villainess in his house of all things. And he did not even want to guess what Batman's reaction would be, which was why he made darn sure to keep this meeting to himself. All right, Ivy-chan, I have a question. How did you find me? The redhead smiled as she got off the rose and headed towards the blonde and replied. Oh, I have my ways. I did learn that you are here in LA, and after I decided to chat with the plants here, they directed me to this place. Remember, I can speak to plants after all, Hokage. Judging by how we met, I can understand that. Anyway, there's the question of why are you here? You can bet 10 to 1 Batman is going to be very curious where you disappeared to. And he's going to make my life hell if he found out you're hanging out with me. Pamela smiled a bit as she knew just what Naruto was driving at. After all, she had done a lot of things that did not make her the least bit friendly in the eyes of the Dark Knight. Oh, so maybe I could convince you to protect me from him, Pamela moved over and began to rub her more and well-formed and endowed body on the blonde shinobi, and Naruto had to admit that he was being tempted. Pamela apparently was trying to use her physical charms, and he could smell the pheromones that she was releasing to sway his mind. If he did not have Kurama in him, his years of experience, and his more than interesting married life, he would have had a hard time resisting Ivy's combined assault on his manhood. That did not mean he was not enjoying it though, but like most things, he had to pull the plug on this one before it got out of hand. Sorry, Ivy-chan, I really enjoy your company, but not to the point that I fight Batman for you. I happen to respect him, and with me and him being on the same team now, that can cause problems, which I do not need. Ivy frowned at that, and Naruto chuckled as he rubbed his hands on her cheek as he replied. Look, I'll plead your case for you if you like before him, but I doubt he'd listen since your track record is not too convincing. I will even protect you, but only if you haven't done anything that harms innocent people. You remember what we talked about when we met after all, right? If you do that, then you and I are enemies. If not, then I will not fight you and even help you as long as you don't kill indiscriminately. And don't forget, Ivy-chan, I am immune to your poisons and I am not easily swayed by your pheromones, though that does not mean I don't enjoy the attempt. Ivy smirked at that and nodded. All right, at least you say what you mean even if I see you're looking at my breasts. They are a nice pair after all, so can you blame me, Ivy-chan? And besides, unlike most if not all men, I can touch them without getting killed. Ivy blushed at that and Naruto was amused as he ushered her into his home and decided to see if he had some vegetables and food that Ivy liked. Ivy took in the place and had to admit that it actually felt nice to be in a house that seemed to be more at peace with nature. She might now show it, but she disliked being in a place where there was not much connection to nature. She only tolerated places like warehouses and factories so that she could make her move. Here, this place was a bit more comforting than most. She soon placed that aside as Naruto got some glasses and had cool water and fruit juice, as well as some good salad that was left over. Ivy decided not to do anything since she was still intrigued by the blonde shinobi and decided not to foul up this chance to figure out what made him tick. Naruto seemed to notice that and decided to play it cool with Ivy. After a few minutes of drinking and eating, Ivy decided to ask him something. Do you remember what we talked about back in Gotham? Yeah, I do, apart from other things. Ivy blushed a bit more but shook her head and replied as seriously as she could. I am dead serious here, Hokage. I am not entirely sold on it, but I need to know that you plan to follow through with what you said. You helped me for sure, but that was only once, so I'm not going to let just one instance of you helping tell me to trust you. I'm not going to suddenly change into a different person overnight after all. My life is not exactly the kind that had a happy period, and when I did have them, they never lasted long anyway. So I want to know if you plan to keep your promise. Naruto could tell that she was being serious about what she said and he had to tell her that he was also very serious about it. He placed down the glass and looked Pamela Isley right in the eye and gave her a very serious look before speaking with the authoritative tone he had developed in his time as Hokage back home. Ivy-chan, when I give my word to someone I keep it. I would not have made it to being who I am if I did otherwise, so you don't have to worry about it. If I say I am going to help you as long as you do not kill anyone unless you are defending yourself, then I will do it. I am a ninja and a ninja's word of honor to someone he helps is not going to be broken, Datbeo. Ivy looked at Naruto and could see that he was actually being very serious, and while not yet willing to change, she was beginning to feel that perhaps he was someone she could trust. The only other person who she trusted was Harley, who ran with the Joker, so that was saying something considering who Harley happened to follow and have an obsession with. How the woman who was very intelligent and capable of better things could stomach working with that nut of a clown boggled her. All right, you do sound serious, and from the looks on your face, you are serious, but what's with the word that came afterwards? Naruto gave a sheepish look and replied. Just a verbal tick I had for a long time, no need to concern yourself with it. And that promise of keeping my word also extends to my other offer, Ivy-chan. You want me to prove that to you again? I really hope that you will say yes, Ivy-chan, since what we did there after that factory was closed was only the tip of the rosebud, if that metaphor works for you. Ivy blushed once more as she recalled the very interesting time she had with the blonde shinobi when they dealt with the factory. She had actually dared him to prove that he was dead serious about the other side of his offer. The one that dealt with him helping her appreciate being a woman in a physical fashion. And boy did he deliver the goods when it counted. She had to admit that it had not been for the fact that they were in an area where no one in Gotham's poorest would go, they would have gotten quite the show. But the two of them never made it to that stage of the whole affair due to the fact that she still had doubts. Now, however, she was quite eager to see if he was going to follow through. If I agreed, what do you have in mind? Naruto smiled in a very foxy fashion and directed Ivy's attention to her mode of transportation. Oh, I don't know. The moon looks really nice tonight, the air smells clean and fresh, and the weather is nice if a bit chilly. And that is one big flower over there, bed-sized from the looks of it. Originally there was supposed to be a short but strong lemon scene here, but with the crackdown going on, I decided to cancel that. But let me describe the whole scene again. There's a large rose in Naruto's garden. Large and strong enough to serve as a bed, and it's safe, unlike that one that was in the films and series. It's the middle of the night, and Naruto is going to take things further with Ivy. Use your imagination for this one. That should not be too hard, just use my lemon stories as material. Pamela Isley lay back on the rose that she had been riding on as she was still trying to recover from what had just happened between her and Naruto. Her face was red, covered in sweat, as well as her body, which was stripped naked. Her heart was beating fast, and she was still recovering from the more than intense few hours to midnight. When she had been changed by the chemicals that gave her the powers she had today, she thought that the process would eventually make her more plant than human, and in turn she would eventually forget what being a woman with a man felt like. But after this night, this was something that she was not going to forget at all, or the way that the Hokage had made her enjoy it. She turned to see Naruto looking at her, also bare of his clothes and in the same boat as she was. But he smiled and gently touched her face from the side of her head to her lips, and she could not help but feel her body stir at the sight of him like this and recalling what they had done. And she had to admit that he looked delicious the way he was in the moonlight. I take it no one ever said to you that you look like a really radiant goddess like this in moonlight, huh, Ivy-chan? That made Pamela blush as she looked away a bit, much to Naruto's amusement as he spoke. And you look even more attractive when you blush like that. The woman looked back at him and spoke to him. How? Pardon. You look young, but what you did to me, there's no way that any young man could know how to do those things. How do you know how to do all of that? Why? Don't tell me you're disappointed with my performance, Ivy-chan, that hurts my manly pride, you know. I'm not complaining. Just wondering how you know those things. There's no way you learned all that overnight. Naruto gave a slightly sad look and answered her. He did not want to reveal everything right off the bat, but decided to give a vague but hopefully convincing reason. You know what I said to you before about me not being your average baseline human. This is one of the reasons. I am actually a lot older than I look. I might look like a teen or young adult, but in truth I am a lot older. And that gives you a certain level of time in learning things. You could say that I might end up being able to live for a very long time, just like you, Ivy-chan. That surprised her as she got up to her elbows and looked Naruto, who was deep in thought. Of all the things she had expected to be coming out after their very intense coupling, this was not one of them. You mean, you're the same as me? Not exactly. I did have children when I was married, more than once, which is a story for another time. But it's hard to accept that I outlasted them. Nothing hurts more than to know that the ones you love and know go off to the afterlife while you remain, along with you having to be the one to bury them. That silenced the woman as she began to take in the information that she had just gotten. She had a suspicion that there was more to it, but she said nothing of her thoughts as she looked at him. For a moment he did not look like a teen or a young man, but someone who was older, wiser, and had suffered more than most would have thought or suspected. Naruto, however, then replied with a smile. But they told me to live a good life and enjoy everything that comes, so here I am. I miss them to be sure, Ivy-chan, but I doubt they'd like it if I wasted away in grief and boredom. So don't worry about it, enjoy the moment for all it's worth. The two relaxed a bit more until it was time for her to leave. She still had to deal with her own concerns back in Gotham, and it was going to be a long trip. Still, as they both got dressed, Pamela took what she learned to heart and began to think about it all as she got on the rose again, and then as she was about to leave she spoke to Naruto. I'll think about your offer a bit more, all of it, and maybe, just maybe, I might take you up on it. But that is only if you are willing to help me. I will, but only if you do not endanger innocent lives or kill without considering other options, Ivy-chan. With that, the two of them parted as Ivy was back in the rose as it closed up and soon moved back into the ground. Naruto sighed as he finally went to sleep. He knew that he was going to need all the energy he was going to get. But so far, he was not going to complain. Tomorrow was going to sort itself out after all. But he had to admit that this was one day that he was going to have a hard time forgetting. He could only hope that no one else in the league, namely a certain Dark Knight, decided to get too nosy in his personal life. Of course, considering the life Batman lived, he was not going to hold his breath on that matter for too long. In Los Angeles, Naruto was currently wearing his full Hokage garb along with his mask as he moved over to keep any eye on the convoy that he knew that Selena was watching over. While he was not all that sold on the idea of LA being his city, he decided not to make much of the deal for now. So far no one had decided to drop by and make things difficult for him and Selena, but until the big predatory cats left the city, then he had to keep his word. Besides, as far as he could feel using senjutsu, there were not that many crimes that were happening all over the city that demanded his attention. The police was able to handle the worst of it, so he had little reason to come in and help them. The concern he had for now was to help Selena in keeping the cats safe until they left LA. As he moved along with the convoy, he also made sure to keep his eyes and ears open. He sensed that Selena was there in the group, and he was happy that at the very least she was not making any moves that would indicate to him that she was breaking her word to him. That was a nice thing, since the last thing he wanted was to get into a fight with a drop-dead gorgeous woman who he might or might not have the hots for. As he followed the convoy, he made sure to try and keep an eye on the police radio. He had spent some time learning all of this technology stuff, and he was pleased to find a way to hack into a security system, namely the kind used by the police. He used his Cage Bunshin to learn how to do the whole hacking thing properly, and now he could keep track of things. That and reading maps of the city certainly helped, and in his right ear was the radio he learned on how to build from parts he bought with his money. For now it seemed that the police had the city covered, so he did not have to worry all that much just yet. He also was pleased to know that the police had everything under their control, though he knew of course that there were places that were too dangerous where only the best cops were sent. He had not gone there directly yet, but he was ready to go there when he had to do so. As he watched the convoy, Kurama decided to speak to him. Looks like our cat-loving guest is keeping true to her word, huh, partner? Looks that way, and for that I am thankful. That convoy should be out of the city soon, and that is going to be nice for you and me. Maybe, but at the moment I have no doubt we're going to have company of our own soon enough. Naruto mentally nodded as he followed the convoy while keeping an ear open on the latest news coming in from the radio he had in his ear. The technology here was good, and in some ways, it was a lot better than some of the technology that he had seen back home. He sensed that there was no danger to the convoy right about now as he carried on with the convoy escorting job. All the while using his senjutsu to locate Selena and make sure that she was not making any moves that could be considered dangerous. The good news for him was that Selena Kyle was true to her word and kept herself from causing trouble, and so far, none of the police reported that she had gone rogue on him. And right now it seemed that no one was doing anything that would be considered an attack on the cats themselves. Hours later, Naruto was on top of a nearby tower and was currently enjoying a good deal of ramen that he bought from the very same ramen shop that he worked in before. He naturally used his henge as he was still in costume, and when he paid for his ramen, and here he was. The food was good and helped him relax as he looked over the city while sticking himself to the wall of the high-rise building with his chakra. Most people would have been scared out of their wits at seeing him like this, and eating ramen no less, but the height prevented him from being spotted easily. And with his use of chakra, he had no problems keeping himself on the side of the building sitting down. The cooler air up here was all right, but it was also a bit of a challenge not to spill any of the ramen for him. But he liked challenges, so there was no reason for him to change his mind. He sorely missed Hyuki and Ayame's cooking styles, but he did not mind it as he was able to enjoy eating ramen. Selena had met up with him earlier and she was happy that no one had tried to harm the tigers, and she was happy that he had kept his word to her. This was a good thing in Naruto's mind since she had not tried to rob anyone here in LA, since this would have been a bit of a problem. The blonde thief and animal activist kissed him on the lips before she left, and he knew that she did not rob him at all when she did that. And soon he moved out to go grab something to eat for all the time she spent watching the tigers, hence he was here eating. As soon as he was done eating, he collected the bowls and placed them away into a scroll to take them back to the shop and head back to duty. Moving down to the lowest level of the building he was on, he used his kunai with the metal string to begin moving to the shop. Leaping with the use of only the slightest of his chakra to the buildings further away and running on the walls without problems until he arrived at the ship. Like before, he dropped down into the shadows of the alleys, made sure that he was alone, used his henge and came back in the same disguise he used to purchase the ramen and give the bowls back before leaving. Once clear, he dropped his henge and climbed back to the buildings, moving about to sense the city's people and watching out for possible danger. After doing a sweep and being aided by his Kage Bunshin to scan the city, finding not too many dangers and events, he decided to tap into the communication system device handed to him by Batman in order to keep himself up to date on what else the other members of the League were doing. But as he did so to call Superman, he was quick to notice that the Kryptonian apparently was not alone. Yes. Superman, why do I hear explosions out in the background? Just what the heck is going on over there? Long story short, Hokage, several machines are here for John and they don't seem to want to talk. Naruto heard a clang and that was followed by the sound of something akin to someone punching metal. Knew that it meant that Superman high whatever it was attacking him. He had no idea what was going on but decided not to waste time in getting answers from the man via communications. Superman, you still have that kunai I gave you? Yeah. Good. Toss that kunai to the ground, I am on my way now. And sure enough, Naruto used the Hirasen jutsu of his father to home in on the kunai that he had given Superman, and he quickly found himself in what looked like a war zone. The blonde. Naruto dodged the incoming weapon's fire and looked at the flying man who was made out of metal before him. It acted like that Metallo guy he fought with before in Metropolis when he was still not part of the League. But unlike the metallic wiseass he fought with before, this one was about as talkative as Batman and was less concerned with the massive property damage that he was unleashing. He quickly took some of his shuriken and imbued them with his wind chakra and tossed the weapons at the one he was fighting. Apparently the machine being did not think that the weapons were effective and made no attempt to block them. That however was a mistake, as the chakra-enhanced weapons did hit with considerable force due to the potent energy Naruto used, and they also cut into the metal. The cuts were not by much, but they were enough to convince the machine-like being that he was not someone who could be ignored. He quickly took out one of his swords and quickly channeled his chakra and then focused his wind chakra into the blade and attacked, unleashing a blast of chakra at the machine. The machine being dodged the first attack, but Naruto expected that and had fired out one of his father Minato's signature tri-blade kunai and used the Hirasen to come in close, while in senjutsu mode, and landed a haymaker of a punch into the face of the machine. The blow sent it flying back a ways before Naruto would made several hand seals and unleashed his next jutsu. That move was done at the same time that the other members of the League were ready to fight back. But just as the attacking heroes and the newfound machine enemies, someone decided to get involved. And it was none other than Green Lantern John Stewart himself, but instead of helping fight the new arrivals who came for him, he actually stopped the others and surrendered himself to them. This confused the hell out of the others, even more so for Naruto. In the watch tower. As the rest of the League came to the tower, with him using a Hirasen jutsu to enter the place and them using the javelin to get up there, they decided that now was the right time to find out what was going on. However, It was here that Batman brought to their attention that they could not just pack up and leave Earth alone. If their rogues found out that they were not around, then there was going to be no telling just what was going to happen. Naruto thought about it greatly and wondered if he should go with the team to help free Lantern from him being accused of a crime he did not commit. But on the other hand, there was no telling what could happen if he went with them. The only ones who could not go were Wonder Woman, and obviously Batman, since that would leave Earth defenseless as well as leave Gotham alone. Kurama also spoke to him, and the nine-tailed fox sensed that John did have a great deal of guilt over something. Still, both he and Kurama doubted that the Green Lantern was a criminal. They did not know the Green Lantern Corps all that well, but if what they learned about them was true, the idea of them taking a criminal into their ranks was about as likely as Orochimaru turning over a new leaf and ending his love for power. The snake-summoning bastard was no longer alive, he and Kurama made damn sure of that, but the lessons he learned when it came to dealing with him was still there, along with getting rid of Madara and Obito. John struck Naruto as a good man at heart despite his stick-stuck-up-my-ass attitude. He was honest about his thoughts and there was no question about his sense of responsibility. And not to mention that as far as he sensed, he was also dedicated to protecting others, similar to a cop which he was in the galactic sense and being a marine as well. Still, the guy went willingly with the manhunters, so there must be something going on here that he was not seeing. But would he risk leaving Earth alone while all the heavy hitters of their team were out and off to another part of the galaxy? After a moment or two, he decided to stay behind. Sorry Superman, but with you guys leaving Earth behind, this leaves the League short-handed. We're going to have to find others who can help pick up the slack until you guys get back here after freeing Lantern. Plus, even if I don't have a rogues gallery, as you guys, I don't like the idea of leaving LA alone. It's got enough problems as it is, and the last thing it needs are some super-powered villains taking root while I wasn't looking. Superman nodded in agreement as he knew that they had to have some backup to help keep the world safe until they got back. If word got out that he left, then the villains he dealt with on a regular basis in Metropolis, especially Luthor, would not hesitate to make their move. Still, Kara and Irons were there to help, but they would need to be helped out in helping to keep the peace. But moving back and forth in different corners of the world would be tough on them, and the last thing he wanted was for Kara to wear herself down and become as stressed out as he was. There was also the fact that there was no telling what other dangers might appear, and even if Wonder Woman was here and Batman, they were still going to need help. So having Naruto back on Earth was a good idea, plus there could be others who they could contact in order to help keep Earth safe. Good point there, Hokage. We'll go ahead and see if we can't clear out John's name. I might not have dealt with the Lanterns long, but I know that they only got those who truly have what it takes to be members in the Corps. And soon, with the plans drawn out, the only members of the League left behind were none other than Batman, Wonder Woman, and Naruto as Batman turned to face them both. He knew that he had a lot of work to do, and that was not just in his city, but possibly elsewhere. He would call on Nightwing, Batgirl, and Robin to help out, as well as ask some of his other known hero associates for help to handle the workload. He then spoke directly to Naruto, and while he was now aware that Naruto was more mature than he actually looked, he spoke sternly. If anything happens that can have consequences for the Earth, contact us quickly. I will. In LA. It was near nighttime when Naruto got back to LA and he felt his injuries begin to heal. Normally he would have gone home, but he decided to go and do one last scan of the city. Namely, in the more affluent sector of the city he was unofficially protecting. However, as he summoned Kurama's chakra to sense the flow of the other humans in the area, he was quick to sense that something was amiss. Several chakra signatures suddenly disappeared and were now too weak to be sensed had it not been for his sage mode. He tracked it down and soon located the source, apparently in the financial district of LA. Something was going down. And no, it was not the legal kind. The very second he slid into the room in the high-rise building where the signatures had been faint earlier, he was greeted by something that he had not expected. Shuriken. The blonde shinobi ducked down as the shuriken came at him and tried to cut into his head. He leapt back afterwards as Sukiri attacked with her katana with the obvious intent on cutting off his head. Naruto, however, was not going to let that happen without a fight as he blocked the attack with his armored left arm. The armor he had on gave him the moment to grab his own sword and quickly forced the female fighter away from him as he lashed out with his sword in a reverse grip. Naruto only saw the sight of the stunned and badly hurt guards out of the corner of his eye to now realize that they were the chakra signatures he sensed earlier. Both fighters soon faced one another as Sukiri spoke once more to the blonde shinobi who was still holding his sword in a reverse grip. You fight like a real ninja. Naruto gave a snort at that statement. That's supposed to be compliment, lady. Who are you and why are you here? The name's Sukiri, and I am here for some of the items in that safe. Now step aside. The Asian assassin tossed a pair of kunai at him and Naruto quickly moved aside and ducked to land a rising kick into Sukiri's sternum to send her back flying as she flipped and landed on her feet. But as she landed she gave a barely audible grunt of pain at being hit by the blonde shinobi. That did not mean, however, that his blow had not given her a good deal of pain in reality. For a guy who looks like a teen or early adult, this guy can hit. But Sukiri was not the kind of quit when she was on a job, oh no she was not. Biting back the pain, she quickly got into her selection of weapons and threw out a number of kunai at the man. Sure, the steel used for those cost her some serious bundles of cash, but right now, short-term loss did not matter when long-term gain was more important. Said long-term gain was to naturally end the blonde ninja before he became a real problem. Naruto turned to see the kunai embed themselves on the nearby wall, and it was enough to tell him that her armor was good since the steel was well made and certainly not the cheap imitation stuff he'd seen. The blonde turned and blocked another set of shuriken and then moved away as she threw a kunai at him. Only for him to catch it the same way Kakashi had caught those shuriken all those years ago back when he was still the rough and tumble kid he was back in Konoha. He might not be able to do all the things his beloved sensei did in the time he was alive, but he did learn enough. The action he made did catch the female villain's eye and that convinced Naruto to pour it on. He was not going to use his jutsu yet since while he could feel that the woman had some good levels of chakra, he could also see that she was not able to do jutsu the way he could, so no sense for him to reveal his jutsu to Sukiri. That further convinced him that not many used chakra the way his people did even if they had it. He quickly got the shuriken tossed at him in hand and quickly fired them back at their former owner. Sukiri actually moved forward and then flipped over the shuriken and soon they traded sword blows with one another. Naruto moved back and forth, studying the way Sukiri moved, aware that she could very well be doing the very same thing he was doing right now. He could not help but wonder how she would stake up to Kunoichi, who were kenjutsu experts like Azuki Yugao and several others in the past. But he ignored that and soon charged at her. Sukiri soon flipped over her, thinking no doubt that he was getting careless. In reality she was the one who made the careless move. As soon as she landed, Naruto quickly yanked the near-invisible metal wire that he had actually laid on the ground earlier. The wire soon wrapped around Sukiri's leg and he was able to yank her to the ground, and he leapt over her and then over a nearby beam and used it to act as a support and lift the female ninja up into the air. I don't think that I will do what you asked. But I will ask what you are after in that safe earlier. I doubt that it's just money alone. Why should I tell you? Up to you, but if you don't, I'll just do this the hard way. The female ninja snorted and Naruto quickly decided to stun her by landing a lightning chakra-covered fist into her face. Not enough to kill her or anything, and the lightning chakra was set on a very low level, but the sight of him with a lightning-covered fist really caught the woman off guard before he sent her to La La Land. As soon as she was out of commission, Naruto checked her for breathing and a pulse. Once he was sure that she was actually out cold and not off to death's door, he decided to try using Kurama's chakra to connect to her own chakra network and right into her brain. It was similar to the technique used by the Yamanaka clan's signature jutsu, but did not match the same ability. He soon learned what he needed from the now unconscious woman, so he checked to make sure that she was still out cold. Once assured that she was out cold, he looked for some heavy-duty fire hose and a cable of metal. Even if he did disarm her of any weapons, better not to take chances and make sure she'd have to work for her freedom if she wanted to escape. Once she found some steel wire nearby, she tied her up with the fire hose first, and then used the metal cable to restrain her arms and legs. Then assured that she was not looking, he quickly used a fire jutsu to melt the ends of the steel cable he twisted into a lump of slag, double sure that she was not going to have an easy time escaping. Once he was done securing the female ninja, he moved to healing the guards of their injuries. He used his medical training to scan them and begin to treat their injuries. Most had concussions. The blonde shinobi quickly took out his cell phone and dialed 911 and called the cops. 2 days later. Naruto moved through Los Angeles 2 days later and he was hoping that he was going to get something of a break. Dealing with the bunch that hired Sukiri did not take too long, and at least he managed to bring them to prison without much trouble. Not to mention that he had been able to get all the records he needed to send this bunch down to the slammer. Though he did wonder just how much they gave Sukiri to come here in Los Angeles of all places, since this was a city that did not have too much to be attractive to the bad guys. The cops were surprised to find him handing them Sukiri, since technically villains of her caliber did not come here to LA all the time. That hopefully was not going to become some form of trend that he personally had no time for anything like it. As he did so, he wondered just how John's trial ended back there in space. He personally hoped that the man, despite being in his view, having a stick up his ass, was freed. He had heard from Diana that she had been able to stop some people who had attempted to rob a bank in the city of San Francisco, while Batman had enlisted the aid of his old team and had managed to deal with Killer Croc after the mutant super-villain managed to escape from them. The blonde winced at the memory of that crazed maniac who reminded a bit too much of Kisame with the bloodlusting nature he had. Good thing that he did not have something similar to Samahata, or that would have really freaked him out. He had gone there after the incident a day ago to help heal the injuries. Sure, Bruce was not too sold on it at first, since he was not too sure about what it might do to him and the others, but after he healed their wounds, he agreed that having Naruto help was all right. Though he could have sworn that Batgirl actually moaned a bit at his use of chakra to heal her. It was a half moan to be sure since she clamped her mouth shut before she completed it, but it was a moan. He wondered how the redhead was handling it since both Robin and Nightwing had been teasing her about it non-stop. He did find Batgirl attractive as hell but decided not to press the issue and merely wished her the best when he was done. However, all of his thoughts on the matter went out the window when he sensed something coming. He looked up from the wall of the building he was currently standing on to see what appeared to be a comet of sorts. He looked carefully at it and then stretched out with a bit of Kurama's chakra as well as his senjutsu and was shocked by what he felt. Damn, that is some serious chakra I am sensing. There's no way whatever it is that is coming down here is some hunk of space rock. No kidding. Whatever it is or whoever it is in that flying hunk of rock, has a good deal of chakra in him, so let's be careful. That's the first time you told me to be careful, Kurama. You rather be dead. Naruto shook his head at Had and quickly began to track the object, and he could sense that a lot of people were also looking. He did not need to look down where he was to see that everyone was looking at the incoming fiery mess. With that in mind, he quickly moved to where it was heading. Already from the special bug he had on the police communications network, the police were beating feet to that location, along with SWAT. He had to hurry there however as whoever or whatever had that big a chakra signature and could survive a trip through space like that was anything but human. And if the incoming thing or being was hostile, he was going to have to do his best to restrain it. As soon as he made it to where the fiery mess would land, it landed with explosive results as he set foot on the ground. The police were still a good distance away, which to him was a good thing since if the new arrival was like those Imperium, they were in trouble. Naruto used his chakra to hold himself into the ground and began to run through the shockwave while using his chakra to create a chakra envelope to protect him. The smoke was there and he moved in, but as he came closer, his Hone ninja sense suddenly began to go off and he quickly leapt back as a wall near to his left in the area was suddenly smashed hard. The chakra signature he sensed was now on the move, and also was now right in front of him. He tensed himself as the dust from the destroyed wall began to settle down to give him a better view on who the new arrival was. And he did not have to wait long, but he got quite the surprise when the dust cleared out. Naruto took a good look at the new arrival who had just smashed her way into the nearby city block, which thankfully was not filled with people since it was supposed to be demolished so no bystanders at large. And what he saw was definitely new to him. The figure was definitely humanoid and judging by frame, body build, and bust, was female. And damn, what a form. He was not joking in the slightest either. Sure, he had seen his fair share of very attractive women back home and here, his boss, Diana, Pamela, Selena, and Shara to name a few of said women. But this new arrival was definitely blessed with the body and the looks to go with it. Her eyes were deep green, literally, and they seemed to be glowing green fire, and her hair would be best described as fiery star red in color. Her skin was orange if one could believe it, and a very nice hue of orange to boot, and Naruto could not help but stare as the idea of someone having his favorite color as her skin tone was pretty darn new, even more so when one took to account her choice of outfit. It was purple and was more like clasps of clothing that covered on the essential bits but allowed the alien woman's lush curves, swells, and more to be shown. The muscles she had hardly detracted her beauty at all, instead showed her power and strength as well as her smoking gorgeous looks. She had thigh-high boots of the same purple color and had forearm guards as well with some gems on the neck area. Think of Starfire's original comics outfit. Sure, the new version might be a lot more appealing, but I can use the new one for later. One thing was for sure, if she wanted to get attention from men and women of that particular orientation, then she already had the edge in spades. It took a tremendous effort for him to focus on the more serious aspect of her arrival. The woman apparently was wearing some form of handcuffs that he could easily tell were not the human-made kind, but the kind that one normally used to restrain very powerful foes since it reached all the way to her elbows. But on the first glance, the woman hardly looked the kind to be dangerous, with the exception of being dangerously good-looking. However, Naruto was no fool and knew that just because a woman had the looks of an angel or a goddess, that did not mean that she was a good person, and that she was harmless. Naruto's caution was warranted when the woman looked at him with obviously angry eyes. She snarled at him and began speaking in a language that he could not make heads or tails of. But the very second she raised the restraints on her in a move that he knew was an attack, he understood that and quickly flipped back as she smacked the ground hard with enough force to cause a crater. Whoa, she's as strong as Superman or Tsunade Obasan. But whatever those things are made of, they at least make her less likely to move around. Naruto quickly got into combat mode and drew his sword from his back. That was a move to ready himself for any attack the woman might throw at him. That however seemed to make the woman all the more annoyed as she began to speak in another language that he could not understand. I cannot understand you. The language barrier between him and the new arrival was making it hard for him to figure out who she was, but it also made her less than amused as she moved to smash him into the ground. Naruto quickly channeled his chakra into his sword and used it to block the attack coming in to reduce his skull and head into a mess. Clang. The blow was tough and Naruto felt the ground literally crack from the blow, showing that his estimation of her strength was pretty accurate. The good news was that through his training as well as his experiences, made him tougher than the usual, along with Kurama's healing powers, his Uzumaki lineage, and Senjutsu training. But that blow sent shivers of pain through his legs anyway. But he quickly powered up with Senjutsu of his own and quickly pushed the woman off of him and then tried to get a feel of his newfound foe. He sensed that she seriously had a lot of chakra, and her fluctuating emotions seemed to have some form of boosting effect on them. Ninja scholars and even his own friends back in the academy suspected that emotions at times boosted chakra power, though it could also reverse it due to loss of concentration. So whatever was powering this girl was definitely stronger than normal. She attacked again, still shouting in a language Naruto had difficulty making heads or tails of. He however was not going to let him strike him twice. He moved away from the blow and launched out a powerful wind chakra attack to hit her to slow her down. But she moved at the exact moment and the attack he unleashed struck her restraints. That was not enough to destroy them to be sure, but the blow itself had an effect on the manacles, namely near the hands. The woman screamed out again and to Naruto's surprise, there was a massive glow of green there, and the damaged part of her manacles suddenly broke off. That freed her hands, and also allowed her to start tossing glowing green bolts of energy at him. You have got to be kidding. Naruto had no time to continue his words as he dodged the now long stream of energy spheres that worked in the same way as bombs or explosive tags. Already the entire area around him was being leveled by this woman. He was happy that at least there was no one here and at least the whole area was pretty much going to be condemned anyway. As she wrecked even more of the place, he decided that now was the time to step things up. But then as he tapped into Kurama's chakra for a boost, his sudden transformation into a being of pure fire, or so he looked, stopped the woman and she looked at him briefly. Naruto had no idea what was the reason there, but as he focused his chakra on her, he noted that instead of being angry or having killer intent towards him, the girl seemed scared. Scared? What the heck is going on here? Naruto's confusion lasted only briefly as he realized that he was sensing other emotions as well, pain, confusion, and anger. Plus he was also sensing that she was merely reacting in self-defense before him. This was a risk but he trusted his ability to sense negative emotions due to Kurama's chakra cloak and could tell that this girl was not evil. He placed his sword back into his sheath and tried to show that he meant no harm to her. It seemed to be working as the alien woman was not either charging at him or powering up another one of those energy bolts. That was a good sign to Naruto as he felt that removing those manacles might be a good way to build bridges between him and the alien woman. He thought it over on what to use and then summoned up a bit of Saiken's chakra to allow him to use briefly the slug Biju's chakra type. The blonde shinobi, still in his chakra cloak, moved towards her and then did several seals. The woman was confused by this but being near Naruto's cloak which was pure yang chakra seemed to have a calming effect on her. That was definitely a good thing as he completed the move and began to blow at the manacles. But instead of air, he was releasing a fine mist of corrosive alkaline liquid that was reinforced by chakra and it seemed to work on the manacles as they began to smoke and break down. He then channeled some of his chakra and then gently began to hit the manacles and soon freed the young woman's arms. He had only released enough of the acid to destroy the manacles and not harm her, and was pleased to know that Saiken's acid did the trick at this point without harming the woman accidentally. The woman looked at the manacles and then to Naruto who decided to try using gestures instead of words since the language of gestures just might work here until he figured out what to say to the woman. He gestured to the ruined manacles, placed his hands together and then parted them, hoping to impart that the manacles were weaker now and she could free herself. The woman got it and then pulled her arms apart, and freed herself from the weakened manacles and she seemed to be rather relieved to be free. Naruto gave a sigh of relief and was even more relieved to sense that the woman was losing her negative emotions from before. Being freed seemed to have a very calming effect on her and for that he was grateful. He was also pleased that at least she had shown no more hostile intent towards him and he finally tried to speak with gestures. But decided to first reveal himself since he was wearing his mask after all. As soon as he revealed his face, the woman seemed to lose more of her caution and began to look at him with curiosity and followed his movements with intensity. The blonde shinobi could not help but stare in amusement at the whole thing and he soon spoke to the woman. Okay. Listen, can you find some way to learn how to speak English or my language? The woman cocked her head to the side in the universal gesture that translated to, I do not understand you. This made Naruto shake his head once more and he spoke to himself in English. Of all the things to happen to me in the span of 2 days, this was certainly not on the list of what could happen. There has got to be a way for both of us to learn how to communicate. He then noted that the woman was pointing to her lips and then to his own apparently. That raised his eyebrow and he wondered just what she was trying to tell him. Anything Naruto was about to say was cut short when the undeniably gorgeous orange-skinned, red-haired, and literally green-eyed alien woman gave him a French kiss. Now Naruto was not the least bit sheltered when it came to the ladies, having been married more than once, and all that, but this was something he was not expecting on a first meeting, since being kissed like this by a hot alien woman was not part of his experiences. However, he did notice something odd, as a portion of his chakra was taken by the kiss made by the woman herself. That alarmed Naruto, as it reminded him of the time that redhead Kunoichi, with the tendency to suck the chakra out of people via a kiss, grabbed him. Thankfully, the second that Kunoichi, Fuin if he recalled her name right, made the mistake on drawing in Kurama's still hatred-infused chakra and thus had to release him. This woman was doing the same thing, only difference was that he sensed no lethal intent just yet. And the chakra that was taken was actually very little from him, so was not in the least bit life-threatening. The kiss lasted for a moment or two more before the woman, or whatever she was, finally released him, and he looked at her with wide eyes and spoke in his trademark language. Whoa, what the heck was that for? I normally don't mind kissing a drop-dead gorgeous lady or being kissed by said lady, but being kissed by someone who tried to flatten me with her bare hands is not that normal. The red-haired, green-eyed, and orange-skinned woman tilted her head to the side a bit in an expression of confusion and spoke to him in Japanese. Oh, I apologize for that, it is the way we of Tamarinine descent learn languages. I could not understand you, and I apologize for what happened earlier. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Draining one's life force with a kiss was not that new to him, but kissing someone to learn a language. That was a new one. Any other discussion was cut short, however, when he heard a number of police sirens coming in, and with that in mind, he stood up and spoke to the now freed alien woman. Look, now is not the time for this to continue, so can we move somewhere else? Naruto was relieved that the woman was willing to listen to him, and soon he moved further away from the area, but as he was moving from building to building using his chakra, he saw that the woman was actually flying. And to his greater surprise, the woman's hair at the back was actually turning into fire. That only reinforced his desire to find out what he could concerning the woman who was now with him. Okay, I definitely need to get some answers here. Hold up. Who are you anyway? Oh, my name is Coriander, or if you wish you can call me Starfire. Okay, Starfire. I can work with that for now. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Later. Naruto and his newfound acquaintance were now in the mountains outside of LA, and he was happy for that, though they were still a fair distance from his home. This way they did not end up causing more damage than the city was willing to take anymore, especially after that rather disastrous first meeting. And after what he had seen, he had to admit that the name certainly fits, though he was doing his best not to stare at Starfire's choice of attire. And here Starfire finally told him of what exactly happened to her. She told him of who her people were and what exactly was the source of her powers. She also explained that she was a member of the royal family of her homeland. Learning about her people was interesting, and he could not help but notice how animated she became after she began to talk about her home planet. He listened carefully and raised an eyebrow at some of their cultural practices, and then he asked the question on what she was doing here on Earth of all places. He naturally explained the world she was on to her, and when it was over, he repeated the question to her. She was silent for a while longer, and even from here Naruto could sense that she was not in the best of moods about that line of discussion. A more serious part of him wanted to get as much information as he could from her right now on the off chance she was going to be followed. But that was balanced by his empathy, as he felt that she had her reasons. He did not have to wait long for her answers to his question when she began to fill him on what happened to her people. Namely, due to the wars her people dealt with. Even with their desire for peace, her people had to fight, and they did that, but suffered badly. It was also when she reluctantly told him of her father's decision and her sister's actions, namely her betrayal of her family and people, all because of her unique flaw. Needless to say, the idea of the woman being subjected to such treatment for 6 years by sadistic scientists, and worse beings, all because her sister had one serious blood rivalry with her, pissed Naruto off a lot. He asked for more details gently and was actually angered by the fact that Starfire had been abused and raped more than once. The fact that instead of punishing the bastard for trying to defile her sibling despite their history, at some point when Coriander fought back, Starfire's sister actually punished her for resisting her rapist this time around. Naruto's anger was getting more intense at this, and he could feel Kurama's chakra reacting. Apparently even the Biju, who was his longtime partner, found the whole series of circumstances disgusting and abhorrent to him. Starfire later explained how she had tried to free herself and her sister from their latest captor, and how her sister acted after she freed her even after all she had done. She then explained that after this she had managed to escape and destroy the tracking device on her manacles, so she was not going to be easily found by her trackers. All she wanted right now was to rest and recuperate before finding some way to avoid those chasing her. Naruto calmed himself and began to think on what he should so with Starfire. It was obvious that despite their rather violent first meeting, Starfire was not the enemy here. In fact, she was more the victim, and he could sense through Kurama's chakra and through Senjutsu that she was telling him the truth on her current situation. And that is how I came here, and how you freed me from my manacles, friend Naruto. I apologize for everything. My life in the hands of my jailers has left me very much on edge. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that and spoke to her seriously while crossing his hands on his chest. You're awfully quick to trust me on the get-go. Get-go. Naruto shook his head and replied. Sorry, figure of speech, human figure of speech. It means instantly. And in this case, I have to ask, why are you so willing to trust me when we just met? Starfire threw it over and after some time replied. I do not sense any malice in you towards me when I was able to sense that power you had used before that made you be covered in fire. And even though I do not know fully why, there is something about you that tells me that you are a person I can feel safe with. And you were sincere in freeing me and trying to communicate to me without hostile intent. Had I not sensed any of this when I learned your language and when you freed me from the manacles despite our first meeting, I would have fought with you to the death. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that as he could see she meant it all and replied. Fair enough. Though I am still not too sure about this whole trust the first guy you kissed routine. Coriander could not help but be a bit amused at Naruto as she looked at him. There was something about him that was truly different. There was a power in him that burned deeply in every part of him, even more so when he used that fiery aura to actually made him look beautiful, and that was interesting to the newly liberated Tamarinine. She was very much unused to Earth culture and customs since none of her people had any record of this world. Naruto then spoke to her once more. One thing, do you plan to go home? With that comment, Starfire's smile faded and she shook her head sadly at this. I cannot go home. What? If I go home, then the truce between my people and the citadel is rendered null and void. And thus they will attack my people and kill more of them. As long as the truce holds, I cannot return home and I fear that my sister will still seek me out. I will not become her slave or anyone else's anymore. And my home is light years from here, it would take far too long for me to go back even if I wished it. I am alone here for now. The sight of the woman being this melancholy made Naruto groan in disgust at the idea of making her sad. He was always weak towards those who suffered, no doubt due to his own past. As he thought it over, he figured that until he found a solution to this problem, the best he could do was provide Starfire some form of refuge. With all her suffering she deserved to be safe, even more so from that psychotic bitch of a sister that treated her like dirt all because of a flaw in her own genetic code. All right, Starfire, I have an offer for you if you are willing to listen. Yes, what is that offer, friend Naruto? You obviously don't have a place to call home here, and while this place is not the home you know, I am willing to help you out. You can move into my home for the time being and stay there until we can come up with a solution to your problem, that is if you don't have a problem with that. Her response to the offer that he gave her. Coriander tackling him with a smile on her face and her kissing him in thanks while rubbing her form on his own. As the very gorgeous alien woman shamelessly hugged him while he was on the ground and allowing him to feel her form, Naruto could not help but feel his body react to that as well as the lip lock. He could swear that if he could manage it in the afterlife somewhere, his perverted godfather was possibly waving a banner of congratulations at him for meeting such a beautiful and obviously liberal-minded woman who was saying thank you in both Japanese, English, and obviously Tamarinine. In heaven. Jiraiya was utterly pleased as he continued to look at Naruto and was waving said banner at Naruto. That's my boy. As soon as he was able to extract himself, reluctantly from the happy Tamarinine woman, the ninja moved to where his vehicle would be waiting for him. Since he did not have a lot of projects for his boss to work on, he had something of a few days off. So when he got to the warehouse, he got into the vehicle, though he had some difficulty convincing Starfire to ride with him in the vehicle. Once he was able to do that, he headed back to his home and at least no one was willing to stop him. As soon as he got to his home, he made sure to lock it down and allow Starfire to see his home and see how she would take it. The Tamarinine looked the place over with a critical but happy eye and soon spoke to him. Your home looks rather nice, friend Naruto. Naruto was happy that at least the home appealed to his newfound friend, though he was aware that as an alien, her views on aesthetics might be radically different from what he was used to. As he looked at Starfire, who was busy exploring his place of residence, he began to realize that he needed to get some decent clothing for Starfire. Though given what she told him of her people's culture and views on certain things, perhaps she might consider them too prudish. Not that I am complaining. Kurama snickered in the back of his mind and replied with amusement evident in the tone of the Biju. When it comes to drop-dead gorgeous women, you never have a reason to complain or say no to said women, though there is one little detail you are apparently forgetting, Kit. That being, how exactly are you going to explain her presence to the rest of the league? Naruto grimaced at that. Kurama had raised up a very valid point since for one, he knew that he was going to be caught by the others harboring an obvious alien refugee. He had no doubt Flash would immediately hit on Starfire, even more so when one considered what he learned about Starfire's people in terms of culture. Learning that Tamarinines were very passionate about positive emotions, namely love and the physical aspects of it, really was something. And it was taking all of his self-control not to try anything foolish with Starfire. He shook his head at that and decided to go see if he had anything that would appeal to her since he had no idea just what Tamarines would eat. Thankfully it seemed that Earthling food was very much alright with Starfire and that made him feel happier. Though he had no doubt his food and drink bill was going to be a lot higher this time around. As soon as dinner was over, he decided to show her the room she was going to use and she seemed to like it. And as he was about to ask her if she was going to turn in for the night, she removed her clothing right in front of him. Naruto naturally took in the sight of her like this and already his male hormones were on the attack, but at least he kept himself focused as Starfire merely smiled and thanked him again for allowing her to stay with him. He gave her a smile and did all he could manage to state his acceptance of her thanks, but had to control himself as she hugged him and kissed him again while naked. And he was doing his best not to jump her bones since for one, she had been through a lot in his mind so doing this was not the right time. It took a lot of effort for him to not only free himself and bid her a good night, but to also control himself from doing more than wishing her a good night's sleep. As soon as he closed the door he quickly began to work on controlling himself since despite the fact he was no prude and already had his share of passionate times, especially with Pamela a while back and his boss, he still had to sort out the mess on what to do when the league found out about Coriander. But seeing that it was going to be late, he might as well get some shut-eye and hope he could organize things before doing any revealing to the others. Better all of them were together to help him when the time came, so until then he was going to work on helping Cory work on getting used to being in Earth and learning all she needed to learn in order to adapt to the cultures here. The next day. Ring. Ring. Re-crack. Naruto woke up the next day to yet another busted alarm clock courtesy of his fist and tried to get up and get breakfast going. He then checked his calendar to see that he had a free 3 days from work, which was a good thing since he had to help get Coriander or rather Starfire settled in. One other name he could try to use was Cory since it was fairly human sounding. She did not mind and seemed to be pleased with her current situation. In fact so was he as he could not help but like the idea of having company in his place. Sure the league came here every now and then, but he was usually on his own devices so that did not count. As soon as he was wide awake, he got ready to cook some beef and miso soup ramen as well as some bacon, fresh tuna sashimi, scrambled eggs, and toasted bread with jam and butter. The food thankfully was not that long to cook and already Starfire came to him from the room, thankfully for now she was clothed so he was not in danger of morning wood. Not usually a concern but right now he had other matters to deal with. Though even if she was wearing clothing, Starfire still looked smoking hot and she only had on a t-shirt of his that while fairly large still hugged her frame well. Couple that with the fact she wore no underwear as he knew of, it was pretty hard not to take notice. Cory however smiled at the food and was pleased to try some once it was ready. She actually loved it and devoured her food well. It was a good thing that he knew what it was like to have a killer appetite and prepare accordingly. Once breakfast was over, he helped get some change of clothes ready for her as well as a towel if she needed to bathe. He also told her of the shortened version he made of her real name and she found it all right. She soon headed off to bathe and this was a good time for Naruto to try and make sense of what he had to do for the time being with Cory by going into the area where his plants were. However, he was so wrapped up in thought that he was unable to sense that a certain dark night was coming, until Kurama informed him. He turned and sure enough, Batman came down from his plane which was now landing via remote control to another location nearby. Great. Just when I was hoping to have time. Murphy's Law partner. I swear when I find this Murphy character real or not, I am going to shove a Rasengan up his ass for this. Batman came before him and spoke. I just got word you had an object from space land here in LA and you did not report it in. I can understand Tsukiri since you dealt with her well enough, but why the silence on this one? Naruto's attempt to explain his being silent for a bit on the meteor that came to his nick of the woods, was cut short when a certain female alien walked out from the house and moved next to him, completely buck naked. The happy female alien had gone to take a good shower and found the water enjoyable. And she appeared to be quite pleased by the cool waters of her shower but obviously did not bring the change of clothing nor the towel that he had prepared earlier since she wanted to tell him she was done. Friend Naruto. I am finished with my. Oh, hello there, are you a friend of Naruto? The naked Tamarinin landed right in front of Batman and Naruto and smiled warmly at both of them. Naruto despite all he had been through in his life had to resist suffering a nosebleed as he blushed at the sight of Cory who was utterly unconcerned by the fact that she was questioning Batman in her birthday suit. All Batman had to do was look at the obviously alien woman next to Naruto and he knew that something was up. He looked at Naruto and in his usual tone of voice when it came to interrogation, spoke, all the while doing his level best to ignore the obviously naked alien woman who was right next to Naruto asking him who he was while being naked shamelessly in public, never mind the fact that it was only him with the blonde shinobi right now. What the hell is going on, and who is she? Naruto had the decency at least to look a bit shamefaced, never mind the fact that he technically was old enough to be Batman's great-grandfather. All the while the alien woman was still confused on who this stranger in black was. That's a long story. Bruce resisted the urge to pinch the bridge of his nose and knew that it was going to be a long story. Start from the beginning, and for God's sake, get her some clothes. Starfire, however, replied. Why do you humans always insist on me wearing clothes when you are both men? Do I look ugly to the both of you? Both men suddenly found themselves unable to come up with a decent answer to that question. However, it's here, that power I sensed. The female voice came from a figure wearing a cloak, and she spoke once more as she headed in the direction of LA. I do not know what you are, but perhaps I can learn something here. Perhaps whoever wields this power can do something to help me control my own powers better. As well as that part of me. The obviously disguised woman finally spoke as shadows moved around her. Azrith, Methri, and Synthos. Naruto was currently working on trying to get used to the fact that he now had a housemate in his pad. It was not a bad thing at all, since Corey actually did not mind being here with him. It was a bad thing in the sense that he had to keep her existence at a minimum when it involved the League right now, namely the ones who were still out there dealing with the mess that John got dragged into. The mess he willingly allowed himself to be dragged into, to be sure. It had been quite a discussion between him and Batman, since eventually the two of them convinced Starfire that she was not ugly at all. And the only reason that they were asking her, or rather Batman was asking her to wear clothes, was that on Earth one did not go around buck naked when people who they did not know were around. Corey thought about that and agreed that she would to it for the time being, leaving the two to get dressed in some clothes. Though she did wonder why humans were so prudish at times. Once she was out of sight and hearing range, Naruto began to fill Batman in on what exactly happened and how he met Starfire. He did not spare any details, and even if he could not see it, he could tell that Batman was taking in all the details very carefully, no doubt trying to see if there were any holes on Coriander story. That was to be expected, and truthfully he had been doing the same thing, though through Kurama's chakra, which was still present, he was assured that all she said was pretty accurate. There was also the fact that despite her beauty, both of them had seen scars on her. They did not detract her looks and had faded very well, but made it clear that her suffering for 6 years was hardly a work of fiction. After a while Batman was silent, not totally convinced in Naruto's mind to be sure, but he seemed to be accepting it so far. Batman looked outside into the sky and replied. You're sure that you got all the facts right? Positive, and so far I haven't sensed any chakra that might indicate that we have company from up there yet. Plus if her sister is after her and came here I would know it. How? Chakra from relatives resonates at a frequency that is identical, so if Starfire's sister appears I would be able to sense it now that I have a feel for Starfire's chakra. Can she use it? Naruto thought it over and recalled all of his lessons and replied. I'm not really sure about that, since Starfire is not human, so I have no idea what type of chakra circulatory system analog her people have in them. I doubt that they even have the knowledge to use chakra, since they obviously have other powers to call on. Not to mention the fact that while I have sensed chakra in Superman, I am not sure just what will happen if he tried to tap into it. The ability of aliens to use chakra for real is pretty hard for me to see. When I senses Superman's chakra, he had a huge amount of it, but his chances of using it are pretty hard to determine, since his chakra circulatory system, as far as I have sensed, is not very well developed, or it's utterly different from mine, so it might react differently. Same with Starfire. She has a lot of it, but right now it seems that she can't use it. I see. There's also the matter on what she is going to do here. Like it or not, she will have to adjust to this world, so I doubt that staying here is going to help her in the long run. Not to mention that she might compromise your location, considering her rather visual way of moving around. Naruto frowned at that and replied. After seeing her level an abandoned sector of the city, I agree with you, but right now I'm the only person, apart from you, that she knows of, so I think she'd rather be somewhere and with someone she knows she can trust. 6 years of that hell can make you very wary to trust anyone. Hell, considering what I learned from her, it's a miracle she's not plain insane right now, and with her powers, if she was driven nuts, bad combination. Bruce sensed the tone there and asked the question. This happens to be from personal experience, Hokage. Naruto sighed while retaining the frown and nodded. Yeah, let's leave it at that. Besides, if she does not learn how to control her powers while here, you can bet that a wrecked abandoned city block is going to be the least of our worries. Besides, I would not put it past people to have less than stellar intentions towards her had she been left to her own devices in the city. She's pretty much an innocent in anything related to Earth customs, and who knows where that might lead to. Though after having seen and be the target of her powers and strength, I can honestly say that to me the only ones to try that are either metahumans or insane idiots with a death wish. Batman could not help but agree to some extent with that idea. Plus, considering the fact that she is technically not evil and is more of a refugee, we can't just send her off on her own and get into worse trouble now, can we? I'm thankful she landed in an abandoned part of town and not a populated one after all, to be honest, since who knew what would be the outcome of that happening. Batman thought about that and nodded slowly. he was still reluctant with the whole idea, but until a more acceptable solution was reached, Coriander would have to stay with Naruto. He was however going to make sure that when the time came, there would be solution in place to prevent something that all of them were going to regret. All right, but try not to do anything that would compromise you and her. And please, despite the age difference, keep your pants on around her. Naruto gave Batman a shake of his head and replied. I'll try, but considering how she looks and acts, it's not going to be easy. I can see that. Any other discussion was put to an end by two things. First was that Starfire had come back in a pair of shorts and a shirt and was actually decent by human standards. And the other thing was that Batman's communicator coming online to tell him that he was needed back at Gotham. Thus he left, and soon this left Naruto alone with Coriander, who actually flew into the air next to the bat plane and waved goodbye to Batman, who merely gave a nod and left. The Tamarinine soon moved back down to the ground and soon spoke to Naruto. Friend Naruto, does your friend, the one you call Batman, not approve of me? Naruto raised an eyebrow at that and replied. What gave you that idea? I have sensed he does not approve of me, though I have no idea why. Does he worry about my presence here? Nah. Batman's just cautious. He knows nothing of you yet, so he has his reasons to be wary, but I have no doubt you can make him change his mind. The woman gave a hopeful look that was both cute and very beautiful, making Naruto slap his head mentally. There were very few women he knew of who could somehow combine cute and beautiful all at once in the same sentence. Apparently Starfire had just landed in that same category. At any rate, it was high time that he and Starfire got out into the city to do some patrol work, since it would be a bit before he went back to work earning his next paycheck. For now though, it was off to dealing with the bands of criminals that infested the place. Only this time he was not going to go alone, so he went off to get into his clothing and armor. Starfire then spoke to him as she followed the blonde shinobi. Where are you off to, friend Naruto? Off to make sure that the criminals in LA don't do any more harm to the people living here. You can come and join me if you want, Starfire. Cory smiled and replied. Of course I will help you out. Naruto was now out on patrol, but this time he was not alone at all, as Starfire was accompanying him in the same way she had come to join him. The sight of both him and the alien woman moving about in the city had garnered a lot of attention, and it was not something he could discount. Only thing he knew he had to watch out for was for men to start getting weird ideas, not that he did not think the same thing every now and then, even more so when one considering just how revealing Cory's choice of clothing were. He could understand that on her world such things were normal, but on this world, she revealed way too much to be ignored, though he was thankful that her choice of clothing did cover the essentials. Thank the kami she decided to wear it than go around fighting crime buck naked. That was attention he did not want to have to deal with. Her moving around the house in the nude, fine, he can deal with that, but her moving, flying and fighting crime with him in the nude in public. Oh no, even he had his limits. Starfire looked all over the city and he could sense that she was taking in all the sights well thus far. Then though she did wonder why a news chopper was following them, unmindful that due to the position the news cameraman had, they were able to get a very revealing look at Starfire's backside. That however did not escape Naruto's attention for long, as he quickly moved to fire a kunai on a line to hold onto the helicopter rails, and then he moved up to face the cameraman as he spoke. Normally I don't do this, but if anyone starts making videos of my female partner for perverts to look at from that video of yours, I'll be very cross. After that he left and was soon joined by Cory as they landed on the highest building rooftop. Naruto was currently standing on the side of the building and looking about, while Cory looked at Naruto with a look of amazed curiosity. How are you able to do that, friend Naruto? Let's just say I have many secrets, Starfire. By the way, remember what I told you about? Cory gave a curious look, but that did not last long, as she soon recalled just what she and Naruto talked about prior to them moving out on patrol. Oh, I am to call you Hokage when we are on patrol and when fighting the criminals, am I right? Right. Anyway, let's rest here for a second, I have to do something before we move on. Starfire nodded, and as Naruto sat down and soon began to get into his senjutsu mode, feeling the natural chakra of the land flow into him, and soon he could sense things better. That along with the emotions of the people around him as well as Cory, and while he was still getting used to the feeling of Cory's chakra being that potent, he was able to focus on scanning the city. It did not take long for him to sense a number of criminals moving about. The blonde had learned enough to know that chakra can be affected by emotions as well as the personality of the person releasing it. That and the fact that he was using a portion of Kurama's chakra to perfect his senses made it a deal easier. There were a number of criminals moving about doing his usual bit, but he did not interfere since he could sense that the police were nearby to handle the situation, so he did not interfere. But as he continued to move his senses, he soon sensed that a number of criminals were running away in a large van and were in a dangerous path into a civilian area. He got up and spoke to Cory. Follow me, Starfire. We have some criminals to catch. I am right behind you, friend Hokage. The thugs had begun to move away from the traffic of the highway as they planned to lose the police trying to catch them. They were more than willing to use their firepower on the cops, which helped keep the distance between them and the cops who were following them. They began to move away to lose the cops, until they spotted Naruto landing before them. The lead driver snarled and shouted to his cohorts, "Kill that bastard." The others got ready to fight, but Naruto quickly focused himself and fired several kunai at their direction, which were infused with a bit of his chakra. The weapons flew like arrows and quickly cut into their weapons, reducing them to scrap and forcing them to toss aside their guns. The driver charged, intent on running Naruto over, and he got himself ready to avoid that. However, Starfire decided to get involved by diving down, landing in front of said car, and then grabbing it and then flipping it on her hands and lifted said vehicle up while it was upside down. Naruto had to admit that the image was nice, even more so when Starfire began to shake said car to loosen the bad guys out. The thugs turned to fire their weapons on the two of them, only for Naruto to quickly move in and take down his bunch of thugs with his sword, cutting their guns and his fists and kicks, sending them to La La Land. Starfire, on the other hand, had even less trouble, as the thugs could suddenly do nothing but stare slack-jawed at her, allowing her to close the gap and knock them down to the ground. They had to be thankful for the fact that she had been convinced by him to not use her full strength. Bad guys they may be, but even these guys could easily be sent into the ICU or the funeral parlor if Starfire was serious in her attacks. As soon as the thugs were rounded up, the two took off, and Naruto soon guided them to yet another sight of thugs robbing a bank. This bunch of thugs doing said robbery, on the other hand, were armed with some more serious weapons and apparently had managed to get their hands on police-grade body armor. How that was possible he had no idea as of yet, but he and Starfire were not going to let them get the chance to make life difficult for the regular folks. Naruto quickly fired two of his regular kunai to bite deep into the barrels of their guns, while Kori charged up her power bolts to aim for the guns, but she did not use too much power, and soon their guns were nothing more than scrap. Once the guns were out of the way, Naruto quickly decided to move in and land some serious knockout blows on the thugs who decided to try their luck in hand-to-hand combat. And it was obvious that they were going to rely on their body armor to keep them alive in all of this, but Naruto was a lot stronger than most people. And it was clear to all that Kori was more powerful to Naruto, as her foes who tried their luck to fight her with hand-to-hand combat moves and using weapons were sent flying by her attacks. And soon Naruto decided to send one of the cage bunchen out and take some long metal cable, and soon they tied up the thugs in rapid succession. All of this was done in mere minutes, and soon the people could not help but look at the sight of the bank robbers now out of action as both Naruto and Kori looked over their handiwork. No one among the civilians was badly injured, and those who were indeed injured got treated by him with some of his supplies of bandages, while Kori decided to help get rid of some of the rubble that could make things dangerous around the people who they happened to be trying to help. However, this also allowed Naruto gauge the reaction of the people to the fact that not only was he around, but this time he was not alone. The blonde shinobi could not help but smirk a bit as he saw the reaction of the men and women at the sight of Starfire in her outfit of choice when they foiled the bank robbery. Not that he could blame them at the moment, since seeing an alien woman like her in her choice of wardrobe was pretty darn new. The men were staring like mad at Kori, and the same went for some of the women as well, and he did not have to be a mind reader to know what the men and the women of that particular persuasion were thinking when staring at Starfire. Heck, even the thugs were staring at Starfire like a bunch of the proverbial deer staring at the floodlights. Though it was more like they were drooling perverted fellows who saw someone they liked. And Kori had the looks and the figure to make ogling her come close to a national pastime. There were also women who were staring at the gorgeous alien woman with envy, mothers were covering the eyes of their children, and a lot more as well. Naruto shook his head and spoke to Kori. Starfire, our work is done here, we should leave. Of course, friend Hokage, ready when you are. Naruto was relieved somewhat that Starfire was willing to go with him, and soon they left, as he still had to do his rounds and help out the people of the city if something happened that the cops could not handle without heavy injuries and losses. As he moved from building to building by running on the walls, Kori was nearby, flying with a trail of fire behind her, quite the sight considering her choice of clothing and the way she looked before anyone. He just knew that this was really going to be the talk of the city soon enough. The next day, Naruto looked at the TV and shook his head in annoyance as they were playing a newsreel that involved him and Starfire, and already the rumor mill of the media was ablaze about this new and obviously gorgeous female protector of the city who was with him. Some commented that with her alien powers she might be here to do something that was akin to the movie Species. Others stated that she was going to be a strong addition to protecting the city on the off chance they finally got criminals the likes of Joker and worse. Others commented that perhaps she and the Hokage are more than partners, and possibly involved. He snorted as he had seen said movie. Creepy as hell to be sure, but it made some sense, though he doubted that Kori was the type for such a thing. Hell, the woman in said film was an actress and the fictional alien and Kori had nothing physically in common. Her powers and strength were certainly going to be a serious asset in a fight, so that second rumor he could understand. The third rumor was just as understandable, since anyone could easily think that considering how friendly he and Kori were with one another. Not that it bothered him in the slightest right now, as he had to make sure that he would do what he could to keep Corey busy and getting used to the world that she was now going to be living in. So far there had been no word yet on when the others who had gone to help Stuart, but Naruto had faith in them that they would help get him out of that mess. Sure, the idea of seeing new worlds was tempting, and seeing new races as well, but like he said, there needed to be people who would fight to keep this world safe. And right now it seemed another task of his was protecting Corey from the gossip columns, as one reported theory that came out was she had seduced the Hokage and would be the vanguard of a new alien invasion like the one that the Imperium pulled. That one gave him a headache, and he could not help but suddenly feel the urge to find the nut, man or otherwise, who dared to suggest such an idea. As he looked at the next report, Corey came in still wearing the t-shirt and not much else on her, which he did not mind the least, and she sat down next to him. She looked at the TV and then spoke to the blonde ninja. What do you plan to do next, friend Naruto? Not much the moment. I'll be heading back to work soon to take care of some backlog work. Speaking of which, I think it's time we find some way to help you adjust to being on Earth. I doubt I can hide your powers and looks anyway. Why must I hide? I don't think the people would mind much. Naruto managed to bid back a chuckle at that one comment from Coriander and replied while smiling. I suppose not. You are very comfortable in being who you are, Corey. Of course I am comfortable with who I am, which is why I cannot understand why you must wear a mask, friend Naruto. You look quite good yourself, so I do not understand why you must hide your face. On to Marinine. Any man who is attractive should not hide his face from the women who admire him. Naruto had to concede Corey that point. Technically, since he was an unknown in this world, he had no past or anyone here to be remotely connected to. But he balanced that with the fact that he had friends, colleagues, and acquaintances who were regular folks. And if anyone made the connection to them knowing him and him being the Hokage, then they would go after them to get to him, even if he did disguise himself. It was not the first time that happened to him after all, and he wanted to avoid that as much as possible. That and the fact that he took to the habit of hiding behind a mask when he had a stint in the ranks of the Anbu back in Konoha, so he developed an appreciation for the need to hide one's identity. I can see your point, but if anyone who happens to be my enemies knew what I look like under the mask, they would already come after me and endanger innocent people to get to me. So far you haven't made a lot of enemies for yourself, Corey, but sooner or later you will, and I would like it that you can go and appreciate Earth culture without having some crazy bad guys come in and take potshots at you every now and then. The woman gave him a confused look and replied. How can a pot shoot? Oh boy. In Los Angeles roads. Naruto yawned a bit as he was now heading back to the office to get some work done and hopefully get back before something bad happened to his place. It was not that he distrusted Corey or anything. Well, maybe that was not being honest. He was only worried that Corey would get bored being there in his private place and might do something bad to it. If there was one thing he learned from his time with the undeniably gorgeous Tamarine woman, boredom was not for her. He could relate to be sure being the restless man that he was, but he kept in mind that she was not from around here and there was no telling how much trouble she could get into, so he had to play the role of nursemaid. As soon as that came into the century-old shinobi, he could not help but chuckle a bit at the irony of that. Back when he was a little rascal, he always caused all manner of trouble, with only Iruka and Hiruzen as well as Tsuki and Ayame, Kami bless their souls, keeping him from doing something horrendously stupid. He appreciated them for that when he became a father and watched over his own kids and then his grandkids. Great. And now I have to play that role again with a beautiful alien woman who for all I know might be older than I am. You always did wind up in the craziest of situations, at least though you don't have to worry about her right now, unless you count the fact she does not mind cavorting in just about nothing. Talk about eye candy, and the fact she actually likes being naked only makes it more distracting. Flash would have a field day hitting on her. Naruto nodded, and as he began to get his gear ready, he managed to locate his laptop and USB drive. He made sure that they were all right and then got his keys. He was already fully dressed for a day of work, and Corey, well, she was going to be busy on her own accord. She planned to go and see the rest of the city while flying about, but he would be keeping tabs on her just in case. The last thing he needed was for her to do some sort of mess that he would have to clean up, and who knew how the League might take it. Though he could wager a guess that if the others had seen the news, they would already know that Corey was with him in LA and no doubt helping out in dealing with crime, though he was very sure that a meet and greet was in order. As he was done, he walked to where Corey was eating and saw that she was really digging into the freshly cooked beef steak he had made for her. And the way she loved the well-cooked meat was enough to tell him that she was truly interested in his cooking. Plus the liking for meat more than most would have to do with her people's ancestry more than most. Naruto's workplace. Sage, get your butt over here. Naruto could not help but groan a bit as he got off the chair he was on and headed to his boss's office, though he wondered what could be the reason he had been called into his boss's office and in this particular fashion by his part-time boss. He however decided not to comment on this and was soon inside said office and facing his drop-dead gorgeous female boss who was tapping on an iPad. One thing he had to give to the technology makers of this reality was that they knew their stuff. Technology was present back home and tech did advance in the last 100 years he had been home, though the internet and other things were still a long ways off. Technology was pretty much diverse back home and they did have good reasons for not taking it the way people did here. The internet was good and all, but all manner of information floating about that could be accessed by others, namely the ones that fell on the enemy category, was always a bad idea. And having computers like his laptop or his boss's iPad was cool in many ways, but being a ninja for so long also told him that unless you had some serious security for this, the bad guys could just swipe it from you and get all the details they needed to make your life miserable as hell. Naruto, however, put that aside as he spoke to his boss. You called. Yeah, you heard about the new heroine we have flying about in LA, right? Naruto tried not to smile a bit at that. Had his boss learned that said heroine was a resident at his place, she would have flipped. And not in a good way either, but he placed that thought aside and replied. I have, and judging by the way I was called boss, you need me for something. You got it right. Apparently you have a number of requests from some of your esteemed fans. They want you to try and write a story about her and her apparent partner the Hokage, though I get the feeling that since she is new to the city that would be a tall order. Not to mention the fact doing that without the lady's consent is asking for the proverbial black eye. Even more so when I saw what she can do on the news. Naruto nodded and that in agreement and then spoke. So what do you have in mind? Interview her and see if we can get her consent to have stories written. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that and spoke. Boss, I don't want to sound like I don't want to. Heck, any red-blooded man worth his manhood would agree with the idea. But the facts are that she does not exactly have a place of residence. She's an alien who might not see things the way aliens who lived on Earth like Superman and his cousin Supergirl would, and she has some serious powers. All that kind of make me think it's a bad idea. Not to mention the fact that we're not exactly a newspaper here, this is not exactly our department. Carol grinned and replied. I know, but I do know someone who can help. Who exactly? Lois Lane from the Daily Planet. She's coming here to LA recently to see if she could get an interview with the Hokage, and with her around, I can bet that she might be interested in interviewing our literally fiery redhead. Now that was unexpected. He knew of Lois to be sure and knew that if there was any reporter among the few who actually reported the truth, Lois Lane was one of them. Add to the fact that she actually was on good terms with Superman gave bonus points in his book. That however did not mean he was not surprised by the fact his boss knew of Lois Lane. In fact, he was surprised and decided to fish for some data himself. How exactly do you know Lois Lane? Carol gave a slight smile and replied. I was busy doing some business in Metropolis when I ran into her during one of her jobs for the Planet. A pair of thugs tried to rob her, if you can believe that, and she knocked out one and I was nearby to disarm the other one when he tried to pull a knife on her. We chatted and we became acquaintances. This was before Superman showed up actually, and I was younger than when we met and had started the company only recently. I can call in a favor from her and have you come with her if she manages to get an interview with our city's newest heroine. Why me? Let's just say that I have faith in you. Plus, knowing how Superman always comes in to save her regardless of where she is, I can bet that if things turn bad, the big blue boy scout is always on call. You have a lot of skill when I met you, and besides, you can manage to charm the young lady even if she is not exactly human. Naruto managed to resist the urge to smirk. If his boss had any idea that the alien woman she referred to was his unofficial housemate, then he was going to be grilled far better than those nice delicious racks of meat she had seen once. That made him recall how much of a mess he had to deal with when Starfire raided his fridge once due to the munchies. That really set him back a spell in the finances bit, but to see Corey happy made it all worthwhile, though he would have to worry about getting a raise. All right. Can't say I'm totally sold on the idea, boss, but I'll give that one a shot. As he finished his work and was able to leave the building since his time for work was over, he was soon contacted by Batman. And he had a very accurate idea on just what the Dark Knight wanted from him. Well, time to face the music. In the Watch Tower. Naruto could not help but shake his head as he was now looking at the sight of Flash literally drooling at the sight of Coriander, who was here on the tower to finally be introduced to the rest of the league. The others were not too sure about how to react to the female alien who was dressed in the same getup as before. Though in this case Flash obviously had no problem admiring the teenage Tamarinine princess in her choice of clothing, and for good reason as well, since seeing her appear had been more than enough to get Flash to stop eating the armload of hot dog sandwiches he had on hand before. When she came to the Watchtower via Hirishin with Naruto, Corey was impressed by the jutsu and was asking him about he was able to do it. Naturally he teased her by saying it was a secret, in the same way a certain anime character he had seen in his time surfing channels would do. Instead of being annoyed by that action, however, it seemed to excite his now official housemate, and he could not help but wonder just how the pervy sage would have went seeing this happen. He quickly squashed that idea flatter than a pancake, as he could already swear he could hear his perverted godfather having ideas cooking in his noodle, as well as laughing like he usually would when his perversion got the better of him. The last thing he needed was to have that image in his head for someone to pick up. Besides, now that he thought about it, He did not need to go far on figuring out just what that perverted old man would think if he saw Corey. Flash could not help himself as he looked at the undeniably beautiful alien woman. Sure, Diana and Shara were beautiful and he would have to be a blind man not to notice. But this new arrival was a beautiful woman who had a quality of her own that was more than enough to get attention of any man. And obviously he was one of the said men as he spoke to her. Are you single? Corey moved her head to the side with a look of confusion on her face for a moment before smiling and replied. No, I am living with Naruto, so we are bonded. Flash looked at Naruto with shock obvious in his face and Naruto sighed a bit and replied. It's a long story. Slash. And later, said long story was soon told and Naruto did not spare any details on laying in just how he and Corey met. And of course Batman was more than willing to speak on what he learned when he ran into Corey. Once it was over, there was a lot that had to be discussed when it came to dealing with the young Tamarinine princess who now for all intents and purposes was a refugee. Jon Stewart could not help but rub the bridge of his nose with his hand and looked at Naruto who had no mask on. I can't believe this. You brought a Tamarinine here, and not just any Tamarinine, but one of the princesses of said world. Naruto groaned and replied. What do you expect me to do? She's here and considering what I know of right now, she's not exactly got anywhere else to go. And I certainly can't let her go off on her own, she's already been through enough as it is. Stewart sighed and nodded. I know, I heard about what happened on her world Naruto. Being a Green Lantern requires me to be in the know. That's the problem as well, the Citadel will be looking for her so we have to make sure she is not going to be seen easily. I will not put it past them to try and cause all manner of trouble in order to get her. The last thing people want is a repeat of the Imperium, because if it does happen, well it's going to be bad. They might even demand we hand her over to the Citadel to avoid another war. Flash then replied. But wouldn't that be like violating some law in the Green Lantern Corps? I mean we do have a number of lanterns who are from Earth, right? John sighed and replied to that as he was quick to see what Flash was driving at. That's true, but that might not mean much if what we know is true. Let's just hope that if it does happen we happen to ready. I am not going to say we should let her go, but keep her presence on Earth under the radar for now, though considering her more than recent media exposure, that might be easier said than done. Superman was a bit more accepting of Corey's presence here since he was able to get the idea on why she could not leave even though she had a home that had her people there, unlike him. Considering what Naruto told us right now and from what we learned from Coriander herself, any attempt to return her to Tamarin even if it is the right thing to do is going to break the treaty between them and the Citadel. And if things are as bad as you say they are Stewart, I have to agree that she might be better off here with us. It's not something that is right to me, but we don't have a lot of options and I for one don't want to send her back to the Citadel if what she told us of her treatment is anything to go by. The other women in the league were full agreement with the idea, Diana being the more vocal one as she could not fathom the idea of Corey's own sister willingly allowing such demeaning acts be done to her own flesh and blood. No law-abiding and compassionate Amazon would stand for such things, that much was clear in her mind. As for Shara, she was not pleased to hear the situation herself, though she could also understand why the refugee princess had to stay. Even if she was a warrior, the mere idea of one of her own subjecting that to her own kindred, her own sister no less, disgusted the woman regardless of her secret mission here. The others were silent while Corey was with Naruto the whole time, her face gone from happy and cheerful to worried and anxious, no doubt wondering what exactly were the thoughts of the others concerning her stay here on Earth. Thankfully the League decided to let her stay on the condition that she be in contact with one of them at all times, though in hindsight that was something of a moot point since the only member of the League she had regular contact with was Naruto since she took root in Los Angeles alongside him. Naruto talked with the others about it a bit more and they were all right with the idea so far since Corey was certainly not an evil person and deserved some peace after 6 years of hell. The fact that her people were a warrior culture made Diana curious how her powers would match Corey's, but so far Diana was just pleased to make sure that the young woman would not be subjected to any more horrific treatment. Though naturally Flash was more than willing to flirt with her and even try to impress her with stories once in a while. Corey liked that though she still hanged out with Naruto more so than the others. The blonde sighed at this and was pleased that the others were willing to let Corey stay. That at least meant that this was one problem which was solved for now and he could tackle the next problem rearing its ugly head. Though in hindsight, the problem in question could no longer be solved since everyone in LA already knew of Corey, or rather Starfire, being a resident hero of the City of Angels. So the next best thing was to make sure that she was seen in a good light by the people. For the next few days after Corey got the thumbs up from the League to stay on Earth for as long as needed for her to be out of sight from the Citadel, she accompanied him on routine patrols around LA itself, and more than once, they were more than able to make the bad guys who caused all manner of trouble to think twice. That included even some of the more violent gangs in LA, since the two of them usually did not hold any punches when they decided to go out and play rough. Of course he made sure to convince Starfire not to send blasts at random since he doubted he had enough money to shell out from wanton property damage. And like before, another reason most of their fights were somewhat easier was half of the time the male bad guys would stare at his female alien companion like mad. Hell, he even caught one gang member staring at Corey with such a look of perverted interest he actually had a Woody in public. Even he, being the pervert that he was, would never do that. It would have embarrassed him to no end. And the thug was not the only one, as he had even caught a number of thugs in yet another hunt for the bad guys looking perversely at Starfire. And yes, all of them had morning wood, especially when Corey moved to talk to him while giving them one hell of a view. Though apparently it did not bother Corey one bit either, as she was more than willing to just focus on stopping her foes. Though she seemed to be more reasonable one between the two of them, since she tried to gently reason with the thugs to just give up so this could not go any further and no one would have to get hurt too badly. None of them obviously were willing to listen, but if he had to give a grade to Corey, he gave Corey an A for the effort. And even when he took Corey out and disguised her in human clothing after convincing her to do so, every man would stare at her, and even some women as well who obviously batted for the home team. He was very much expecting that, to be honest, since he was also bound to look at Corey like the men were. If they knew that he was her housemate and the only guy she willingly paraded in the nude in front of in their house, then even if they had no idea he was the Hokage, they were either going to admire him or kill him outright from jealousy so they could take her from him. In fact, a week or so later, he nearly busted a gut when he managed to find someone trying to sell doctored pictures of Corey, which in his mind were pale imitations of Corey. They got all her dimensions and even her skin tone wrong. The less reputable side of that was when he found some of the bad guys actually trying to use computers to try and have an exact copy of Corey in a porn video, even if their actions were not exactly very accurate in depicting Corey as he knew her. He put a halt to that attempt pretty damn quick and privately threatened to castrate the bastards by hand if he ever caught them making such garbage again. Corey had a great liking for food, and she even shared his love for ramen, especially when he introduced her to the said dish on one of their outings. And that made him really pleased, since he had worked his butt off to get the recipe right for his favorite dish of all time. He tried other food as well, though on occasion some of the food that Corey developed a liking for made him stop and give the food a look of apprehension. It became fairly obvious that he was going to be the designated cook in the meantime, since some of Corey's attempts to cook some dishes from her home world using Earth ingredients was not exactly pleasing, and for a brief moment, some of the resulting concoctions looked more like biohazard material than food. But on other occasions, the food was actually pretty darn good and she really liked cooking those dishes, so he did not have the heart to always say no. He did, however, make the decision to have a spare kitchen made, as well as buying a whole new set of kitchen gear and other things on the off chance some of the resulting dishes blew up for one reason or another. In LA, Naruto was once more on patrol early in the afternoon and was eager to finally wrap things up and head back home. He was usually in his Hokage garb and wore his mask on the off chance he ran into company that was anything but friendly and had intentions on his life. The only people he was going to trust with his identity were those he had developed a rapport with, and the League, and right now things seemed to be a lot calmer on that side of the spectrum. But as he ran over the building roofs and leaping over them, he also began to use his senjutsu to sense anything that might be amiss, with Kurama's chakra helping out as well. The blonde was going to finish this one run through an area of LA that had a serious problem with street gangs nearby, and the cops were working overtime to keep the criminals from causing any more havoc than they already were doing. Naruto moved in that direction to make sure that he could help them out if the situation got out of hand. Arkami forbid someone somehow got metahuman powers and decided to cause as much damage as possible for one reason or another. That was the last thing he wanted right now, since he had no way to have enough money to pay for whatever kind of property damage that was going to be the result of the whole affair. However, fate had other ideas, as he suddenly picked up a major spike of energy that was definitely not the human or natural make. He stopped as soon as he landed on the wall nearby and gripped it with chakra and began to home in on the source of that rather unsettling energy. Kurama, you feel that? Yeah, definitely high-level demonic energy too from the feel of it, but also mixed with chakra and rather thick and strong. It's able to match to some degree with that much demonic energy. Feels almost like that of a Jinchuriki's, but a lot thicker from some reason. Not that close, but I get the feeling. Better watch yourself, Kit. I have no idea what this is yet, but let's not take chance we do not have to. Naruto mentally nodded in agreement, and soon they took off, with him using his wired kunai to swing his way to his destination. And the closer he got to the strange energy, it was getting thicker, though he also sensed that the chakra of this person was trying to contain the demonic energy, reminding him of his past struggles with Kurama when they were still enemies of a sort and the fox wanted to escape and use his body for something he personally had no love for. It did not take long for him to get to the location of the energy source, and he saw something that really got him on full alert. Naruto could not help but look at the sight of several gang members on the ground, either comatose in fear or screaming in an undeniably unmanly fashion. The gang members did not really concern him, though. The one that did concern him was the one who did that to them. The person in question wore black robes and had red gem clasps to hold said robe there in place. He sensed things a bit more, and judging by what he was sensing, this person or whatever he or she was dangerous. Kurama was also in full agreement with him, as well as the Biju determined that the new arrival was female at the same time Naruto did. That girl is not normal, Naruto. I can feel that she's got an aura similar to mine when I was still your enemy, and she's emitting a smell that's both human and not half human. Right. Be careful here. Until we know more of her, we can't be sure if she has some way to suppress her intentions and her powers. That would mean she has a way to mask her true intentions from you and me, and that is bad news all around. Naruto moved closer while trying his best not to look the least bit threatening to the foe before him, or rather the foe in potential if he was being honest with himself. His danger senses were on full alert mode, and he was sure that the woman was going to try something if this whole meeting went down south. Who are you? The figure did not answer him, and Naruto frowned mentally at this and decided to try fishing for more information on the new arrival. Look, I don't know why you are here, but the silent treatment thing is getting very stale. I don't know who you are either, so I am hoping this does not turn into a brawl that is totally not needed. It's your move. The figure said nothing for a bit longer until speaking, and quickly Naruto picked up that the speaker was female. You're the one I sensed a few days ago. Huh. Not the most intelligent of answers, and he knew he could come up with better ones than that, but that was to be expected since he had no idea what made her say that. That is until recalling that in order to fight at an even keel and possibly talk down Kori when they first met, he had resorted to using his chakra shroud made from Kurama's chakra, even if it was not at full power at that time. But that still did not make him feel better as he tried to figure out just what sort of person was before him. He briefly tapped into Kurama's chakra, but like before did not use the full chakra shroud, and he was surprised by the energy she was emitting. It felt similar to how he felt when he used Kurama's chakra prior to when they became full allies, proving that Kurama was right in stating that the energy was indeed like when he and the fox were not allies and friends. The energy was foul and demonic in nature, and while there was a human energy signature there, it seemed to be constantly at war with the demonic side. Way too much like when he and Kurama were still enemies of a sort. This was more than enough to get him and his partner worried, since this was usually bad news. This was balanced naturally by the fact that she was using her human self to control or hold it back, meaning that she had not fallen to the call of her dark powers just yet. Well, this is certainly interesting. She would be considered a half-human, half-demon being for sure now. That even possible, Kurama? Possible, though extremely rare in the world we left behind. Our father mentioned nothing of the whole thing to us, since technically real demons don't meddle in the worlds of mortals. I can wager a guess though that in this world the situation might be different from what we're used to. But, how? That depends on the way the parents met. But I guess we should not try to speculate. We might end up causing more harm than good. Let's not forget how you turned out after you got me, and I'm willing to bet that despite the differences, she might have been in the same boat as you were before you and I became allies. This was interesting, and eventually he decided to try his luck and figure out just what she wanted from him. Kurama also had a point as well. Whatever circumstances led to this girl having her powers would not be explored until he was able to get a better read on her. But right now he needed to try and fish for what the reason was that she came all the way out here for him. Okay. You sensed me, so what exactly do you want from me? Raven, or rather, Rachel Roth could not help but look at the blonde shinobi before her. She had seen enough for herself to know that he was indeed very powerful and capable as well. The energy she felt also was more than powerful. Its nature was similar yet not to his power. Rachel mentally forced herself not to think of the demon's name lest she lost control of herself like last time. There was too much at stake for her to lose control and composure now as she had made it this far. She focused on the blonde who was looking at her through what appeared to be a mask, and while most would have thought he was being oddly casual before her, she knew better. She was no martial artist and was no ninja herself, but she could see that the man before her with all the power was not someone to be looked down on, and after seeing him in action previously, she was willing to be more cautious here. I sought you out because I wish to learn. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the back of his head at that one. Learn. Learn how you can control such power. Power like that should not be possible for one to control without some measure of aid, yet you do so flawlessly. Either you have used some sort of ritual to control the darker aspect, or you have purified it somehow to make it obey you. Naruto had a sneaking idea that perhaps him using Kurama's power in conjunction with his chakra and senjutsu would have somehow attracted her. And in hindsight he could understand why that was the case, since the sheer amount of chakra he could unleash even at half power was very potent. Though he had no idea just why she would come all the way here, and seek him out personally to learn from him, since technically he was not a half-demon like her despite the advantages and traits he got from Kurama and the power of senjutsu. He had no doubt that this was certainly going to be a major concern for all involved, but he certainly could not turn away the woman in the first place. She went out of her way to come here to look for him, and he would have to be a very stupid man to say no to her right now of all things, since she did do all of this to find him. Let me get this right. You came here to seek me out so I can teach you to control your powers. The nod she gave might not have been seen by others who were not able to pick up slight body movements, but he had no problem seeing it. Raven knew that as well, and she could not help but stay there and hope that his response to her request was not going to be turned down by him. She did not fault the others who tried to help her control her father's dark gifts, but she felt that none of them could help her, as the demonic side of her was becoming a lot more serious in trying to take full control of her. She needed a new way to control her darker self and to also find someone who could understand what it was like to be in her shoes. Naruto knew that this was definitely something that he had some level of experience in. How else did he manage to wrest chakra from Kurama so long ago? But he did keep in mind that this was a different world with different rules, so he would have to do things carefully so the whole thing might not come back to bite him in the butt. Alright, let's talk first, because I think I need to clear out some things before we go into something that might make things really hard. Raven nodded, and soon they headed out to an area outside of the city. It was not long before they came there and Naruto decided to talk about his origins. Instead of being wide-eyed or anything, Raven was willing to listen, making Naruto feel that perhaps due to her status she was not easily going to be worried about learning that he was not from another world and possibly not the same as her. That could be either a good or bad thing, but now was not the time to make a bad move. He then explained the presence of Kurama and explained the way on how he was able to gain Kurama's power and eventually become friends with the Biju. Raven was very surprised by that, even more so when Naruto finally revealed the existence of the other Biju inside of himself. But instead of fleeing or calling him mad, she accepted it and seemed quite impressed that he was able to handle that much power in him without going mad, even if the other Biju's power were not at full strength. She did not reveal too much of as Naruto had expected, no doubt not wanting to tip her own hand too early. Not to mention, judging from the way she acted, he had very good reason not to talk about her past. He had no problem respecting that, though he kept in mind to be careful. Still, despite the thick scent of dark power, he could see that through her chakra, Raven was a good person who was only like this in order to control the darker side of her nature. It made sense therefore that she would seek him out. That fact, however, made him wonder if she had teachers prior to him who had sought to help her control her full powers. There's no way that there was no one in a world like this that had no idea on how to teach someone like Raven on how to control her powers. So he was now in a very interesting position. Either he could refuse Raven but help her seek out someone else, or he could let her stay with him and Cory and help her get some training to help make her struggle in controlling her darker self easier. Which was it going to be? Later, Naruto could not help but wonder just what he had just thrown himself into. Having Batman allow Starfire to live with him in his place was not easy, but now this was definitely pushing the limits of what was tolerable. And he had no doubt that if anyone found out he was the only guy living in a house with two women, then they could easily be seen as him taking advantage of the women in his place. Then again, one had to keep in mind that both women happened to be anything but normal. Starfire had some serious strength, flight abilities, a very strong life force in her powers, and of course, Raven was more than able to fight in her own right using her own demonic powers, which was going to be of some concern if she somehow lost control of her abilities. That was really going to make a lot of alarm bells go off, and he would be the subject of questioning if the time came, since he allowed her to stay under his roof. Right now, both women had decided to reside in his place, as he knew that he was by far the only one they appeared to be on good terms with. Starfire was quite pleased to have company, even if he had to privately admit that Raven was about as sociable as a tree stump. But at least she was not trying to blast the Tamarinine teen into nothing but paste when Cory was being friendly with her. That was a good sign at least, though it still made him wonder just how he was going to explain Raven's presence in his home to the Dark Knight once he showed up, and who knew how the rest of the League were going to take it. He looked to see the meditating woman in question while Starfire was currently looking at a number of flowers in the garden, and he sighed while sitting cross-legged on the branch of a nearby tree. He knew that this was going to be one those days once the others in the League came here, but at least he was going to have a chance to get to know the two who were now his residents, though he could only hope that he could handle the stress. One thing he had to deal with on a regular basis back in the elemental nations when his wives were still alive and they were all in the early stage of married life, was keeping the various personalities they had from driving him nuts. Sure, it was kind of cool to be a guy with more than one wife, but no one bothered to look at the more negative aspects of the whole thing. Namely, when one took into account how different the women were from one another, and no doubt sooner or later, conflicting personalities would clash and all hell broke loose for all around the area, one type of incident that he had dealt with plenty of times. And now here he was again, and he could not help but sigh once more as he looked up into the sky. One thing is for sure, at least things were not going to be boring. Kurama snickered in the back his head and replied. True that. You are a real magnet for trouble, kid. I wonder what is going to happen next. Please stop. I already have an alien woman who has no concept of modesty in my house as she dislikes wearing too many clothes, a woman who has power over plants who I already happen to be in a relationship with, though how far it's going to go is up for debate, and now a half-human half-demon woman who is as sociable as Sai was and has the laziness to some extent of Shikamaru. The last thing I need is another set of problems to come in and bite me right in the ass, Kurama. Fate always has a surprise waiting for you, Naruto. I thought you already knew that. Naruto mentally groaned as he moved on to check on them. So far it seemed that they were getting along and that was good. The last thing he wanted was for them to start throwing energy attacks on one another when they were supposed to be roommates and friends of all things. He did however keep in mind that Raven was only going to fight if she got attacked directly. As for Starfire, she was a gentle sort and very friendly if not a bit too rambunctious. So as long as he was able to keep the two calm for now, things would be stable. The only thing he had to worry about was how to explain the presence of Raven in his home to the rest of the league. First he had to deal with Batman and then the rest. All he could hope for was that this would all work out and not bite him in the darn neck. Unknown to Naruto, his newfound guest Raven did indeed have some people after her. Some wanted her power for themselves, others wanted to end her life despite the fact that she was in no way, shape or form accepting of her demonic half. They were not alone either, as a number of other people had begun to gather and move to Los Angeles, but their target was not Raven alone, but him as well. This just got complicated. Deep in the ocean over a rough stormy day, a U.S. submarine was currently on a routine scanning patrol of the ocean floor. This sub, however, was no ordinary naval combat vessel. It was one of the submarines tasked with carrying a small but no less lethal array of nuclear-armed missiles used for intercontinental attacks. The sub-captain knew that this was a new patrol route that he had been assigned to, but he was hoping that this trip would not become a major pain in the ass, and just be another mission run even if they were in international waters, though this was a new path selected by the head honchos back home. However, his hopes were going to be proven false as one of his crew, a sonar operations officer, called it in. "Con sonar, I am picking up an incoming contact. Out here. Do we have any idea who it is?" The officer listened and was quickly surprised by the fact that the sonar signature did not match any signature that was recorded in the U.S. Navy records. "Negative, sir. Unknown contact's sonar signature is not known on records." Any other comment was thrown out the window as they now found themselves under attack as the unknown ship rammed them. The captain immediately orders all hands to man battle stations and to send word of the sudden and unprovoked attack by unknown hostiles. Outside of the sub, the other submersibles come into view, and it's perfectly clear that the subs were not built by any of the known navies in the world itself. Their designs were utterly different, and they were not alone, as human-like figures were seen moving along with what resembled jet skis, though these moved in water. Normally any human without some form of personal protection or in a submersible would have died from the sheer pressure and lack of oxygen in such depths. These people, on the other hand, had no problem dealing with both and seemed to be more at home in the environment that they were now in. And for good reason. They were not human, but Atlanteans. In the main vessel, the Atlantean crews worked on their consoles as a shadowy figure who sat in what obviously was the command chair of the vessel looked on. Soon it was clear that they were going to deal with the vessel without even bothering to state their intentions. The commander, however, was pleased to hear one of the officers speak. "The surface ship has been disabled, Your Highness." "Good, then let them sink." However, the call had managed to make it through to the surface and backup was on the way. "Back in LA. Why the heck am I here again? Oh yeah, I'm here to buy enough food to feed a pack of wolves. Damn, for a woman with a body models would kill for. Cory's got an appetite that I only ever saw with the Akamiki clan." Naruto mentally groaned as he was now pushing at least 2 shopping carts filled up to his chest with food items. Cory indeed had a hell of an appetite, that much he had already borne witness to, and now he had run out of food a bit too early for his liking. At least he could take heart in the fact that only the food he had in his house fridge was gone and now resided in said beauty's gut, since he made it a point to carry spare food in his scrolls. That was why he still had food, though now he was going to have to work on overtime to buy enough food for himself, Raven, and Starfire. He felt like he was dealing with a drop-dead gorgeous but very slim and fit member of the Akamiki clan when it came to Cory's appetite. Then the Kamishi did not get any extra mass when she ate. The one bit of good news he had though was that at least Raven was not as ravenous as Starfire was when it came to food. That was something he was thankful for, since if she was as hungry as Starfire was, then 2 carts worth of food was not going to cut it. He placed that aside and began to dig into the wallet he had as he got to the counter and took out a large wad of $1,000 bills to pay for the food he had purchased. The man who was there to man the counter the blonde had lined up on whistled the very second he saw the 2 carts and the food they had. "Man, that is a lot of food. You plan on having one hell of a party at some point, sir?" Naruto grinned a bit and replied. "Let's just say that my housemates have very big appetites." The man laughed gently and replied. "I hear that. I had some dorm mates back home who ate like there was no tomorrow." The two continued until Naruto's orders were done and paid for in record, and for that he was thankful. Though it still made a lot of people who watched him boggle at the amount of food he bought. He chuckled a bit to himself as he wondered how they would have reacted if they learned of his old running buddy Choji. Now if he was here and met Cory, then he would have competition for food all the time, and nothing made his now long-pasted deceased friend fight for food harder than having competition. He got them all stored away and headed back to his pad. He had no workloads today and had gone off to get some time alone with his new roommates. Not in that sense, but to make sure that they were all getting along and he would be able to call in on the league and get them up to speed on the situation he found himself in. Yeah, tell them about the half-human, half-demon babe who is now residing with you. You got a better suggestion, Kurama? 'Cause if you do, I'm all ears. Nope, just voicing it out. Seriously though, this is going to be a very interesting situation for you, since I can bet that Raven being around is going to make life interesting. Naruto groaned mentally at that as he started the SUV and headed back to his hideout, and with his supplies, all he could hope for was that he did not make too many of these trips. At least Raven did not eat too much, and she was more of the eat enough to both nourish and enjoy, but no binging and the like. She was a major fan of books though, something that he found out after a few days, since all she usually did was read most of the time. He looked at the new pile of books he bought for her, since she did make a request for them, and she was very thorough on what she wanted. She had at times moved out of her robe, and when he got to see her figure in a leotard, man, for all her gloomy atmosphere, Raven was drop-dead gorgeous. One thing was certain, even if she was trying to be dark and mysterious, along with magically dangerous woman, she was still very beautiful, demonic blood and origins aside to be sure. Geez, I really have to control myself. True that, you could always visit your boss and hang out with Pamela if you feel up to it, so you can forget those ideas for the time being. I'm sure they can be more than willing to help you deal with the stress of the whole idea of two women in the same building as you. Naruto did not like the snicker in that tone on Kurama's voice and replied with sarcasm. Oh sure, do the mattress dance with my boss, and the same with someone who I am trying to help turn her life around and make her see other choices that she make. As tempting as that would be, I know that's not always the right idea. Kurama snickered at that even more and then spoke to Naruto seriously. Be that as it may, Kit, sooner or later you will have to tell them about her, and the way I see it, better they hear it from you than someone else with less than noble intentions. Plus, there is the fact that sooner or later, you will have to talk about me and your origins, all of your origins. Naruto nodded in agreement with that. Sooner or later he would have to tell them, even more so in revealing Kurama and the powers that his longtime ally had given him. But like before, he had a feeling that it might not be so well received in several areas. You know that it is going to cause some serious reactions, Kurama. You and I are allies, but once they learned of your past actions, they might not see it that way. Not to mention the fact that if I do come clean with them about my past and my connection to you, that also means I have to tell them about my whole life. Not too sure how they would react to what they would learn if I tell them, but I can bet that if I reveal my martial situation, it is going to raise eyebrows. Of that I have no doubt. Even more so for your Amazon companion, since as hot as she is, I doubt Diana would take kindly to you being able to have more than one wife, due to customs. And let's not even begin with the big blue boy scout, you know, as Superman, but let's face it, it's all part of the whole package deal that is your life. If they can't accept it, then that is their decision, and you can always choose to place aside your league membership and strike solo if it comes to that. Though if Starfire and Raven are anything to go by, you can bet the term solo may never apply to you. Naruto chuckled at the truth in that statement, since they were his partners in a sense. Diana's reaction also worried him, since he had learned enough from her about the reasons why men were disliked or outright hated in Themyscira, though she personally did not have a visceral hatred for men as some of her sisters would. However, he could wager a guess she would not take kindly to the idea of him being married to more than one woman. But if she met the female ninja that he had been married to, she might change her mind. As he drove deeper into his home location, he parked the SUV and got out to get the supplies and heard a voice which he recognized easily as the cheerful nature told him who it was. Friend Naruto. It's good to see you. Naruto smiled and turned to say hi to Cory, only to see that she was once more fully naked in front of him, and judging by the fact that she was covered in water, she had just gotten out of the shower. His eyes could not help but stare at the droplets of water that were on her form from head to toe, along with on her hips, breasts, and the like. And adding the fact that as she flew to land before him feet first, Naruto was given one hell of a full frontal show by the drop-dead gorgeous female Tamarinine, who was smiling radiantly at him for his return. Had it not been for the fact that he was quite used to seeing naked women, and he was aware that Cory had no problem with being naked, he would have thought she was seducing him on purpose. Even more so when said naked woman hugged him tightly, pressing her more than well-formed and ample bust to him. This was a major test of his ability to resist the desire to grab the orange-toned beauty with red hair and green eyes and have his way with her. Now most guys would have urged him on to do it or kick him aside to take his place, but that would never happen since Naruto was not going to go to that length even if it seemed that Corey was not the least bit worried by that. Yet again he was thankful his mega pervert of a godfather was not around to see this. He'd be shouting with glee and speaking along the lines of Ryo and Gaki, meaning him, in ways he was not keen on remembering. As soon as Corey released him after he struggled to tell her he needed air, she gave him a look of apology. I am sorry for my over-enthusiastic greeting, friend Naruto. I am just pleased to see you so soon. Hey, I kind of figured that. Anyway, now that I am here, we should get some of the stuff back into the kitchen. And Corey, I know this is going to sound redundant to you, but can you please put some clothes on? Corey gave a pout that was once more cute and yet seductive at the very same time, coupled with her more than beautiful figure, it was devastating. Must I? Naruto sighed and replied. Yes, I normally don't have a problem with that since you are comfortable about this sort of thing, but for the sake of learning new things about this world, please wear some clothing, Corey. It's not that I don't find you attractive or anything because I really do, but because it is not recommended that you be like this in front of every guy you meet. Corey's pout faded and then she smiled as she spoke. Not to worry, friend Naruto. I will not do this in front of others, since I planning of only doing this in front of you after all since I trust you. Naruto could not help but be gobsmacked at that comment, though naturally there was a part of him being a man that was saying thank you in all the known volume settings. How in the heck would someone like him supposed answer a woman when she said that she would be naked only for him to look at her? Any attempt to try and speak was cut short however when a call came in. Naruto was quick to get himself focused on the task at hand. It seemed that the call also made Corey become more serious as she headed off to get herself dressed. As soon as she did so, the two of them were there before the communication screen provided by Batman. Raven was there but deemed it best to remain well away from the viewer system to avoid being caught. She was well aware of the fact that her presence would be seen as a threat by someone, who she did not know yet, but she was not taking a chance. That proved to be a wise idea as Batman appeared on the screen. Hokage, Starfire, we've got a situation, we need the both of you at the watchtower now, we will fill you in on the situation once you get here. Both nodded and when Batman was gone, Raven came out and Starfire greeted her in her usual fashion. Friend Raven, we are going on a mission with the League. You wish to join us? Raven shook her head and replied. I can't, not right now, I cannot leave at all until I am assured that I am being hunted no longer by those who seek my powers. Starfire was not happy to hear that and wished that her newfound friend with Naruto would be able to join the League. After all, they accepted her, they would be accepting of Rave too, would they not? Naruto however was quick to see Raven's discomfort with the idea and spoke to Corey to make sure that she did not do something that could be seen as an intrusion by Raven in her own private thoughts and emotions. Raven has a point, Starfire. For now she will be fine here, I made sure to find very good books for her and we can meet up with her after the mission, okay? Starfire reluctantly nodded and soon Naruto used his Hirishin Jutsu and now they were in the watchtower. The others were there, with the marked exception of Flash and Hawkgirl, which was a bit odd on his view. That was something that he would have to work on in the later time frame when he could. The only team members left were Superman, Green Lantern, Batman, Jean, and Wonder Woman, some of the heavy hitters, so whatever case the other two were working on in their own time they could handle. Good to see you made it. Superman greeted them and soon it was Naruto who spoke. What exactly is the emergency? John replied. We got word that a U.S. Navy submarine named the Defiant on a routine patrol in the Atlantic Ocean was suddenly under attack by unknown subs as well. The weird thing is that there's no known path used by other nations' navies. We don't know for certain what happened or who was responsible, but since the ship was operating in international waters it could be anyone, or anything for that matter. What makes it worse is the fact that the sub in question is carrying nukes. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that and began to try and figure out just where he heard of it before. It quickly clicked in his mind just where he heard of them. He had done research on the military of the US and was quite impressed by what he was able to read. The technology here gave them a major advantage when compared to his homeland, though back home they did their own tech research, though like before, most of it was for military application before being given civilian versions. However, that also meant that he knew what subs were and blanched quickly at the idea. Hold it, we're going into the ocean. In the Javelin. Naruto was not too comfortable with the idea of being underwater as the multi-purpose jet was moving to where the sub was last reported to have been. He had managed to chat with both Isobu and Kuko and they had provided him a chakra technique that they knew could help him move and breath underwater. Which he had been working on ever since he got the message that the League had to check it out since the last report from said sub mentioned being hit by unknowns while on routine patrol, which in Navy speak was bad news. The sight of the world underneath the ocean certainly did not improve his mood either as he looked around. This was soon seen by Diana who spoke to him. Are you all right, Hokage? Honestly, no. This whole idea of being underwater is really freaking me out. And coming from a guy like me, Diana Heim, it's already saying a lot as it is. Are you sure that the Javelin can handle being this deep underwater? Batman replied to that. Positive. We have the whole Javelin fleet rated for space travel after all, so underwater operations is not all that unexpected. That did little alleviate Naruto's feelings, but he sucked it up and focused on the task at hand. Naruto was thankful at least that even in this veritable flying sardine he could gather Senjutsu chakra. One good thing in his mind about being this deep in the ocean is that there was plenty of life here and the nature energy here was not affected too heavily by pollution, not like in the cities. Kori looked at Naruto and could see that he was really edgy about being deep in the water and was still in the process of calming down. She decided to hug Naruto and spoke to him in a very consoling tone. You will be fine, friend Naruto. I will help you as best I can. Naruto could not help but feel a bit more amused by the action of the Tamarinine, and he was busy to also try and not allow himself to react to the closeness of the woman. The others were looking on as well, though with obviously different takes on the blonde's rather awkward situation. John ignored the whole thing. Jean merely looked on impassively. Superman was trying not to laugh. Batman, well, he's Batman, and Diana was merely looking with a raised eyebrow at the situation. Any other comment, however, was put to rest when they finally came to the exact location. The U.S. Navy said to them that the sub had gone down and had been deemed lost. They looked around to find the cause of the sub going down, and Kori got serious as well. Much to Naruto's relief, as he was about to let his more perverted side have some fun, he decided to tap into his sage mode to try and search for the chakra signatures of the crew to determine if they were still alive. He soon found them and focused on their exact location, but suddenly he picked up several other signatures. We are not alone down here. It was not long before Naruto's comment was proven true when they spotted several ships heading in their direction. John was quick to act as he realized that these ships were not of any sub he knew of. He might have been gone for a while from Earth, but he still knew enough to know the kind of subs that were used. These were definitely not subs he knew of. Now we know just who attacked the Defiant. But those are not any subs I know of. Batman then spoke. I'll take the Javelin. Let's see if we can't ID these attackers and hopefully prevent a shootout. That, however, was out of their hands when the ship tried to destroy them, and John replied. Looks like they are not in the mood to talk. Superman sighed as he knew where this was going to lead as he and the others got out. Batman would handle the Javelin and the rest of them would deal with the attackers, who he knew of well enough. I was hoping it would not come to this. I can only hope Aquaman is here and can reason with his people before this gets really ugly. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that as he summoned the chakra shroud. Who? Aquaman. Someone I knew of a few years back. He's the leader of the Atlanteans, and they are the ones outside. Kori then spoke. Why then do they have such hostile intent towards others, friend Superman? Superman gave a slight scowl as he was all too familiar on the why of it and decided to give the short version to Kori as well as the others. Long story short, Lex Luthor captured Aquaman and planned to experiment on him when I met him. Needless to say, a friend of mine, Lois from the Daily Planet, and myself helped free him. That incident though made him less than happy with the people on land, and we had to convince him not to go to war with the surface world. If he's with them, then perhaps I can convince him to stop this before this gets way out of hand, since he does listen to what I said. I just hope he's in a reasonable mood when we meet him. Batman spoke once more as he managed to move the Javelin away from some more attacks. Then I suggest we get to it, though we're going to have to knock some sense into them first. Talking to them isn't going to happen if we're not alive to do it. The heroes who could fight in the ocean soon left the Javelin, and Superman decided to try and call out to Aquaman and prevent this from devolving into a shooting match. The Kryptonians' efforts were not going to bear fruit though, as the sub attacked them all, and so they had no choice but to fight them all and keep themselves alive long enough to stop this from going any further. Both Superman and Wonder Woman soon focused their strength to take on a much larger vessel to allow the Javelin to avoid the weapons it had on target on the smaller fighter. But once they managed to deal with that one, then two more of the same massive subs were coming in, and the Atlanteans were now going on into the fight using what would be considered the underwater version of jet skies. The League members were now caught in a fight with the Atlanteans, and there was no ifs or buts about it. Naruto was thankful that the chakra technique that the two waterborne members of the Nine in him was helping him not to only breathe but move as well. He dodged another attempt by an Atlantean soldier to skewer him and then managed to land a kick into the man's face. The impact might not have been that powerful due to the water nearby, but the blow was enough to send the man off that sea vehicle of his and allow Naruto to quickly grab it, and then after a brief struggle guided that thing to slam into another one being piloted by one of the Atlantean soldiers. Hat forced the second Atlantean to jump clear, only for him to slugged by Naruto in the face before the blonde took out his sword to block an incoming strike to his head from another Atlantean. Kori was not far behind as her own energy shroud allowed her to move through the water as well, and she soon fired several blasts of energy at her attackers. The blasts destroyed their rides and forced them to face her in hand-to-hand combat when she charged. But she knocked them aside with her energy-covered fists and feet as well. She even went further by grabbing a nearby boulder from the seafloor and tossed it at another one of the massive vessels. Superman was also doing the same thing though in his case, he was tangling with the subs alongside Diana. John used his power ring to form walls and beams to knock the Atlanteans aside and defend the others. When they were attacking him of all people, he formed a barrier and held them off just as John came in and took them down. One of the Atlanteans tried to take down the Martian, only for the Martian become intangible and the blow missed the intended target and John knocked the man out. Diana was next to defend herself as some of the Atlanteans fired their vehicles' weapons at her, forcing her to defend herself using her bracers. The second the Atlantean stopped, she rushed in, and despite the fact that she should be slowed down by being in the water, she got into the man's face and landed one hell of a haymaker on the chin. She soon blocked another one coming at her with her bracers. Before moving to use her lasso, she caught the attacker and yanked him off his ride, and turned him into the head of an impromptu mace to send two more of his fellows out for the count. Batman was not far behind either, as he used the firepower of the javelin to fight off the larger subs and was thankful for the extra armor and firepower the multi-environment fighter gave him in a place like this. It was not long, however, that more of the Atlanteans were coming in to reinforce their fellows, and this time around, someone else got into the act. The former Hokage looked at the new arrival and he could tell immediately that this man was the head honcho of the bunch before him. The fact that he carried one wicked-looking trident and acted like a king added to the whole deal as he readied his swords since they were heading in his direction. The fact that a fairly high number of Atlantean soldiers accompanied him also made Naruto more than aware that this was not going to be a good situation if things went south. Halt. You and your companions are in the territory of Atlantis. Naruto snorted and spoke, as the chakra shroud he used also allowed his voice to be heard. I don't recall seeing any signs that said this section of the ocean floor had been claimed. That statement seemed to have stuck a chord in the Atlantean soldiers as they glared at the blonde, though the leader of the bunch, who he could guess was Aquaman, the same one that Superman spoke of, kept calm. And it was not long before the big blue boy scout himself came into the scene. Aquaman. Even with the neutral look the man had on his face, Naruto managed to see a flicker of recognition on his face when he turned to look at Superman himself. So we meet again, Superman. The Kryptonian and the Atlantean did indeed know one another, and that was a good thing in everyone's books, as they hoped that Superman could finally convince the man to let them go and save those people trapped in the submarine. I am sorry for the intrusion into the borders of Atlantis, but we came here to answer the distress call of the Defiant that was hit here. They should have stayed on the surface where they belonged. The disdain in the blonde man's voice for the lives of the sub they attacked grated at Naruto's nerves a bit more. While he could understand the idea of forcing people off one's territorial borders, but what these Atlanteans did was really pushing the limit on what was acceptable in protecting one's territory. And he made his dislike for the action along with the man's attitude clear. Did they attack you first? What was that? Naruto sighed mentally at the man but kept his cool, as he knew that this was not the right time to lose his temper. They had better things to do than continue with a debate with him. If I recall right, the only reason one would retaliate was if they were attacked first. So that leads to my question from before. Did they attack you first? No, and that is of no consequence now. No consequence. Has all this time in the seawater pickled your brain or what? In case you haven't noticed, they had done nothing hostile on your people to warrant this little stunt. Had you let them leave without incident, then none of us would be here. But no, you decided to sink them and endanger the crew of that ship, which, if memory serves in my day, is an open act of aggression that makes you and your people the hostiles here. That in turn makes this stunt of your people an open declaration of war. Aquaman was not pleased by that, though his face was neutral as he spoke. The only proof of his hostility was the fact that he held his trident tighter. The same went for his escorts, though the blonde king did nothing to order an attack on the former Hokage. Are you threatening my people? The blonde snorted and replied. I'm not. I'm just stating facts. I happen to know why you don't like the people up there, and Cammy knows there's plenty of people who are very much the worst kind. But that is no excuse for starting a war when no one attacked you, and even more so when you condemn innocent people who took no part in attacking your own to begin with. You let those people leave alive, and perhaps it might help ease the tensions around here. Don't. And well, let's just put it this way, if it's a war you want, then it's a war you shall get. The Atlanteans were not too happy about that, but they did nothing as Aquaman did not give them the signal to attack. The blonde king, however, looked at the one before him and wondered just why he felt that his words had more weight in them. He may look young, but Aquaman felt that he was far older than he actually was. His words have a ring of truth in them. Diana then spoke as calmly as she could, knowing full well she was addressing a king and thus a fellow royal. Despite what many would think about her people's recognized distrust or at times hatred of men, this did not apply to all of them. Diana was well aware that Atlanteans were a whole different bunch altogether, and thus they were to be respected due to not only their power but the fact that they were of a different race as well. Besides, despite her less than stellar meeting with Lantern, she had begun to get used to being around her male colleagues in the League. Please, they will drown here. Aquaman looked at the League and then to the sub, thinking on what had to be done. And he finally decided on a course of action. Very well, take the crew of that vessel, but that vessel stays right where it is. That did not sit well with one of the League, however. What? No way is that going to happen. Lantern came there and it was obvious that he was less than happy with the option given to them by Aquaman. The others were none too happy about the idea either, but they also had to admit that with time against them, they had to choose, either take the ship and risk making this situation a lot more complicated, or take Aquaman's offer to take the crew yet leave the nukes and stop this from going any further. Aquaman's next speech only served to anger the former Marine even more. What makes you believe that you are in a position to argue? The former Marine was none too happy with that statement and was about to power up until Superman stopped him. A good thing he did that too, since the Atlanteans leveled their weapons at Lantern. Lantern, we have no other choice here. If we don't move now, the crew drowns. I don't like the idea of leaving those nukes either, and I wish we can get them and the crew, but time's against us. That was finally enough to get John to calm down, but Naruto hardly doubted that this was the last time the former Marine was going to let this go unresolved. He actually liked that idea even if he and Stuart was not exactly buddies or anything. Naruto was not blind to the fact that a number of the Atlantean soldiers were looking at Diana and Corey intently. And being who he was and what he experienced, he had no problem seeing the less than pure thoughts flying around in their heads. Thus he made sure to send a bit of killing intent with Senjutsu chakra mixed in and Karamas to warn them to back off. That worked as the leering Atlantean soldiers moved away, though it was clear that his action did not go unnoticed by everyone in sight range of him. Yet they had more pressing matters at hand, so they did not continue the whole thing. The good news was that they were now able to get the people of the sub out and take them back to the mainland. Naruto was quick to get up to the surface and be thankful to be out of the ocean for now. Corey was kind enough to help him up to the javelin while Diana gave him a smile of thanks for helping her when her attackers tried to double team her much earlier. That, however, allowed him to hear the conversation between Aquaman and Superman. This doesn't have to always end like this. And what would you propose? Go to the World Assembly and air your grievances to the people there, as they too represent their nations in this world. The blonde looked at Superman warily and replied. Am I supposed to come in there act like a beggar? No, you're to come there as a king and ruler of Atlantis. Thankfully it seemed that the crew of the U.S. naval vessel were now being taken away to safety by the others, though he had no doubt Lantern was anything but happy. Even more so with the idea that they had to leave the nukes behind, and if he were to hazard a guess, the head honchos of the Navy were not going to be too happy with that either. In the watch tower, Superman was not all that happy with his current situation in dealing with an obviously irate admiral of the U.S. Navy. The submarine's crew were back safely, but the report the said crew gave to their higher-ups had the brass in the U.S. military up in arms. Not that Naruto could blame them. When he read up all he could on these nuclear missiles, they all sounded like the high-tech version of the Kinjutsu Hotaru had on her body that could level battlefields and poison the land. That last part did not sit well with the blonde, with him being a sage and all that, and he did not even want to guess the number of people who would be killed in such an event a weapon like that was used. He was thankful that none of his enemies back home had not developed the tech to make these nukes, since the last thing he felt his world needed were those things. The blonde looked at Superman, who at the moment was working hard to calm the man, and he then turned to John and Diana. The former Marine was not in the best of moods, to say the very least, and Diana was doing her best to try and calm the man. He already knew just why they were arguing. I am telling you, leaving those nukes with that madman is a bad idea. Who knows what the hell he is going to use those nukes for? Aquaman is not a madman, Lantern. He is a king, leader of his people, and he is only doing his best to defend his people. Lantern was not all that happy, however, and relied in kind. And who is going to protect the people on the surface from him? I am not going to let those nukes just lie there and be used by him or his posse. And with that in mind, he turned around and headed out. Diana tried to reason with Lantern, but Naruto was there and shook his head at the Amazon princess. John's made up his mind, Diana Heim, and to be honest, I can't exactly blame him either. I know that Aquaman is trying his best to defend his people. I would do what I could if I was in his place as well. Hell, I did the same thing myself more than once as Hokage. But the fact remains that John is honor-bound to defend the people here, and thus he has more than ample reason to react the way he did. Those nukes are very much a cause of concern for anyone, and John has a right to be worried. Both of them are not going to budge on the matter. I see, but what can we do? All we can do is wait and see if we can't find a solution that can at least work for both sides, though I can bet 10 to 1 that Aquaman is not having an easy time of it. And Naruto was right, for Aquaman was facing one of his own people who was making demands, though in this case, it was for something of a more offensive nature towards the people on the surface. In the city of Atlantis, throne room. Aquaman, Or rather, Arthur was currently facing one of his military officers, in fact one of the more recognized heads of the military, one General Brack, who was currently speaking about the recent altercation with the surface dwellers. Next to him was his brother Orm, and his wife Mara. Orm was one of his advisors apart from being his half-brother, and his wife Mara was nearby holding their child and serving as his consciousness on what was being spoken to him. My king, we cannot just stand back and let the surface dwellers do what they please. Not any longer. These barbarians treat the ocean as if they have a right to do with as they please. They dump their garbage into the seas, they pollute the waters and foul once fertile hunting and harvesting grounds. They take all and give nothing back. They sail their weapons over the seas with impunity. It is high time that we put a stop to this before our people will suffer from their neglect and arrogance. And we in the military have a solution. And what is that? Brack was serious about the whole matter and replied. Our military has the technology, the will, the resources, and the manpower. The surface dwellers have yet to have anything that can match us conventionally. Our military can invade and sweep through the surface world and remove these barbarians from the lands once and for all. Aquaman knew immediately that it meant total war, and unlike Brack, he knew full well that despite their appearance, the surface dwellers were anything but primitive. Yes, they lacked certain things that the Atlanteans had in far better numbers than they did, but that hardly meant that it was going to be as easy as Bra would want to believe. Not only that, there were others among the surface dwellers who had more than enough power to be major dangers to his people, the recently formed Justice League being among them. He also had no desire to lunge Atlantis into a war that would lead to the deaths of who knew how many of his people. General Brack, I decide policy here as king, not you. Brack then did something that got on the blonde Atlantean's nerves as he actually moved forward and showed a more aggressive and demanding posture and tone. These were not good things to show before one's own leader. But we cannot delay any more, my king. We should end this all now before they cause even more destruction with their barbaric disregard for the oceans. Aquaman's eyes narrowed as he looked at the still defiant Brack. He was still trying to digest the fact that not only was Brack defying him, but also acting as if he was going to force him to take military action. This was something that had troubled Aquaman of late, as he knew that Brack's words were not without merit. He too had experienced the actions of the surface dwellers when he had been taken captive and experimented on by the one known as Lex Luthor. He had wanted to wage war there and then to avenge his suffering, but in that same instant, he too knew that not all of the surface dwellers were enemies of his. Superman and his friend Lois Lane had helped to free him, and they were those who talked him down in order to stop the war with the surface world. They were among the few people who he would listen to, and thus he was now torn between his desire to stop the surface dwellers with any means deemed necessary or to find a more peaceful solution that did not result in him willingly leading his people into war that would result in the loss of lives. That was why he was not the least bit pleased by the way Brack was speaking to him. However, Orm came in and spoke to Brack. That is enough, General, your king has spoken. Brack looked at Orm and nodded. Of course, my lord Orm, I apologize. Aquaman already knew that this was not going to be the last time that he would have this discussion with Brack, but he had to consider many things. Even more so when he looked at the direction of his wife Mara and their child and heard his son cry a bit, along with Mara working to calm their child. I will take your words under advisement, General Brack. There is much for me to consider and to also make sure that this is done with everything considered. Later, Aquaman walked into the private quarters and headed for the crib where his son and heir to the throne happened to be resting while Mara kept him company. When he held his hand before his son, the young babe held his fingers and squeezed. Arthur smiled at that and was more than willing to let his son grip his hand. He has a strong grip indeed. Mara nodded with motherly affection and pride. He takes after his father. He smiled at that, but his smile was not going to last as he thought about all that has happened. His change of demeanor did not escape his wife, and Mara soon spoke to him as the blonde leader of the nation of Atlantis moved to the balcony of the city and looked it over. The city of Atlantis was nothing like that of the old Greek style that it had descended from in the books, due to them having to adapt into their new world and develop not merely magic but technology, even though there were few forms of magic. His people were able to live in peace and thus were able to prosper for many centuries prior to the rise of the surface dwellers in their own over the same time frame. Arthur, something bothers you deeply. Please tell me what it is. Arthur looked at his beloved wife and then into the city as well as to their son who was now sleeping in the crib. Am I doing the right thing, Mara? I know that what Brack said is true, and had he suggested it years ago I would have given him my consent. The surface dwellers have caused more than enough damage to our world, and I have known firsthand their callousness and disregard for the lives of others. Yet I have also met those among them who have shown to me that they are not barbarians and can be trusted. You speak of Superman and his friend Lois Lane. Yes, and if I do go to war with the surface world, he and I will be enemies, and can I truly agree to starting a war that will drag our people into God's knows how long a conflict? Am I strong enough to take such a course of action that will have my hands stained by so much blood? Mara understood where Arthur was going with this and held his hands in her own as she spoke. Your hands are strong enough to defend our people and our home, and I gladly entrust my life and my future in them. That made Aquaman smile and he began to think back on the suggestion made by Superman, and after a few more minutes, he made a decision and then proceeded to tell his wife. At the sight of the defiant Atlantean patrols were moving around the downed U.S. Navy submarine as per the orders of their king to make sure the sub stayed where it was. That would have been proof enough to most people that Aquaman was serious in keeping his word. However, Jon Stewart was anything but most people as he began to sneak in quietly and patiently, avoiding the patrols and using his training both as a Marine and a Green Lantern to get into the sub. One would think that a man who was covered in a glowing green silhouette of energy could be seen, but the patrols were not focusing on him. Jon took that into account and quickly headed to where the missile bay was, showing that even though he was a Marine and not a guy who usually worked on subs, he knew enough to know where to go. He scanned the area with the ring and sure enough he now had a greater reason to distrust Aquaman. The nuclear material used on the missiles was no longer there. Back on the surface. The people on the beach were currently enjoying some regular time in the sun and also with families and loved ones. Beach sports and the like to make sure that they were all able to be entertained. However, all that took a back seat when some of the swimmers began to move away from the water and move back to shore. Normally that would have meant something bad, like sharks or whatnot, but instead a tall man came out from the water without any form of breathing apparatus or diving suit. The beach goers just watched as the man moved through the beach and soon headed into the city. As soon as he got there, he moved through without caring much for who was looking. Aquaman had come to the city and already he was not the least bit happy. No doubt not liking the smell of the air which had smoke and smog in it, and also the stench of garbage that he could smell easily enough as he moved forward ignoring the stares directed at him. There was also the fact that apparently he was lost, he needed directions. As he crossed the street, cars quickly stopped to avoid running him over. One driver however made the mistake of shouting at the annoyed Atlantean king. "Hey you idiot! Get the hell of the road!" And what was Aquaman's reaction to that rather unflattering remark? Closed fist on the hood of the car that literally caved it in and made the car's rear move forward, showing that he was not someone one shouted at unless one had a less than stellar regard for one's own health. That shut said driver up pretty darn quick and brought a nearby traffic cop, who had to be given credit for doing his job even though the man he faced was that strong. "Hey, what on earth are you doing?" Aquaman looked at him sternly and apparently learned enough to know that the man was a man of authority due to the badge. He then proceeded to get the information he sought, his way. Where is the World Assembly? Back at the watchtower. The very second Lantern came back to the watchtower, he was irate and revealed that he had gone back to check for himself the status of the nukes. The missiles were there to be sure, but the nuclear material that was the main and the most dangerous component of the whole package was no longer there. Diana asked him if he truly suspected that Aquaman had done the theft, to which he replied sarcastically if there were any other Atlanteans they knew of. And naturally he stated they should go to Atlantis and get some answers, normally a good idea had Superman not shot that down. If you want to have a word with him back at Atlantis, John, you can forget about it. What? Superman parted from the screen to show the World Assembly which was in session right now, and guess who was there? Because he's already here, and from the looks of things, it's not going well. In the World Assembly building. The people in the assembly were busy trying to make sense of what was happening and where they were working. The day had been focused on dealing with the recent loss of said submarine and now they find the one responsible of said loss of sub in front of them. Aquaman was naturally making his move and his intentions clear to everyone in sight range and earshot as well. His demands in his mind were fair and reasonable. But to the others, not so much. Many of the people in the World Assembly made their own disgust with the demands leveled to them by Aquaman very clear as one man, who no doubt represented the French government spoke. You and your people have the audacity to sink a nuclear sub and then barge in here to make demands for peace like this. Who do you think you are? Aquaman replied in the same serious and calm tone as before. I am the sworn in and sovereign ruler of the Kingdom of Atlantis. A country that is not recognized and as such has no right to make demands. Aquaman glared at each member of the assembly, making sure to focus first on the French representative as he replied. These are the final terms of peace between your nations and mine, discard and ignore them at your own risk. The speaker then replied as he tried desperately to keep things in the hall in order, the last thing he wanted was a riot in the hall itself. But those demands of yours are outrageous and impractical. What you are proposing seriously undermines not only the security and defense of our respective nations, but our economic security as well. Aquaman looked at the man and replied. Those are your concerns and problems, they are not mine. That did it as the whole assembly rioted and the leaders and officials were all standing up and were hurling threats and insults at Aquaman. And while he remained calm, he could not help but feel some level of disappointment. He had arrived to air his grievances and set his terms as Superman suggested, and now it seemed that he had wasted his time. Aquaman. The leaders turned and so did the Atlantean as Superman came along with Jon Stewart, Jean, Naruto, Corey, and Diana herself. As Superman landed in front of Aquaman, the Atlantean king spoke bitterly to the Kryptonian. I came here and offered them a chance for peace between their nations and mine, and this is how they respond. This was a waste of my time. Superman replied to that, hoping to try and salvage this situation before it turned ugly. Please try to be patient about this, things like this takes time. I have wasted too much time already. As Aquaman shoved aside both Diana and Corian in not a gentle fashion when they were in his way, the blonde Hokage clenched his jaw behind his mask at the action done by the royal who was now leaving the premises with a serious chip on his shoulder. The guy was a real hard case and he was resisting the urge to do something about it since he could understand to some extent where he was coming from. He had a similar situation with B's brother A, the previous Raikage when the Fourth Shinobi War ended, so he was not all the unfamiliar with the blonde Atlantean's antics. That hardly meant he liked it one bit though. The guy's about as diplomatic as a canaille up the nose. And it was fairly obvious that the same sentiment was with the rest of the team as well. John himself summed it up easily while he helped steady Diana while Superman did the same for Corey. A real Prince Charming this guy. Naruto nodded as he and the others decided to move out and try to convince Aquaman to at least try again and find a compromise. They knew that unless he found a way to work with the people, it was not going to end well. However, as the man came out of the building, he was quickly beset by the media who asked him all manner of questions. And a fair number of said questions were not all that flattering either. He was more than willing to ignore it and also the calls of the League to slow down and try to take the diplomatic route again. That was soon changed, however, when he was suddenly attacked by what appeared to be a missile. It missed most of the bystanders nearby as well as the media who had been following the Atlantean, but it nearly clipped him. However, before another attack could be made on the obviously injured Atlantean, the League stepped in. Naruto reached out with his senjutsu senses to track the attacker and pin him down, and he managed to sense a faint signature fleeing the scene, but right now getting Aquaman to medical treatment was high priority. Thus he had to cut any attempt to chase down the man. Besides seeing that Batman was up to something, he decided to let the Dark Knight make his own move. In Atlantis. The news of the attack on Aquaman had spread quickly as they had, despite their less than stellar liking for the surface dwellers, they found it prudent to monitor them. That naturally meant that they were also tuned into the news, and the fact that their king had been attacked had been really alarming. In the command center of the Atlantean military, junior officers were still trying to figure out what the next move was while the senior ones were now on the move to try and work on dealing with the news. However, before they could make plans, someone else got into the act and carrying the trident that symbolized the kingship of Atlantis, and the person in question is none other than Orm. We cannot spend what time we have left in mourning, we will make the surface dwellers pay for their crimes. Muster our forces. While some of the younger officers were smiling at the chance to avenge their fallen king under Orm, the more senior ones nearby spoke. Lord Orm, even if you are indeed the brother of our king, you do not have yet the authority to command the military to rise up in arms. We have not yet confirmed the status of the king, and the next in line is your nephew due to the rules of succession. Who is yet a baby general. I am acting as regent until this crisis is dealt with, as he cannot rule in his current age. Until we make the surface dwellers pay for the attack on our king, I will lead our people in this dark time. Any other discussion was cut short when Mera came to the room. The military saw the distraught look on their queen's once calm face and decided that it was best that they wait for a better time than to discuss their next plan or what the current state of the king was. Orm, is it true? Was Arthur attacked? I am afraid so, Mera. The news is grim. Mera was shocked, but she was not breaking down at that exact moment since she was aware of her husband's resiliency and strength. We must find out if Arthur is all right, Orm. We have to know if he is all right. Orm gave a sad look and replied. I wish that it can be done, Mera, but Arthur's been taken by the surface dwellers to one of their facilities. They say that he is being taken for medical treatment, but I have not forgotten the fact that Arthur had been taken in the same pretense as before, but while he escaped that one, I am afraid that we may very well be too late. No, we cannot give up like this, Orm. No, we won't, Mera. I will need to work on our response to this mess. Please, Mera, let me do what I can for our people here in this dark time. Mera left with her thoughts in a mess, all focused on the state of her husband. She wanted to feel being in his arms again and to be assured by his presence and his voice that all would be all right. But she knew that she had to deal with their son and keep him safe. Thus she headed off to see to her son, unaware that as she left a smile was appearing on Orm's face. In the hospital. Aquaman's situation was anything but ideal in his view as Naruto and the others watched for him to recover. The doctors in this place had little to no idea on how to treat him since his skin was as tough as a rhino's as needles were broken a number of times. It was all bad until Batman came in and began to work with the doctors to house Aquaman into a specialized tank that used seawater that was conditioned to his situation. Thus they had to be nearby to observe his recovery progress, which seemed to be going rather well, proving that Batman's calculations and recommendations were spot on. Well, at least he's not going to die. True enough, Naruto, but I doubt that once he wakes up, we're going to be any better off. And sure enough, the very second that the doctors assured them that Aquaman was going to be alright, Lantern made his move and proved he was as diplomatic as Aquaman was. Needless to say, it did not end well. Finally, Naruto had run out of some of his patience and decided to act now. And besides, while the two were arguing away at one another, he decided to scan Aquaman, and what he had seen was enough to convince him to get serious with this whole thing. Will the two of you shut it? Naruto has enough of the arguments between Stuart and Aquaman. They were not going to resolve the issue of how to deal with Aquaman's attempted killer and what happened to the nuclear material if these two were going to argue like mad over the whole thing. The two looked at him and Naruto glared back with his mask off and spoke to Stuart while using his senjutsu and Kurama's chakra. Listen here, Lantern, I took the liberty of scanning Aquaman's emotions and he was not lying in the least that he had given those strict orders to have that sub secured and not to be tampered with. And he has no idea who did take them, so that means that we have a major problem on our hands, since that means someone countered his orders or outright ignored them. I am already old enough to know when someone is lying, and Aquaman over here is not lying about anything. Didn't they teach you to keep a cool head and try to find all the answers before doing the good cop bad cop routine? John stared back at Naruto but agreed that the blonde did have something going for him. But that did not mean he was going to cool off just yet. The nuclear material was still a major issue in his mind, and unless they dealt with it now and got answers, this was not going to end well. Still, what he blonde mentioned got his attention as well. Naruto then turned to Aquaman and replied. You are not acting like a real king right now. What? You heard me, a king is supposed to keep a cool head and try to find all the possible angles and solutions to a problem, and acting like you are right now only adds more fuel to the fire. You said you want to avoid war for your people. Then stop acting like that and listen to others for a change. You are not doing your people and yourself any favors by what you've just done in that meeting earlier. You're a king, and that means being a diplomat when peace is what you have in mind, but what I saw in there made me shake my head in consternation, since you acted like a war hawk than a negotiator. I know you are not lying about what you told Lantern, but acting like this only going to make you look all the more guilty. Aquaman looked at the youth, though he had long since suspected that his supposedly youthful appearance was misleading. And that action was enough to prove him right, and somehow his words had a ring of truth in them, so he sighed a bit and decided to rein in his impatience and anger for now. All right, I'll listen. Naruto sighed in relief and began to run through what they know thus far. That assassin who came after you, I sincerely doubt that it was a random thing. How did he know you were here, what you were going to do, and the weapon he used tells me that he had a lot of data on you. You never told anyone about your little trip up here, since from what I know of you thus far, you and your kin don't like being on the surface world as you call it up here. No, I only spoke to my wife about it. Naruto nodded and replied. That rules out the idea of our assassin being hired by people here, since no one knew about this with the marked exception of us. That only means someone in your land told him about your plan. Aquaman's eyes widened at the implications of the Hokage's statement. That also got the attention of the League, Stuart most of all, since he could easily see just what Naruto was getting at. Are you implying that one of my own people hired that assassin to kill you and as a traitor? Yeah, I am. That's preposterous. All of them are aware that what you are suggesting is that of treason, and in Atlantis there are high punishments for treason. Naruto shook his head at that, and he had good reason to do so. He had his fair share of experiences with the situation Aquaman was in. His wife Koyuki was one such example, and of course Hikaru and his father were another, and of course, reading history here in this reality told him all he needed to know. You might think it's preposterous, but I've had enough experience to know that it can be a very glaring possibility. Think about it carefully. If this was an attack by someone of the surface world, how could they have gotten their hands on an assassin on such short notice? Why the heck would he use that kind of a weapon to kill you? And how did they even know where you were going when you only spoke to your wife and we were in our little base and never told anyone else? Somebody had to have hired that assassin only when your plans were revealed to them, and the only way that happened is if they were eavesdropping on the conversation. And let's not forget, there are always dissidents in any nation. Yours is no different, since I can suspect that some of your own people don't exactly get along with you. Aquaman frowned at that, as despite his desire to defend his people's honor and reputation, the masked fighter did raise a valid point. His thoughts went to Brack and his recent speech against launching an attack on the people of the surface, even coming to the point of openly defying him in front of his wife and brother. And he also kept in mind that if that was the case, then there would be others too. But he was not going to accept that right away until he saw it for himself. You cannot expect me to just agree with you on this, even if your argument does possess merit. I need more proof in order to accept that what you say is the truth. Naruto shrugged and replied. Hey, Like I said, it's one possible theory on how you nearly got killed, it's up to you if you accept it or not. There's bound to be others to be sure, but you'll never know which one's the truth and which one's the dud. And there is an old saying. Sometimes the worst enemies to a nation are not from outside, but within. Batman then spoke. We'll work out those details later. I managed to pull some data on who your attacker was. The man's name is Deadshot, a highly skilled mercenary marksman, which can explain why he nearly took you down even if he was using something not normally used by assassins. And knowing him, the news of you being alive is not going to sit well with him. He will try again both to finish the contract and protect his reputation. Aquaman spoke next. Very well, what exactly do you suggest? Superman replied to that. If there's one thing high-paid assassins love more than money, it's their reputation, like Batman said. That's how they get hired. The fact you are still alive since we did speak about you being confined here means that he will try again. We can however leak that while we have saved your life we have to get you to a more secure location as well as a facility with better equipment. He has no idea you already recovered and we made sure that only that last rumor left the hospital. So, we lure him here instead of having to chase him since we'll be spared having to search the entire city the normal way. Naruto grinned at that and replied. Well now, deception and deceit from you of all people, Superman. Looks like you're not the big blue Boy Scout you show yourself to be. Superman shrugged and smirked just a little. I have my moments, and I never did earn a merit badge myself anyhow. At any rate, if we do that, we can lure him out into the open and capture him for interrogation. And what am I to do? Stay here. Jean's a shapeshifter, so you can guess who we are really transporting. Naruto smiled yet again. It seemed that if it was the only option, Superman can be just as devious and downright underhanded when it had to be done. Though that was only to fool people, he was still a straight-up moral guy and Naruto was thankful for that. He was not too keen on the idea of a morally bankrupt Superman being head of this team anyways. That however apparently did not sit all too well with Aquaman. I am to hide like a coward while this craven assassin lives. Naruto sighed. Trust the guy to spoil the fun. You won't help your people much if you are a corpse, you know. That along with a bit more discussion finally convinced Aquaman to sit tight and let the League deal with this. Naturally though they left someone nearby to inform him and make sure he could wait for word of the assassin being secured. Naturally being that he still did not trust the Atlantean king all that much, Stewart volunteered to keep an eye on him. Naruto groaned a bit mentally at that and hoped that they caught this guy before the two of them butted heads again. This is like putting Shukaku and Kurama in the same room. Kurama and the portion of Shukaku in Naruto replied in unison. We heard that. Later. The League quickly moved about as the news crews around the hospital began to report that they were going to move Aquaman to a more dedicated marine medical care and observation station. This was all a trap, of course, as they were moving out quickly to wait for the assassin to make his move. The only one of the team who was not with them was Green Lantern, as he was watching over Aquaman as they had moved him quietly to another room to avoid word coming out that the Atlantean was alive and well. All they allowed to come out apart from moving him was that Aquaman was still alive and was struggling to recover. They quickly got into position and waited for the right moment to occur as Aquaman came out from the hospital in a gurney. They will not have to wait long as the assassin came out from a nearby sewer and quickly moved to attack, this time carrying a much larger rocket launcher. He got into position and aimed his weapon, intent on finishing his mission and not care about who got caught in the hit. Unfortunately for him, that was when Diana spotted him and told the others. There he is. Batman nodded as he looked with his binoculars. We see him. Before they could respond, Deadshot fired the missile, but there was someone on the scene. The Hokage then infused some of his naturally born wind chakra into his now fully extended demon windmill shuriken and he quickly fired it away. Just as the rocket came out from the launcher, the assassin had no time to react as the missile was cut in half a considerable distance the intended target and exploded. That had caught the people nearby off guard, and that was when the League was on the move. The assassin however had to push even more as the blonde ninja was firing out several smaller shuriken and some spare kunai while the others followed in an effort to slow him down but not inflict fatal injury, as he was needed alive for questioning after he recovered the much larger shuriken. The Hokage stopped firing his weapons and then used his chakra chains to recover them. Once he was assured that all of the weapons were recovered, he then quickly moved down and landed on the ground with no problem and soon began to run while using his tree walking jutsu to allow him to run on the sides of the buildings to catch up with the others, while using his senjutsu to try and track the man, even with the interference around him. One thing was sure in his mind though, this guy was not going to be easily caught. Sure enough, the man did. As he entered the sewer and sealed the cover, Superman arrived and tried to follow him. He reached to remove the cover, but got hit by an unexpected amount of high voltage. Superman screamed at the unexpected surprise and was sent back smoking and unconscious. The man moved down and revealed that he had rigged a trap just in case he was being followed. As soon as he got down, he removed his clothes and was in his suit, revealing himself to be truly Deadshot. The mercenary assassin cursed what happened and he knew that he had to cut the mission short. After all, what was the point of taking a contract if you die not doing it? Besides, he had a feeling that as long as he remained out of league reach he could find the man he was sent to kill later. Batman and Jean arrived after the disguised Martian helped the people and removed his disguise as Aquaman. Batman checked on Superman while Jean went down to the sewers by being intangible. Deadshot moved past him as he quickly contacted Diana and Corey. Diana, Corey, be prepared, he is heading in your direction. Diana and Corey nodded as the two of them quickly moved off the building they were on and both women quickly struck the street sending out a shockwave that caused the road to cave down, forcing the assassin to the direction they both wanted. Neither super-powered women wasted no time and ripped out the grid and moved down into the sewer, and the very second they did so the two of them were before the assassin. The man turned his right to stop as Diana spoke, though the man's use of low-level light only revealed her outline and that of Corey as Diana spoke. End of the line. The man replied calmly at that. Sorry, I'll take a detour. Wonder Woman had no choice but to shield herself when the man fired a grenade into the roof and buried her in rubble as he sped away. Diana and Corey moved the rubble away from them and once their view was clear they tried to look for the man but it was clear that he got away from them. She however kept her cool and reported to the others. He managed to get away from me and Corey but he's moving to the other tunnel to the right. Lantern looked at Aquaman carefully as he waited to get word from the others that the assassin was taken down and secured. Aquaman had indeed asked him of news, to which he responded that nothing was happening yet and he had to wait. However, that chance never came as Aquaman turned around and quickly slugged the Green Lantern in the face to knock him unconscious. Aquaman looked at John Stewart as the former Marine was on the ground still alive and replied. You presume too much. And with that, he left. Time to him was too short in supply for him to wait. Batman was not far behind as he quickly used his grappling gun to move out of the way as he placed traps on the path Deadshot was taking. The traps sent the motorcycle he was on crashing into the ground and Batman spoke to him seriously as Deadshot was not the kind of person to go down without a fight. Don't move. Deadshot however ignored that as he tossed some smoke grenades at Batman and escaped, using the scanners in his targeting system to move through the tunnels. Once he was clear and a fair distance from Batman, he climbed upwards to the sewer cover, right above his van. As soon as he arrived and got into the van he went for the driver's seat, but not before checking his van's stock of ordnance from guns, sniper rifles, swords, daggers, explosives and the like. Seeing none missing he wasted no time in gunning the engine and make his escape. But as he did so, he was spotted by Superman and was soon being chased by the Man of Steel. He focused so much on evading Superman that he failed to take into account that Superman was not the only League member tracking him. Naruto was there ahead of the van and waited patiently with his now wind chakra infused kunai at the ready and as soon as Superman burned the rear tire on the right side, he fired the kunai, one into the van's engine block, and two into the front tires. The wind-enhanced blades had no trouble cutting through the metal and soon burying themselves deep in the vehicle. This stopped the vehicle and sent it crashing hard though Deadshot was alive but not able to go anywhere as Superman came and extracted him from the vehicle. The mercenary was more than willing to talk now as he knew that escape was impossible. Okay, I give up. Superman wasted little time as he knew that they had to hurry since he knew that the longer this went on, the higher the chance Aquaman would pack up and leave and make the situation worse. You were trying to kill Aquaman, why? Deadshot decided to take the more sarcastic route in this matter as the others arrived though John was a bit late. Oh, that's a good question there. Why would a hired gun try to kill someone? Simple, I was paid to do it. Diana and Corey landed on either side of one another as the raven-haired woman and the red-haired alien woman were ready to find out what was going on as Batman, Jean, and Naruto. Diana was the one to speak first and looked at the captured mercenary Deadshot. Then who gave you that order? Yes, I would like to know who ordered you to attack Aquaman as well. The mercenary looked at both the Amazon princess and the former Tamarinine princess and had to admire the beauty both of them had. He was well aware that they could not harm him since doing so would make him clam up and not give them what they wanted. So in the meantime he was going to have some fun at their expense, or rather at the expense of the two beautiful women who were there. Sorry ladies, but it would be a blow to my professional reputation if I talk. However, if you both make worth my time, I might change my mind. Diana frowned darkly at the implications of that statement and amazingly enough, so did Corey as she frowned instead of having her usual smile on her face. The Amazon princess had a very accurate idea on what was cooking in the man's head and the same could be said of Corey. She could sense the malevolent and perverse emotions being directed at her and Diana and it did not sit well with her one bit. However, before either of them could react, Naruto was the one to make the move himself. The blonde Hokage did not need to have his wife Hinata's Byakugan to know the perverted smirk in the face of Deadshot when he looked at both Corey and Diana. It angered him that this merc thought that he was going to be snide about this and act like this was fun. His killing intent began to filter out of him once more, but he decided to direct it in a more straightforward approach. He walked up to Superman and replied in a very neutral tone. Let me see if I can convince him to talk. Superman was quick to see the body language and could tell that Naruto was not happy with Deadshot's comments. Neither was he, but he recalled the amount of killing intent the blonde had revealed when he got enraged at Stuart from before. He worried about that but decided to let Naruto have a go at it. The merc looked at Naruto and snorted. So the ninja wants a crack at making me talk. What exactly are you going to do to me? Naruto then spoke in an undeniably evil but joyful tone. Funny you should ask. Before Deadshot could respond, Naruto grabbed a long senbon out from his pouch and then jammed it into Deadshot's leg with blinding speed. The merc could only scream in pain as the long needle punched easily through his uniform, the armor, then the flesh, and the tip soon buried itself into the bone. The tip actually was coated in a thin amount of wind chakra to enhance the cutting or rather piercing effect of the weapon. But it was soon followed by another senbon piercing his other leg, which sent him down to his knees in pain as the other needle was now buried into the bone. Ah! Deadshot looked up at the Hokage in shock and shouted at him. What the fuck? Naruto, however, replied with a hard slap into the face that sent Deadshot to land on the ground with the sound of what was cracked teeth, as Naruto then made him move back to his knees as he spoke in a cold, merciless tone. Watch your language, merc. You should consider yourself lucky I didn't drive those senbon in far more vital areas. Now, do I have your attention? Deadshot swore and tried to attack Naruto, only for Naruto to suddenly grab one senbon, namely the one buried in the right thigh of the merc, and he then channeled lightning chakra into the needle. The needle lit up briefly and crackled as lightning danced over the metal, and soon Deadshot was screaming in pain as he felt he was being electrocuted. Just as briefly as the pain hit him in the face, the blonde cut the flow of lightning chakra to the needle, and in turn into Deadshot. Let me repeat that. Do I have your attention? Yeah. You sick mo. Finish that last sentence, Deadshot, and I will fire enough lightning into your nerve system and your heart in particular to give you a heart attack. Or I could fire enough to actually boil all the liquid in your body to the point you'll know what it's like to be a turkey in a microwave. So, one more time before I decide to fry you, do I have your attention? Yeah, you do. Stop it already. Naruto snorted and replied. Not until you listen to what I have to say, merc. First, you will apologize to both Wonder Woman and Starfire. And second, you are going to tell us who hired you to kill Aquaman. What? Naruto growled at that and replied. Don't pretend you did not hear me, fool. You will apologize to Wonder Woman and Starfire, or else I am going to make you feel pain like you wouldn't believe. Take this as a warning. I happen to have a very high level of respect for both Wonder Woman and Starfire. Both are trusted allies of mine, and I consider them to be important to me enough that I will gladly fight to the death to make sure no one harms them. That includes you, merc trash. If you had cooperated, you would not be in this situation, so where is the apology? Deadshot was not going to go down quietly though and shouted. Go fuck yourself, you freak. And the same goes for your bitch friends too. Naruto growled at that and then grabbed the other senbon and then pumped a larger dosage of lightning chakra into Deadshot than before. Not enough to kill to be sure, but to hurt the man like there was no tomorrow. The man screamed and writhed in pain as arcs of lightning surrounded him and came from the senbon. His pain only grew as the energy flowed through his bones as well, which really hurt like crazy. This lasted for only 4 seconds before Naruto powered down, but Deadshot was groaning and twitching in pain. Naruto waited a bit until Deadshot was coherent and replied. Let's try that again, since I am going to pretend I did not hear you call my friends that. Apologize to them. Screw you. Bad choice of words, let's up the amps then. Soon Deadshot was writhing in agony as lightning coursed through him, only this time the arcs were larger and more potent as he wailed desperately in pain. Naruto did not reach lethal point yet, but he was tempted to do so after the insults. He soon stopped, and this time Deadshot was smoking a bit, gasping for air and obviously twitching harder than ever before. Naruto stopped the flow and spoke once more. I hope you can smell yourself, Deadshot, cause right now you smell like fried chicken, so unless you want to be roasted, you will apologize. Fuck you. Naruto sighed and replied. All right then, let's really amp it up. And sure enough, the merc was subjected to double the power as before, still in the non-lethal range, but definitely enough to cause serious damage to nerves and muscles as the merc twitched and shuddered as the pain increased for him. Soon Deadshot was really in pain and gasping from the effects as Naruto spoke once more once he stopped trying to literally light the man up. You think I am not going to go too far, Deadshot? Think again. If I have to fire enough lightning energy into you to literally light you up like a Christmas tree, I will. And if I have to go as far as to unleash enough lightning into you to actually let us see your skeleton, I will. I will do what I have to in order to prevent a war you started when you did that to Aquaman, as well as demand an apology for the bullshit you spewed at my friends. Now either you do as I said or. Deadshot couldn't take any more and shouted. All right, I'm sorry. That is not how you do it, merc. Do it again. What? Naruto made him look at Wonder Woman and then to Starfire, who were surprised at all this, and he then spoke. You will look each of them in the eye and you will say their names in perfect order and apologize for your words. You will mean every last word of it, because if you lie, and believe me I can sense when one is lying, I will really make you scream in pain. And you will show respect to women in the near future. And if you don't and I find out about it, well then, it's human Christmas tree time for you. Deadshot did not hesitate to do it as he looked first at Diana and apologized using her full name and then did the same to Cory. Once that was over and Naruto seemed satisfied with it, he spoke once more. All right, not so hard to say sorry now, is it, Merc? Now then, on to the second question, who hired you to kill Aquaman? I don't know who hired me, all I got was the fish guy's name and my payment. I never asked questions about the target and who's the one placing the hit. Batman soon stepped in, though he kept an eye on the actually century-old blonde ninja who still had his hands on the Senbon. The show that Naruto gave when he showed a more ruthless side to himself was new, but he ignored that, and he figured he could talk to the blonde later once Deadshot was done talking. That is not good enough, Deadshot. Naruto nodded a bit and replied. Pretty vague too, shall I? No more, damn it. Let me finish here. The only thing that was weird is how I was paid. Look, it's in the van. Superman took the cue and so did Batman as the pair headed to the mercenaries' truck and soon found a chest and broke it open. There they found coins, all made of solid gold and with markings. All of which were easily recognized by the Dark Knight. Spanish doubloons, all during the colonization period of Spain, each is worth at least $100,000 right now. Superman nodded in agreement and spoke as well. And all of them are in mint condition too. Money like this is not found anywhere and certainly not in amounts like this. Only place that this many could be found is from a sunken treasure ship. Jean then commented. Atlantis is the only place then, the amount here is impossible to gain from any vault or collection. Deadshot then spoke. There, you got your answers, now get this freak off of me. Naruto glared a bit behind his mask and merely reached to the side of Deadshot's neck and pressed, knocking the man out cold. As soon as Deadshot was out cold, Batman walked over to Naruto and spoke darkly. What the hell was that for? What, you mean the shock therapy Deadshot went through? We do not torture people. I know, but we're on the cusp of war here, Batman. There's no time for being nice about it, not with the lives of who knows how many people at stake. I never enjoy torture even if I seem good at it. It's messy, and sometimes the bad guys say anything for the pain to stop and that ruins any chance of getting good and trustworthy information. But if it's the only viable option that is available, then I'll take it and deal with the outcome later. Besides, Deadshot already knew we could not do anything physical to him to get the information, so he was playing hard to get. Not to mention acting like an ass and a pervert, wasting time and no doubt allowing his contractor back in Atlantis to do who knows what. And what I've seen in terms of the money, the guy who paid him is high up there in whatever hierarchy Atlantis has. Superman began to grasp this and nodded. I don't approve of it, Batman, and I hope that Hokage does not make a habit of it, but we have to take into account what we've learned. This much money means that whoever bankrolled Deadshot is indeed high up in Atlantis. Cory then replied. Perhaps he is a noble then. Diana agreed at that as well. I can agree for Starfire, since only high-ranking nobles could have access to such wealth in what I have learned in my studies about kingdoms that are like that of Atlantis in ancient times, but that means. Batman nodded reluctantly, though he still planned to make sure to have the Hokage reign in or remove the need for him to resort to these kinds of tactics. That the one who hired Deadshot is a member of Atlantean high society, or even one of the royal family if Aquaman is indeed king, which means that if he goes back, he is walking into a trap. Naruto groaned as he felt that this was way too familiar for his liking. Well then, we'd better go find old Royal Sourpuss and inform him about what we found, and stop him from doing something stupid. Good luck with that. The others turned to see none other than John flying back to them with him rubbing the back of his head. The impatient royal pain in the ass knocked me out and left already while you guys were chasing Deadshot. No doubt he's gone back to Atlantis right now. Naruto groaned and slapped his forehead in exasperation. Wonderful. Now he's walked right into a trap he doesn't even know about. The others also felt greatly worried by all this, and it was Diana who spoke out what she felt was most appropriate. Hera, help him. In Atlantis. Naruto and the others were right to be worried as Aquaman walked into Atlantis. The whole situation for him felt wrong. There was a lot of grieving and anger towards the surface dwellers, far more than even he had expected when they caught the submarine nearly 2 days ago. He also was surprised to learn that the Atlantean military was being given a full mobilization order to go to war with the surface dwellers. That really made him concerned, as he had left no such order to the generals when he left. What doubled his worries was the fact that some of the soldiers he met were stunned to see him alive. One of them even had the gall to demand him to halt and explain why he would dare take the countenance of the recently slain king. That surprised him immensely, and he demanded who had stated that he had been killed. The answer that it was Orm who had made that response made him quickly realize that something was horribly wrong, even more so when the words of the one in the lead called the Hokage came back to him. The words that implying that there was indeed a traitor in the ranks of his people and possibly the one who hired that assassin to kill him when he had gone to the surface. Can he be right? Can there really be a traitor in my kingdom? Is Orm a co-conspirator? Or is he the one who was the leader of this insurrection? No, I cannot make such a judgment until I know more. But as he got to the throne room, he listened into what seemed to be someone rousing others in a martial speech, and he recognized just how was speaking. The time has come, brothers. The time to finally bring the surface dwellers to justice for all of their crimes. We shall invade the surface and make them regret angering us, and soon they shall be our servants. The cheers coming from the throne room filled Arthur with absolute shock, and he decided to quit hiding and burst through the door. The cheers quickly died down as many people looked at his direction as he spoke. What is the meaning of this, Orm? Orm then spoke as Aquaman came closer. Brother, I was doing what I felt was right. I had thought that you were dead. He marched towards his brother, angered at the sight of his half-brother wielding the trident of Poseidon and wearing the crown as if both were his. The line of succession in Atlantis was clear to all, and, as he could now see that his brother had not even taken the time to learn his true condition and tell their people that he was not dead. As you can see, brother, I am not yet dead, and now I want answers. Answers to what, brother? You ask me of that. Why are you ordering the mobilization of the fleet and our soldiers? I am doing what I feel is right. This affront to our people by the surface dwellers must be avenged. And what better way to do it than by using our technology and manpower to end the threat forever of the surface dwellers who pollute our seas, and encroach our borders with impunity. Aquaman could not help but feel his anger and worry build, and he made that clear. I may have been injured in my time on the surface, brother, but I am not dead. I am still King Orm. I did not give any order to start a foolhardy war with the surface. I gave the both of you and Brack strict orders too. Orm glared at him and replied. You don't seem to get it, brother. I am now the one giving the others around here. Orm, you are forgetting that I am alive and I am still king. And as king the first am ordering you to stand down. Or else I shall mark you as a traitor. Orm glared and replied darkly at his half-brother. You say that I am the traitor. It is you who is the traitor here. You sold us out the surface dwellers when we could have easily overpowered them with our technology. We have the manpower and weaponry to end their blight once and for all, and all you have done is avoid it. You are a coward and a true traitor to the power of Atlantis, brother, and your wasteful and weak reign is at an end. That was more than enough to finally push Aquaman's buttons, as he could not stand hearing this from his own sibling of all people. Enough of this. Guards, arrest the traitor. Aquaman looked at the men who were there in the room alongside him, Orm and Brack. He then recognized them to be Brack's men. He hoped that even with his war-hawk-like nature, Brack and in turn his own men would still remember his and their sworn loyalty to his king, and that was him by right and choice by their father, and not some pretender even if it was Orm. But that proved to be a flaw. Orm spoke in an arrogant and utterly satisfied tone to the soldiers with him and Brack. You heard him. Arrest the traitor. Aquaman was shocked even more when, instead of arresting Orm as was ordered, the soldiers of Brack followed Orm instead. They aimed their weapons at him, and before he could react, the others nearby grabbed him and held him fast, rendering him unable to fight back without increased force. There and then he realized that he had indeed a traitor in his kingdom, and the traitor was not alone, nor was the traitor without power and resources. That one known as the Hokage was right. I have been betrayed, and by Orm and Brack as well. You traitor. Say what you want, brother, but your time as king has passed. Soon, I will accomplish what you have been too cowardly and cautious to do. To end all threats to Atlantis' greatness. And when I am rid of you and all of those who follow your weak rulership, everything that should have been mine will be mine. With that, Aquaman was forced away by Brack's men, and he could only watch in ever-increasing fury at his traitorous sibling who now had taken the throne. That fury was matched by the shock at the discovery of the fact that he had been fully blinded by his worries towards the surface world and the surface dwellers, that he had not watched out for the enemies who were around him already. He managed to free himself and fought off the people restraining him and tried to attack, but he was shocked by the trident, and before he fell to unconsciousness, he saw his brother smiling darkly at him before darkness claimed him. Orm smiled darkly as his brother was led away. He might be alive and his surface world hired assassin had failed him, but that could soon be remedied. Once his half-brother was gone, then he could finally begin his rule and bring not just Atlantis under his rule, but the surface world once it was purged of the surface dwellers. And soon all of the world shall be his to rule, as was his right as the true king of Atlantis, and any surviving surface dweller shall learn their place under his rule as slaves for the glory of Atlantis. And despite his actions, he had to thank his brother, for he had the means to do so, and now he had the materials so provided by his unwitting brother and the surface dwellers.